What's up? Ghost Fictions is here and we're back again. This is a story where Issei was deceived and became the White Dragon God Emperor. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 2. Loki Arc P1. Issei was walking towards the Occult Research Club after school for a meeting with the other kings before the trip to the underworld. His peerage was walking right beside him with a few bags that they would need when in the underworld. He sighed as he wondered the meeting was about, since from what he knew all they had to do was to get into the train and enter the underworld via the dimensional gap. So what was this meeting about? Motioning for the rest of his peerage to wait, he and Ain entered the main room of the Occult Research Club, where he found Rias, Akeno, Sona and Tsubaki already waiting. Entering, he nodded in greeting to the 4 people before sitting down himself. Alright then, what is this meeting about? I thought the only agenda was for us to go to the underworld for the vacations. Asked Issei. Well, that was true. Rias requested this last-minute meeting, saying she wanted to inform us of something. So what is it, Rias? Sona asked. I wanted to tell you both about the 5 new pawns that I have recruited for myself. Rias answered. How interesting. Who were they? Did you let them die before reincarnating them, or did you kill them and do it? Issei asked, intrigued before finishing the question with a mirthful voice. I assure you I did no such thing. I called them and then explained to them before adding them to my peerage. The ones I added were Murayama Shinji, Katis Kauji, Ken Hartley, Mitsuda Kato, Motohoma Shiro. Rias replied. So the bully, the perverts and the kendo duo? Not bad. Say, do they have any abilities unique to themselves alone? Asked Issei. Why do you want to know? Rias asked. A mere curiosity, they were friends after all. Issei answered with a dismissive wave of his hand. I see. Well, the kendo duo are the ancestors of the ancient Kanagi and Kaminari families and hence can summon the spirit swords of Inreha and Rikiri. The perverted duo have twice critical sacred gears. Well, Ken has the water dragon sword. Rias answered. How interesting. Well, I wish you and your peerage good luck. Now then, is that everything on the agenda? Issei asked. Yes, now we call our peerages in and we'll be going to the underworld train station, from where we will be taken to the Gremory estate. Sona answered. Nodding, Issei signaled Ain to get the others in action. That was copied by Rias and Sona, who signaled Akeno and Tsubaki. Soon all 3 peerages were in the room and Sona said. Alright then, before we leave, the peerages should introduce each other. It is customary for peerages to introduce each other. I shall go first. My name is Sona Citria, high-class devil. Tsubaki Shinra Sona Sama's queen. Momo Hanakai I am. Sona Sama's bishop. A white-haired 3rd-year said in a bubbly voice. Ryakusaka Sona Sama's bishop. A 3rd-year brunette said. Tomo Meguri I am Sona Sama's knight, an auburn-haired girl said. Tsubasa Yura Sona Sama's rook, a blue-haired girl said. Jinshiro Saji Sona Sama's pawn, nice to meet you, a blonde-haired boy said. Haruko Nomura I am Sona Sama's pawn. A 1st-year happily chirped. Very well then, I shall go next. Rias said. My name is Rias Gremory, high-class devil. Akeno Himiji Maria Sama's queen. Reina Rias Sama's bishop. GGG Gasper VV Vivaldi Rias Sama's bishop. Kibayudo Rias Sama's knight. Zenobia Quarta Rias Sama's knight. Kaneko Taujo Rias Sama's rook. Ken Hartley Rias pawn and the holder of the water dragon Mizuki. Murayama pawn. Katasa pawn. Matsud I am a pawn. Motohoma I am a pawn as well. The Gremory peerage announced. Though Issei did notice that Murayama and Katis were sadly looking at him. He however brushed it off and looked over to Ken. As he looked at the boy, Albion spoke inside his head and said. So that old coot got himself sealed, eh? Who old thought? You know that dragon Mizuki? Asked Issei. Yup, the old timer is a master with water. If that Ken kid masters his power completely, he should be able to turn into water itself. Albion answered. Interesting. What level is he on? Asked Issei. Ancient dragon, just behind the dragon kings and Vitra's level. Albion said as Issei nodded before saying. Well, that leaves me, I guess. My name is Issei Haidu to be Issei Lucifuge. I am a high-class devil. Ain Lucifuge, a high-class devil and Issei's queen. Not to mention my future wife. Issei grumbled loud enough only for Ain to hear, who blushed cutely. Ravel Phoenix Issei Sama's bishop. Siegfried Knight. Jean Knight. The Lucifuge peerage introduced themselves. It was then that Azazel entered the room and said. Ah, I see you are all here, good, that means we can leave. Yo sensei, will you be going with us? Asked Issei. Yup, Surzich has already arranged it. I even have a training program ready for everyone. It should be interesting. Azazel answered. I don't think you are going to share them with us, right? Asked Issei. Nope, you will just have to wait. Azazel replied with a smirk. Alright then, let's go. Rias announced with a clap of her hands as everyone soon entered a lift that took them into the underground train station. Scene break. We find the peerages sitting in 3 separate compartments on the train. Azazel was with a Lucifuge peerage since they were much more easygoing and fun to be around with. Azazel also noticed that Ain was practically glowing while Issei had a stupid grin plastered on his face. Being eons old, he immediately connected the dots and grinned perversely before saying, "I see you both finally graduated from being boy and girl to man and woman. I am so proud," he said before wiping an imaginary tear. Both Issei and Ain blushed while Ravel and Jean narrowed their eyes at the duo, all the while with Siegfried having a teasing grin on his face. "Can it sensei, we have already been teased enough as it is." "Oh, I don't think I will," Azazel said with a grin. However, he suddenly started sweating and was beginning to see visions of his death. Ain was looking at him with the sweetest of smiles. That smile alone was warning both Azazel and Siegfried to make a run for it if they wanted to survive. "Sensei, shut up before I castrate you and burn the thing that makes you a man." "Same for you, Sieg," she said with an equally sweet voice that matched her smile. Both of the men nodded quickly before quietening down. Ain smiled at satisfaction before leaning back into Issei's shoulders. Not to be outdone, Jean quickly moved to sit on Issei's other side as she too leaned on his shoulder. Issei smiled at the girls as he saw them glaring at each other before he leaned his head and kissed both of them on the forehead. He then lightly chided them and said, "No infighting." Both girls blushed cutely before nodding. "Lucky bastard." Azazel grumbled as the train suddenly stopped. "It seems that the Citri peerage is leaving their territory here?" asked Issei as he received a nod in answer. Soon the train resumed its movement and they were now moving towards the Gremory territory. Scene break. "You know, this is bigger than I expected," Issei muttered as he saw the gigantic Gremory mansion. Ain just giggled at the expressions shown by the rest of the peerage. The door opened and Grafia appeared wearing her trusty maid outfit. Looking at her, both Ain and Issei smiled before nodding their heads in greetings. Grafia gave a small smile before saying, "Welcome Lady Riaz and Lord Issei, Lord and Lady Gremory are expecting you," she said as she motioned them to follow her. As they were walking, a red-haired blur crashed into Riaz. The red-haired blur turned out to be an 8-year-old boy who shouted, "Riaz Onasama, it's so good to see you again." Riaz affectionately ruffled the boy's head and said, "You've grown so much, Milikas." Milikas then looked at Ain and rushed towards her before hugging her tightly and in a soft voice saying, "I am glad you are better now, Ain Onasama." Ain hugged the boy back and said, "I missed you too, Milikas. If you want to thank anyone for my recovery, you should thank your Issei Nai-sama over there." She finished as she pointed at Issei, who was currently looking at the scene in front of him with a small but happy smile. Milikas moved up to Issei and in a shy tone said, Thank you for helping Ain Onasama." Issei smiled before ruffling the boy's head and saying, "It was no problem, Mealy-kun, after all your Onasama is very important to me." The boy smiled before pulling on Issei's hand and saying, "Come on Nai-sama, I want to show you a few things." Issei gave in and let the boy pull him into the Gremory estate. Grafia smiled with a shake of her head while Ain giggled. Riaz looked at the scene with a little sadness. Soon, however, the whole group was seated on the dinner table having dinner with the head of the Gremory family. "I hope the journey over here wasn't hard?" Lord Gremory asked Issei. "Not at all, Lord Gremory, on the contrary, it was quite pleasant," Issei replied. "That's good. Well, after dinner please accompany me to my office, we have to discuss about the territory you will receive," Lord Gremory said. "Of course, Lord Gremory," Issei said with a nod. The manners that Ain had beaten into him were out on a full display. The rest of the dinner went on in relative silence, after which Issei was seen walking with Lord Gremory to his office. Once they entered the office, Lord Gremory summoned a map and said, "This is a map of the Gremory territory, the red ones are already taken. Apart from those, you can have any 2 territories from this map." Issei carefully inspected the available territories before choosing one with lush green forests, coupled with a beautiful lake and several different species of animals. The second one he chose was one that was completely rugged with mountains. Both were beautiful and scenic territories. Good choices, Issei, you did choose 2 of the most beautiful territories we possessed. Now I think you should go and rest," Lord Gremory said. "On the contrary, I think I will settle my business with Lady Phoenix, Lord Gremory," Issei said. "I see, well then I guess it's a temporary goodbye," Lord Gremory said as he raised his hand for a handshake, which Issei gratefully fully took and left the room. He went to the lounge where his peerage was at and said, "Alright guys, we are done here. Ravel, could you please make a magic circle to take us to the Phoenix territory? Apparently I need to settle a few issues on territory over there as well," Issei said. Ravel smiled before nodding. Soon a magic circle was up and the Haidu Lucifuge peerage found themselves outside the grand mansion of the Phoenix clan. Once there, Ravel entered and asked a maid to get a mother. Around 15 minutes later, Layla Phoenix appears and then after greeting everyone leads them into one of the sitting areas. They're just like in the Gremory estate. She pulls our map and Issei chooses one territory with a waterfall in it. After some small talk, Issei says, "We should get going then, Lady Phoenix. I will be leaving Ravel's training to you. Ravel, you can stay with your family. I am sure you have a lot to talk to them about. And excuse us, Lady Phoenix, but we need to leave. We have training from tomorrow onwards and hence need to rest. Issei said as he stood up. I see, well, I wish you good luck. And don't worry about Ravel, I will personally oversee her training. Layla said with a regal nod. The group then disappeared in a silver magic circle before appearing in the Lucifuge estate. Issei then turned to Siegfried and Jean and said. Choose any room you want and settle down, we will need all the rest we can get for training tomorrow. Both of them nodded before going to the rooms they liked. Issei on the other hand picked Ain up in a princess carry, causing the poor girl to weep. He then carried her to their room before lovingly laying her on the bed. He then clicked his fingers, changing their dresses into pajamas. He then laid next to her before wrapping a blanket around them. He then looked at her and found her blushing. He smiled and said. You are looking beautiful, Haim. Baka don't say things like that. Ain muttered as she averted her eyes from Issei. Issei smiled at her before kissing her forehead and saying. I only speak the truth, Haim. Besides, I can only wonder why people call the moon the prettiest thing there is. They obviously haven't seen Haim. Ain's blush just grew even more and she then hid her face in his chest, not wanting to get more embarrassed. Issei smiled before he tightly wrapped his arms around her before both of them fell asleep. Elsewhere. So when do we strike next? A figure asked in a dark room. The young devil meeting. It is the event in which that foolish father of mine will join those lowly beings. Another voice rasped out. Hey, that event will spark the real Ragnarok. Another voice giddily said. Since both of your all-fathers are joining the alliance, it will be up to you to ensure that they don't. The first voice said. Yeah, we will, but watch your words, devil. You may be a Mau, but you are no match for a god. The second voice rasped out before silence took over. Another elsewhere with Team Volley. So are these reports valid? Asked Volley. 100%. If we want to recruit Fenrir, our best opportunity will be to join forces with the White Dragon Emperor. Arthur stated. The red and white dragons versus two evil gods, huh? How exciting, I hope he has access to Juggernaut Drive. Otherwise it'll be a tough battle even if he was to aim for survival alone. Volley said. That's true. Though what will be our strategy? Asked Arthur. Me and Haidu will take on the bosses while his team and you guys will make sure that the other meager stooges don't get in our way. Volley said as his team nodded before all of them got up and returned to do the activities that they were indulging in. Training. So sensei, what have you got for us? Issei asked as he and his peerage stood out in one of the Lucifuge clan grounds, waiting for Azazel to announce their training programs for the month. Hi, let's get started. I have already explained the training programs for both the Grimory and Citri peerages. That was why I was late. So without further ado, let's begin. First one is you, Ain. Your training will be overseen directly by Graphia. She said you'll know where to find her. So get going. Azazel said, to which Ain nodded before she kissed Issei and disappeared in a silver Lucifuge magic circle. For both Jean and Siegfried, I have gotten you the Knights of Mau Asmodeus and Mau Beelzebub for the next month. Use this opportunity to learn from the best of the best in the underworld. Take these summoning papers and go to your senseis. Azazel said as he handed both Jean and Siegfried a few summoning papers. Both of them nodded before Siegfried fisted them to say, well, Jean kissed his cheek, after which they disappeared in their regular magic circles. Issei then turned to Azazel as he patiently waited for his senseis to show up. Alright then, Issei, you will have two senseis who will be training you 9 hours a day each. The first one should be coming here in 3, 2, 1. Azazel finished as gigantic purple humanoid dragon landed behind Azazel. This is Dragon King Tannen. He will be training you to further your draconic power, along with greater gear control. Azazel said. Suji. I get the Blaze Meteor Dragon as one of teachers. Awesome. Issei Gidley said. The second one will be. Azazel started but abruptly stopped when he pointed at a magic circle that appeared next to him. From that magic circle a smiling Surziches appeared, donned in a red tracksuit. Nice, and what are you doing here? Issei asked in a surprised tone of voice. Isn't it obvious I am going to be your second sensei? You definitely need someone to help you master your new power of destruction. Surziches said with a big grin. Hontoka. Issei asked with wide eyes as Surziches merely nodded in response. Suji. Say sensei, is there anyone who can help me with my Durandal? Issei asked. I tried asking Michiel for someone, but he told me that the church is incredibly busy because of the investigation of the internal affairs of the church. They want to oust people like Valfer Gallet, which is why they can't send anyone. I see. Issei said with a frown. Don't worry, kid. Me and Rodin were wielders of Durandal during our time. After your training in the day, we'll teach you how to fight during the night. Now get going. Issei said as he heard Nero's voice. You seriously will help me, senpai? Issei asked in an incredulous voice. Yeah, whatever, don't get too snippy. Now both of us will see you tonight. Goodbye. Nero said before cutting the link. Issei then smiled and said. Well Nison, Usun, Sensei, let's not worry about Durandal and start the other training. The other three nodded and the month of hell had officially begun. Time skipped 1 month. Issei was seen walking towards the Lucifuge mansion from the nearby mountains where he had been training. The training period had done him a world of good. His shirt was torn, revealing his lean and firmly built muscles. He had received a pawn piece from Ijuka that allowed him to use his queen form without any problem. Not to mention his time limit for the heavenly azure armor had increased from a measly 10 minutes to a strong 1 hour. His control and manipulation with the power of destruction had skyrocketed, and he could now use several spells that Surziches had personally taught, along with a lot of others that he had created on his own. His ice manipulation had grown stronger, and he, with the help of Albion, had managed to create 4 new spells. 2 of which were offensive, 1 defensive and 1 support. Type. His training with both Rodin and Nero had given him a much better control over Durandal, along with him mastering 8 new techniques and reaching level 3 of the total 6 known levels of Durandal's power. Overall, if he were to say for himself, the training month was a massive success. He was soon in the estate's main courtyard where he leaned against the wall and patiently began waiting for the others to show up. He soon felt 2 presences and smirked. After a few moments, both Siegfried and Jean appeared. Both had clothes that were ripped to places. Issei could immediately tell that they were much stronger than a month ago, as their auras were not only larger but also more controlled. Jean rushed and hugged Issei as soon as she saw him. The feeling of his tight muscles against her was blissful and made her blush a bit. Issei then lightly kissed her on the lips before ruffling her hair and saying, "How did your training go, Jean?" "It was great. I managed to improve the time limit in which I can use Gram, along with picking up several new techniques," Siegfried said with a grin. "I managed to create 2 subspecies balance breakers and improved the time span in which I can use them," Jean said as she puffed out her chest. Issei in response chuckled before softly pulling her into his chest and deeply kissing her. Jean blushed red when they broke apart and began twiddling her thumbs to hide her embarrassment. Smiling at the cute action, he pulled her into his chest so as to help her hide her blushing face. Soon footsteps were heard and Ain was seen stepping into the courtyard. As soon as Issei saw her, he gently let go of Jean, who smiled knowing he had paid her the correct amount of attention, before he disappeared in a burst of speed before reappearing in front of an unsuspecting Ain, before he lifted her up into the air and swung her around. Ain squeaked in surprise before Issei stopped and kissed her square on the lips as he held her soft form close to his body. After they broke apart, Issei put his head on hers and said, "I missed you." Ain smiled into the hug as she snuggled into Issei, fully enjoying the feeling of his well-made muscles. After a few moments, the duo broke the hug before all 4 of them entered the estate and started refreshing themselves. After half an hour, all of them were sitting together regaling their tales of their training. Ain was very impressed when she learned of the improvements made by both Siegfried and Jean before she started telling about her own results. "Well, the first week was spent mainly on refining my control over fire and mastering several old Lucifuge clan spells. The next 3 weeks were spent on mastering my secondary element. Everyone in the Lucifuge clan has 2. My secondary element was wind, and I managed to get down 2 of the 5 manipulation exercises down, along with mastering some old clan spells, while also creating several of them," Ain explained with a smile. "That's very nice. As your king, I am very proud of you, and as your friend I am glad that all of you have earned your new abilities," Issei replied with a smile. "So Issei, you know ours. What about your new abilities?" asked Siegfried. "Oh, increasing the time I can stay in my balance breaker state, improving my ice manipulation and new spells. Along with it, I got new and techniques with Durandal as well. Surziches also taught me some of the spells for my power of destruction. Before you ask, I sorta unlocked it when I became a high-class devil. So that's about it," Issei said before finishing in afterthought. "Wow, so does that mean you are literally a Baal?" Ain said with a sarcastic huff. "Don't be like that, you know I'd never accept any other surname except for Lucifuge," Issei said as he pulled her to his side. "I know I am a little upset that you didn't tell me about it," Ain said as she snuggled into his side, forgetting her temporary anger in favor of enjoying Issei's warmth. Jean pouted at that before moving to Issei's other side as she too began snuggling into him. Both of the girls glared at each other, which prompted Issei to wrap his hands around their heads as he pushed them to his chest before he said, "No infighting." Both girls meekly blushed before nodding into his chest. It was then that Siegfried spoke and said, "No, Issei, I think it's time for us to get the last member of our team back." "You are right. I guess I'll go get her now," Issei said as he lightly pushed Jean and Ain away before disappearing into a magic circle. "There he goes again. I swear he is the most unorthodox high-class devil in the underworld," Ain said with a tired sigh. "What do you mean, Ai-chan?" Jean asked, her previous animosity with the silver-haired beauty all but forgotten. "What Ain means is the way he acts. Normally a high-class devil won't bother going to get his or her peerage members. He does that because he sees his peerage not as his servants but as his family. He cares way too much. Siegfried said as he sipped his tea. Jean mouthed an O before the trio began making some small talk about random things. With Issei materializing in his territory at the Phoenix estate, he started walking towards the main compound. As he came across a clearing, he heard the sounds of training and followed it. Soon he saw Ruvel Phoenix practicing some magic spells as a few maids stood at his side. Yo Ruvel, it's been a while. Issei said as he walked over to the other devil. Issei, it's been ages since we last met. How have you been? Ruvel warmly greeted back. That it has. Well, I have been peachy, becoming high class and all. I see you have been training. Issei said. Yeah, I am among the candidates for the next promotions to the ultimate class and have been training very hard to increase my combat potential. Ruvel said. Nice. I can't wait until I am up at your level. Issei said with a grin. But you already beat me. I think that counts, you being on my level. Ruvel said in a confused tone of voice. I won because you underestimated me and 2 because I use my abilities exceptionally well. In raw power, experience and speed you are miles ahead of me. Issei said. Thanks for the compliment. Not that I mind you visiting your territory, but what are you doing here? Ruvel curiously asked. Oh, I was here to get Ravel. The month for training is up and it's time for the peerage to gather up. Issei said. Ah, I see. Ruvel said with an understanding nod before he motioned a maid to go get Ravel and her things. The maid nodded with a bow as she left, leaving behind Issei and Ruvel, who were engaging in some other small talk about the current happenings in the underworld. Ravel arrived a few minutes later, after which Issei bid Ruvel goodbye before he and Ravel disappeared in a magic circle. A few moments the duo arrived back into the living room where the others were waiting. Welcome back, Ravel-chan, how did your training go? Jean chirped. It went very well, Jean-sama, thank you for asking. Ravel happily replied. So Ravel-chan, what did you learn? Ain asked with a sweet smile. Well, I focused on improving my stamina and increasing my magic reserve. After that I had Ruvel Nai-sama teach me a few of his personal spells. And finally I started on fire manipulation and mastered the first level. Ravel proudly said. Well done. Siegfried simply said. Thank you, Sieg-sama. Ravel said with a small smile. Now then, with everything done and dusted, let's get some food before hitting the hay and reporting everything to Nai-san tomorrow. Issei said as he began leading everyone into the dining area. However, before they could eat, a loud flapping sound was heard, which was soon followed by a resounding thud and then silence. Issei stood up from his seat and said. Alright guys, I am going to see what happened. I will be back. The others nodded a little worriedly but relaxed when they saw Issei's reassuring smile. Issei then soon made his way out to the courtyard where the thud was heard from. Upon arriving there, he found a large dragon, 25-foot maroon-colored dragon, waiting for him patiently. Yo, who are you and what are you doing here? Asked Issei. Greetings, Hakuryaku-sama, my name is Bova the Destroyer. I am the youngest son of the Blaze Meteor Dragon and wish to join your peerage. The dragon called Bova said. That is a very interesting proposition. So tell me, Bova, why do you actually want to join my peerage and why not anyone else's? Asked Issei. Bova sighed sadly before he started speaking. I wish to make my father proud. Both of my older brothers, despite being much weaker than me, have in a way contributed to the Devil Society at large. I am not a researcher and more of a fighter, but due to my destructive tendencies, no high-class devil ever wanted me. My father doesn't say it, but I can see the disappointment his eyes hold whenever he sees me. So when I heard that the current White Dragon Emperor became not only a high-class devil, but also beat several ultimate class opponents, I knew that your peerage is the right one for. So I request I beg you, please add me into your peerage. Hey, don't be like that. I'll add you in my peerage, you'll be my trump card. Now lift up your head. You're Bova the Destroyer, the next in line to take over the reins as a Dragon King, don't sell yourself short. You're better than that. Issei said as he made Bova look up in shock. Do you really mean that? He asked in a hopeful voice. Of course I did. Now enough of this mushy stuff. Do you, Bova the Destroyer, wish to join my peerage and live for me, fight for me and serve me? Issei asked as he threw a rope piece over to Bova, who caught it as it began to light up. Hi, I, Bova the Destroyer, will fight, live and serve you. Bova answered as he placed the rope piece near his chest. Then be reborn as a devil of Lucifuge clan and help us in bringing back our former glory. Issei said as the rope piece first mutated into an even stronger piece before entering Bova's chest, who smiled when he felt the warm feeling in his chest, along with the increase in power. Now then, let's go and introduce you to your new teammates and family. Issei said as turned around to walk back into the mansion while motioning for Bova to follow him. Ritual, P1. And that is how Bova joined my peerage and will be the part of our family. Issei cheerfully said as he introduced Bova to the rest of his peerage. Bova was now nervously sitting on one of the couches. He was currently in his humanoid dragon form, which was just as tall as Issei. Having the strongest son of a dragon king in our team is very assuring, Siegfried said with a smirk. I know, right? Imagine my balance breaker and Bova-chan flying together wrecking havoc on other teams. Jean chirped. I agree, that sort of firepower is game-winning, Ravel said in a thoughtful tone as she took over the role of the strategist of the team. Fufufu, it seems we are definitely not lacking when it comes to raw firepower, Ain said with a chuckle. Bova blushed slightly at the praise of his teammates and nodded in thanks. It was then that Issei spoke up and said, great, now that everyone is done we can have our dinner, after which we hit the rack. We have to meet up with Mao-sama for further instructions. Everyone nodded at that and started having dinner. They mostly talked with Bova while eating, as they tried to make him feel more comfortable and at home, all the while learning more about him while getting to know him better. After an hour, when dinner was said, everyone stood up one by one before leaving for their rooms. Issei then turned to Bova and said, Bova, choose any room you want from the unused ones and rest in it today. If you don't want to stay indoors, there is a cave in the mountains nearby which should be ideal for you. I shall be at the cave then, Issei-sama. I will be at your beck and call, Bova said as he jumped out the window and flew away. Issei nodded at that before he turned to Ain and lifted her up in a princess carry. He then proceeded to kiss her square on the lips before carrying her into their room. While he didn't show it, Issei was incredibly excited. It was only a couple of days to the ritual, after which Ain would officially be his fiancée. He could hardly wait. Time skipped 2 days. Are you ready, Issei-kun, Ain-chan? Lady Phoenix asked as the young couple were about to enter the altar for the long-awaited trail. Hi, we are, Issei answered as he grabbed Ain's hand and squeezing it lightly. Very well then, I wish you the best of luck, Lady Phoenix said before Issei and Ain walked through the gates and into the altar. Greetings, are you here for the trial? Asked a voice from above them. Turning to look upwards, both looked up to see 5 flying figures who could be accurately described as Power Rangers. One was red, one green, one blue, a yellow and a pink. But we are, Ain responded in a regal voice. Very well then, we the Satan shall test you. You will have to go through 5 tests, one set by each of us Satans. Failure of a single test will result in the cancellation of the ritual. Are you sure you want to take the test? Satan Red asked. Yes, we will, though can I know your names? Asked Ain. Satan Red, Satan Blue, Satan Yellow, Satan Pink and Satan Green. We should warn you, all of us are Mao level fighters and won't be taken down easily, Satan Red stated. Seriously, Nai-sama, do you really expect anyone to fall for that pathetic disguise? Issei mentally thought with a little shake of his head. Ah, I see. Well, I am not worried about your power. My boyfriend here has already fought and beaten a cadre level fallen angel. I am sure he will more than a challenge for you, Ain replied in a confident tone that showed that she had no idea who the people behind the mask were. Issei stared at Ain with a disbelieving deadpan stare as he thought. Don't tell me she actually fell for that pathetic disguise. Very well then, let's begin, Satan Red said before clicking his fingers, after which a magic circle appeared on top of the young couple and teleported them away. The young couple appeared in a grey room that had a 3-seater table in the middle and a wooden directly opposite to where they were standing. A green magic circle appeared and from it Satan Green appeared and said, Greetings, my name is Satan Green and I shall be the one conducting this test. This is an oral test about the history of devils. Please take your seats. So it's Falbium-sama right of the bat. We will need to be careful, he is the leading war strategist for the devils after all. Issei thought before he looked at Ain and nodded before the two of them sat down and waited for the questioning to begin. Sitting down in front of them, Satan Green began questioning them. The first question is, who was the first devil ever? Lucifer, Issei answered as Falbium nodded. The second question, which was about the 72 devil pillars and their abilities, was answered together by both Issei and Ain. Issei was the one who named the houses in the correct order, after which Ain explained the special powers that each house held. The last question requires you to give me complete information on the evil P system. Please begin, Satan Green said. The evil pieces were created by Ajuka Beelzebub using the crystals available in the Agrees Island to help replenish the number of devils after the Great War, which had caused the death of countless devils. While many devils were able to adapt to the evil pieces, the old Satan faction rejected the usage of the evil pieces, believing them to be a disgrace to devils for reincarnating humans and other races into devils. The creation of the evil pieces eventually led to the creation of the rating game. Evil pieces are commonly given to pure-blooded high-class devils so that they can gather servants of their own. Reincarnated devils are also given the chance to receive evil pieces should they rise in rank and become a high-class or ultimate-class devil like Tannen and Rudiger Rosenkreutz. When a devil receives the right to obtain the evil pieces, they are required to go to the Satan's territory and touch a monument which functions as a replacement king piece to register themselves as king. If a king wishes to trade a piece with another king, a ritual must be performed. A trading purpose magic circle must be drawn. The kings stand at the side of the magic circle while their pieces stand in the center of it. The kings increase their auras while putting their hands forward and activate the written devil symbols to circulate. The auras of everyone around then begin to glow and synchronize, bypassing the magic circle. With that, the ritual will end and the trade has been complete in a simple manner. And that is the complete information on evil pieces. Issei finished before drawing in a deep breath. A perfect answer. You passed the first test, you may proceed to go to the next level. Satan Green said. Issei and Ain nodded in thanks before both of them stood up and walked through the wooden door towards the next room. Hi. It's your favorite Satan Pink here for the second test. Satan Pink said as she happily waved towards Issei and Ain. Damn, how can no one tell that it's Erat-an right there? Issei inwardly thought as he waves back before looking at Ain, who still looked lost. Seriously? How can she not see it? Issei thought, the disbelief evident in his eyes. Ice-chan, this test is for Ain-chan, so you will have to wait it out. Satan Pink said. Very well. What is the test, Satan Pink? Asked Ain as Issei backed away and leaned against the wall. However, his body was tense and he was ready to step in case the situation went out of hand. So what is my test, Satan Pink? Asked Ain. Your test is to put on this dress and then pose like a magical girl. Satan Red chirped as she threw over a magical girl dress over to Ain. Ain's confidence almost faltered and she blushed. Red and started sputtering. Yes, both of them had committed the deed, but she was still shy. And that dress was really embarrassing. Sensing her discomfort, Issei moved towards her and softly hugged her from behind. She worriedly turned to look at him, expecting him to look angry. Instead, she found him warmly smiling at her. He then softly said, "Yeah, I've got this, Ai-chan, I've got your back whatever you decide to do." Ain smiled back before she took a deep breath and pecking Issei on the lips. She then stepped forward and took the costume from Satan Pink and walked towards the changing room. The actual test was to see whether we stood by each other during times of difficulty and discomfort. Am I right? Issei asked as he looked towards Satan Pink. That it was. You are smarter than you look. Satan Pink commented. So I have heard. Issei replied before he blushes red as Ain walked out of the changing room. She was wearing a silver magical girl outfit that went very well with her long silver hair and displayed her curves in a very fine way. Ain spotted Issei's blush and smirked before walking towards him while swaying her hips seductively. Do you like what you see, Issei-kun? Ain seductively asked as she got right into Issei's face. This caused his blush to reach atomic levels as he started sputtering. Ain then softly kissed him on the lips before she turned to Satan Red and said, "Is that all for this test?" "Yes, it is. You passed this test, you may proceed towards level 3. Satan Pink said as she pointed towards the door behind her. Ain nodded before clicking her fingers, making a magic circle appear on top of her which passed through her, changing her outfit from the magic girl costume to her regular wear. She then grabbed Issei's hand before leaving him towards the door and towards the third level of a total 5 for their tests. The next room was once again empty, only this time it had a large dining table with food laden on it. A blue magic circle appeared in front of them and Satan Blue stepped out of it. He then looked at the couple in front of him and said, "Congratulations on passing the previous level and on reaching this one. This test will be there to test your mannerisms in a high-profile environment. Please sit down and have some lunch as the test continues. She'll definitely be able to recognize Ajukanai-sama." Issei thought before he expectantly looked towards Ain. To his utter shock, she still held the same face she had when she meets a new person. Unfucking believable. How is this possible? Albion, is she faking? She has to be faking, right? Issei thought out to his partner. She isn't faking, partner. Though you should pay attention, the test has already started. Albion said, making Issei focus back onto the test at hand. Both Issei and Ain nodded before moving towards the table. As they reached it, the mannerisms that Ain beat into Issei surfaced and he pulled a chair back for Ain to sit on. After that, he pulled out his own seat and slid into it from the right side. Both of them then proceeded to place a handkerchief on their laps before using the spoons to pour down some food for themselves. After the food was put in the plates in front of them, both Issei and Ain began eating it with the required mannerisms using a knife and a fork. They made sure to take care of small things like not leaning forward while eating, not putting their elbows on the table as they ate, and finally holding their glasses from the bottom rather than the top. Satan Blue, who was eating with them, nodded at the perfectly executed mannerisms as part 1 of his test was complete. After the lunch was done, Satan Blue stood up and said, "You have passed the first part of the test and now it's time for the second part. Please stand up." Both Issei and Ain complied with the request, after which Satan Blue clicked his fingers, making the table and the food disappear. He then clicked his fingers again, and this time a magic circle appeared that changed Issei and Ain's clothes from casual to party wear. Just then a soft song started playing and Satan Blue said, The second part is a slow dance, please begin. Issei then grabbed Ain's hand before stroking it softly, making Ain blush. He then put the hand on his shoulder before he placed his hand on her waist while holding her other arm. Both of them blushed as they started moving with the music. However, they were completely lost to their surroundings. The only thing that mattered to them was that they were close to each other. A few minutes later the song and dance was over, after which Satan Blue said, "You pass, you may proceed to the 4th level." He then clicked his fingers, giving the young couple their casual wear back. Walking through the door, they found themselves in an empty white room with no proctor in sight. Suddenly a red magic circle appeared, and from it Satan Red appeared and said, "Never fear, for I am here." I admit that was new from Nisama. Though I wonder will Ain be able to recognize him this time around. Issei thought before he eyed Ain and saw the clueless look on her face. "You know bro, I am not even surprised anymore." Issei thought out to his dragon, who grunted in agreement. Issei then turned to Satan Red, who had just begun explaining the dynamics of his test. "This test will be a test of any one of your personal talents. But there is a catch, it should be a talent that both of you have." "So what will it be?" asked Satan Red. After a few minutes of contemplation, both Issei and Ain nodded towards each other before Issei said, "We will sing Satan Red." Satan Red nodded before he summoned 2 mechs and a karaoke machine. He then turned to the couple in front of him and said, "Everything is ready, the floor is yours." "That was amazing, you passed this test, please proceed past that door for your final test of the ritual," Satan Red said as he disappeared into a red magic circle. Issei and Ain nodded towards each other before making their way towards the door. As Issei moved, Albion spoke and said, "Be prepared, the next test will be the toughest fight you will ever have." "Yeah, I know. I can feel it in the air, it's going to be something big." Issei thought back as he gathered his energy and expanded his senses, entering his battle mode for the biggest challenge of his life. Ritual Part 2. Issei sighed before straightening up and walking into the next room. He and Ain found Graphia standing in the center of the room, releasing a lot of power and aura. "Welcome to the final test. This one is exclusive for Issei alone," Satan Yellow said. Issei stepped forward and nodded towards Satan Yellow to continue. Satan Yellow then said, "The test is pretty simple. All you have to do is to land a hit on me." Issei actually smirked at that while Ain's eyes widened in worry. Despite not knowing who Satan Yellow was, she could tell that the power being exuded was only a bare minimum of a mass full power. Issei on the other hand removed his jacket and cracked his neck before disappearing in a burst of speed, which was faster than his usual output, showing of the results of his training. He reappeared right in front of Satan Yellow and reared back his fist before throwing a strong punch at Satan Yellow. Satan Yellow merely deflected his punch away before connecting a vicious haymaker into his stomach, causing him to rocket off into the wall. Ain's eyes widened. She knew that mass were strong, but to shrug of an attack from Issei so easily was fearsome. Issei soon stepped out of the rubble, his smirk gone. His eyes were now hardened and held a steely undertone to them. He stared at Satan Yellow for a few moments. Somehow he could practically taste the smirk she held behind her mask. "Aren't you going to attack?" she drawled out. "Oh, I was going through some battle simulations and found out that I have only one chance at this, so I might as well go all out," Issei replied before he raised his aura. As he did, his eyes suddenly slitted while bluish-white scales began to grow over his body. He then inhaled a deep breath in before shouting, "Ice Dragon Emperors ROARRR." A much larger stream of ice was fired from his mouth before it hurtled over to Graphia, who merely raised her aura even further, which created a shield that blocked Issei's projectile. Issei took this opportunity to try and blindside Graphia as he coated his hands in the power of destruction. He then appeared behind her and threw a punch at her. Graphia just tilted her head to side, letting his punch go through before she reversed her elbow and hit him on the face, making him stagger back. However, Graphia this time didn't let up and kicked Issei on the side, sending him hurtling into another wall. Issei once again groaned in pain. He was 100% sure that several of his bones had already been broken. He however pushed all of that to the back of his mind. He had more important things to deal with. Standing up once again, he concentrated his power of destruction and his ice together before creating a bluish-black orb in his hands. He then shouted, "Cataclysm of Cactus," before throwing the orb towards Satan Yellow. The orb enlarged itself as it moved towards Satan Yellow, who was forced to jump away before firing a strong magical attack of her own that collided with the ever-growing orb, after which both attacks cancelled each other out. Satan Yellow then took the initiative and charged at Issei. He was able to dodge the first 2 punches before a kick sent him hurtling into a wall. "That's enough now, Issei, use me now. You won't be able to handle any more of her attacks in your base form," Albion mentally said, receiving a nod of understanding from Issei. It was then that Graphia appeared in front of Issei and punched him. To both her and Ain's surprise, he caught the fist with his hand before looking up with a grin. It was then that the divine dividing appeared on his back as Albion roared out, "Vanishing Dragon Balance Breaker." In a flash of white light, Issei was in his gleaming armor and started attacking Graphia back. Graphia was easily able to block all of his blows, however she disregarded the fact that he was making contact with her, which was what the divine dividing needed to work. The onslaught continued for another few moments, after which Satan Yellow bent down and dodged a punch. She then tried to start her own assault when Albion called out, "Divide X20." Feeling the loss of her power, Satan Yellow faltered in her assault for a moment before throwing her punch. Issei took full advantage of the delay and intercepted her hand before slinging her into the air, after which he shouted, "Wave of Cataclysm." A narrow concentrated stream of the power of destruction left his hands before it rocketed towards Satan Yellow, who wasn't able to dodge midair, hence getting hit. A small explosion was heard upon contact with smoke blocking both Issei and Ain's vision. When the smoke cleared, they were greeted by the sight of Satan Yellow in a silverish barrier completely unharmed. She then removed her barrier and said, "That was an interesting maneuver and a very good display on how to completely utilize the power destruction. However, if that is all you can do, you can give up and save both of our times." Saying that, she raised her power even more and disappeared in speeds that made Issei's eyes bulge outwards. He wasn't able to react and was soon on the receiving end of a very vicious barrage attack. After a few moments, Satan Yellow threw a beaten and bruised body of Issei on the ground where he lay motionless. Issei's mind was rapidly fading into the darkness. He was barely able to hold on to his consciousness. Just as he was about to faint, his eyes flickered over to Ain, his blue orbs meeting her red ones. Ain couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't bear seeing Issei in that state and in one moment of desperation shouted, "Issei." Her voice acted as fuel to Issei's fire and he felt his determination skyrocket. Struggling to his feet, he wobbled a bit before spitting the blood out of his mouth. He looked over to Ain and gave her a thumbs up before turning to Satan Yellow, who had a look of surprise on her face. Issei suddenly grinned sinisterly before saying, "You shouldn't count a dragon out that easily, Satan Yellow." As soon as he finished, he raised his hands and began chanting, "I who am about to awaken am the heavenly dragon that disregarded the principles of supremacy set by God. I conquer the infinite and live the dream. I shall become the azure dragon that sets down the path of supremacy for others to follow. And I shall take you from the depths of the crimson purgatory to the heights of an azure paradise. Heavenly Azure Emperor." The whole area was then engulfed in a bright blue light. It was so big that it was easily seen by the other four mass who were in the upper levels. The light then condensed into a form of an orb, previously where Issei stood. The orb maintained itself for a while before it exploded outwardly, making both Ain and Satan Yellow fly backwards to avoid the force emitted by the explosion. Neither Satan Yellow nor Ain could tell what happened to Issei as he was behind a wall of smoke. Suddenly, faster than the speed shown by Graphia before, a figure appeared behind Graphia, its power shining out. Ain was looking at the new armor in awe. Said armor was as blue as the azure sky and held yellow eyes that seemed to outshine the brightest of lights. The blue wings of the divine dividing were larger in size and number and were widespread. The usual blue gems on the armor were now colored white. Issei, however, felt something different. Despite the injuries on his body, he had never felt this comfortable in the heavenly azure armor as he did now. Hearing his thoughts, Albion answered, "Your magical core grew in the last moment. That is what caused the explosion. Your reserves are now equivalent to mid-tier ultimate class beings. The increased magic is the reason your control over this mode is increased even further." "Perfect. What of the time limit? Has it increased from the usual 1 hour? And how did my reserves just go up and increase themselves?" Issei asked back. "It's pretty simple. You were at a plateau with your magical reserves. Your physical attributes and such were massively improved thanks to your work with Surziches and Tannin, but the same could not be said for your reserves. This lack of balance was causing a rippling effect in your magic that was making it push. The final straw happened when you fought back your exhaustion and stood before pushing through into this form. Now go, you have a match to win." Albion said in a tone that made Issei practically see the battle lust. "Hey, I thought you'd never ask," Issei said before his aura exploded and he dashed at Satan Yellow, his aura and speed giving him a look akin to a bright blue streak. Not to be outdone, Satan Yellow raised her aura before charging ahead. She took on the appearance of a silver streak. The two streaks battled for supremacy in the air, with neither having any sort of advantage. Issei, however, knew that there was no way he could match Graphia's power and figured that this was the limit of her power that she was allowed to use in this fight, so as to ensure that she didn't completely wipe him off the face of the earth. Keeping that in mind, he knew that Graphia's defense was currently even more impenetrable than when the fight had started. He just needed one opening and he'd win. Pulling back, he decided to use an old maneuver mixed with a new skill to see him through. Widening his wings to the max, Albion's voice called out, "Half dimension, dividing maximum." It was then that the aura around Graphia dimmed and was almost gone, while the one around Issei almost skyrocketed even further. Issei grit his teeth as he felt his body slightly tear up under the stress, but completely ignored it. He then dashed towards a slightly dazed Graphia before tackling her and shoving her into the floor, signaling the end of the fight. As soon as he got the hit in, he sighed in relief before releasing his armor. He was exhausted and didn't even have enough energy to fly downwards, which he was falling down. However, he didn't care, he had passed the trails, and now he could be engaged to the girl he loved. He never reached the ground as Ain caught him mid-air before hugging the life out of him. She then proceeded to kiss him as she channeled her magic into him, hoping to at least help him recover enough of his reserves to stand. Once on the ground, Issei groaned as he stood up with Ain's assistance before softly smiling at her. Ain had a teary look in her eyes, which immediately prompted Issei to pull her into his chest as he rubbed circles on her back while whispering soothing sentences into her ear. Satan Yellow casually stood up from the ground before patting the dust out of her clothes. She then looked over at the young couple and said, "Well, you passed the last trial and are now free. Pass through the door to officially complete the ritual, after which you can go home." Both Issei and Ain nodded at that. The look of relief on their faces was evident. Issei then limped towards the door with Ain helping him walk. Satan Yellow Akagraphia couldn't help but smile at the scene, which was eerily similar to when SPARDA had courted her all those 1,000 years ago. Shaking her head, she began waving her hand to fix the destruction of the room. Just as she was about to finish, two arms wrapped themselves around her as SPARDA said, "Was it really necessary for you to go at him with that much power? Yes, it was just 50% of your full power, but still. Are you telling me that you wouldn't have done the same if Sarias was involved?" Graphia said with a smirk. "Now that you think about it, I probably would have gone in harder than you just did," SPARDA said as an afterthought. "Exactly, so don't judge me," Graphia said as she leaned back into SPARDA's chest. As silence ensued around the two. "We probably should go and give them the rings," Graphia said as she broke out of the hug and pecked SPARDA on the lips. Scene break. Issei and Ain then made their out of the last door, which led them right to the room that they first started on. "So what happens now?" Issei curiously asked. "Now we wait for someone to bring our rings. After that it'll be over and then we can go back home," Ain said as placed her head on Issei's shoulder. Issei in response wrapped his arms around her and pulled her from the side into his chest. He then placed his head into the side of her neck and inhaled deeply, taking in her intoxicating and soothing scent. Ain was slightly surprised by the abrupt hug, but said nothing. She then relaxed a bit before she started running her fingers through his wild locks. Issei then playfully whispered, "I really hope they bring the ring soon. I for one can't wait to get to my bed." "Patience, you. Good things come to the patient ones," Ain replied just as playfully. "You know you are right, and I think I consider myself to be pretty patient. After all, I got the best thing possible," Issei whispered as he softly nibbled on Ain's earlobe. Ain moaned a little before saying, "And what is that thing?" "You," Issei simply answered before he moved his lips and placed them on Ain's. The kiss was soft and chaste. Issei, despite kissing her a lot, was always marveled by the softness of her lips. They were in every way perfection. They were forced out of their kiss when they heard a cough from beside them. Breaking away, the young couple blushed when they found SPARDA and Graphia standing in their normal clothes with their faces wearing teasing grins. "You know, you guys really need to stop doing that," Issei groaned out. "How is it that when we are about to get intimate you show up? There has to be some tracking magic going on here." Ain followed up as she glared at Graphia, who didn't look perturbed. "Well, we thought that you'd want to wrap the ritual up as soon as possible. But if you want to wait and continue your makeout session, we could always come back later," Graphia said in a blank voice. "No. Let's just finish of this ritual and be done with it. I want to go and have a very long sleep." Issei groaned out as he felt a fresh wave of pain go through his body. "Oh well, who are we to keep you waiting?" SPARDA said before handing both Issei and Ain a pair of rings. Issei thankfully took one from him before he softly took Ain's hand and put the ring on her ring finger. Ain happily stared at it for a few moments before she repeated the same to Issei. As soon as both rings were worn, two magic circles appeared, one under Issei and one under Ain. Both magic circles stayed for a few moments before moving up and disappearing. "Well, that's that. The family magic has accepted your engagement. You are officially fiancés," SPARDA said with a clap of his hands. Both Issei and Ain nodded thankfully before disappearing into their normal magic circles. Interlude. Both Issei and Ain reappeared in the living room of Lucifuge Manor, where the rest of his peerage were waiting. As soon as the duo materialized, Issei dropped onto one of the couches and groaned out in pain, as his body and bones were still very injured. Everyone gasped at his condition, while Ain looked on with a mixture of exasperation and worry. "What happened to him?" Jean worriedly asked as she sat herself down next to Issei. Apparently the last task in the ritual involved taking on a freaking borderline super devil. This is the result of said battle. Issei groaned out. "How bad are your injuries?" Ain asked worriedly. "I'm positive that several of muscles are strained, almost torn, and I am pretty sure that all of ribs are broken, and my reserves are running pretty low as of now," Issei said before wincing in pain. Yar Issei-sama, you really are a klutz, wait here. Ravel said before she left to go to her room, leaving behind a perplexed Issei. Am I really? Issei asked with a frown marring his face. You definitely are. Jean said enthusiastically. As much as I hate to say to you are. Siegfried said with a thoughtful nod. I don't know you well enough to answer you as of now, Issei dono. Bova said with a bow of his head. Oh my poor adorable klutz. Ain cooed Issei, who was beginning to feel exasperated but refrained from making any unexpected movements since his body was still in a very deplorable state. Ravel arrived back into the room a few moments later. In her hand was blackish red vial of phoenix tears. Stopping in front of Issei, she extended her hand towards him and said. Here you go, Issei-sama, this is a vial of phoenix tears, drink it. It should heal you up in a jiffy. Issei took the vial with a thankful nod before he uncorked it and drank it in one big gulp. He sighed in relief when he felt the healing effects of the tears kicked in. He could feel the throbbing and strain in his muscles slowly recede along with his ribs being slowly realigned to their original position and style. As the tears worked their magic, he felt tired and his body and eyes demanded sleep. He stood up and lightly yawned before addressing the group and saying. Alright then everyone, we have 2 days until the young devil meeting. I want all of you to relax and get some sleep. Everyone nodded before they slowly stood up and left to go their rooms. Except for Bova, who left the lounge and then the building, after which he went back to his full size and flew away to his cave that was located in one of the many mountains found in the UCHIHA territory. Issei, despite the phoenix tears, was extremely tired and was content with going straight to bed. Ain sensed this and was more than willing to take the charge for this moment. Grabbing his hand, she took him to their joint room and clicked her fingers, making 2 magic circles appear under the duo. The first and smaller one was something akin to a cleaning spell. It went up and started cleaning all the blood, sweat and grime the duo had built up due to the outrageous trials they had endured earlier on in the day, while the second and larger one was used to change their dresses from regular day wear to comfortable nighties. Issei thanked Ain by placing a chaste kiss on her cheek before he lay down on the bed. A few moments later, Ain snuggled up to his side and placed her head on his chest. Issei promptly responded by wrapping his arm around her waist. He sighed deeply before pulling her in closer and then closing his eyes. In a few moments the young couple had descended into the world of Morpheus. Issei's dreamscape. As soon as he fell asleep, Issei felt himself enter his dreamscape and felt Albion's presence rapidly approaching him. Opening his eyes towards his dragon's direction, he opened his eyes and raised a solitary eyebrow in a questioning gesture. Albion looked at his wielder for a few moments before he spoke and said. It's time. I am going to teach you another form of ice magic. Ho? And what type of magic are we talking about? Issei asked with a curious but hungry expression on his face. He loved learning from Albion, who was a stern, patient yet fair and good teacher. It is a type of conjuration and animation. Since ice is my and by extension your main element, we call it ice make magic. It has 2 compounds. One is static ice make magic that involves creating non-living things like a cage or a hammer. The second one is called animated ice make magic, which can be used to make living things. There are 3 ways to cast it. One is the 2-handed method, the second is the 1-handed method, and finally we find the method of wills. The last one is a mastery level magic that involves having complete control over the element of ice. It is the level I gained when I reached the heavenly dragon level. Albion explained as he swiftly entered his teacher mode. That magic does sound useful for defensive maneuver. Issei said thoughtfully as he grasped the use of the ice make magic. Good, keep thinking. What else do you think that this branch of ice magic can be used for? Albion asked with an approving nod while he nudged Issei on with the next question. Issei adopted a thoughtful expression for a few moments as he thought hard. It took him a few minutes, after which he smiled and clicked his fingers before turning to Albion and said. I presume it can be effective against numerous opponents. Right in one. Now that we have covered the theoretical aspects, let us begin. I will be teaching you the first stage in the upcoming months. We shall progress according to the talent you show in this art. Albion said. Alright, let's get started. I am sure Vali is training hard and fast. There is no way I am going to let that bastard get the better of me. Issei said, the smile on his face completely taking out the malice in his statement. And that is the real spirit behind our conflict. Rivals, not enemies. We may have crossed powers with the young Lucifer just once, but it was enough for me to know that he felt the same. The real fight between the heavenly dragons is back on. Now enough talk, let's begin. Albion said before he began teaching Issei the beginnings of ice make magic. All the while Issei listened with rapt attention, keen to add a new skill to his growing arsenal. Morning. Remember, we need to go shopping for the young devil gathering tomorrow. It will be your first appearance as a high-class devil, and I want to go without any problems. She said as both of them stood up and walked towards the bathroom. Hi, whatever you wish, Oju-sama. Issei said in a playful tone, earning himself a slap on the shoulder. The action caused him to break out in laughter as he suddenly picked Ain up and headed into the bathroom. Loki Arc P2. So Ain-chan, what do we need to get? Issei asked as he and Ain walked hand in hand towards the shopping district in Kuo. The duo were garnering more than enough stares from the people in the district. After all, it was pretty uncommon to see two people as good looking as our protagonists walking together. We need to get you a few regal looking robes. Don't you worry, I have just the place to look for them. Ain said before she began pulling Issei towards one of the shops. Issei chuckled good-naturedly as he saw her take charge of the situation. A far cry from when he had originally found her. They soon came across a store that read, "Igurish's suits and robes for all situations." Entering the store, Issei found it to be really very well stocked with a very large variety of clothes available for both of the sexes. Good afternoon and welcome to Igurish's suits and robes for all situations. How may I help you? A middle-aged saleswoman asked as she approached the young couple. We need formal wear for a gathering. Preferably silver for him and purple for me. Ain said, once again taking charge. I see. The saleswoman said before she gave an analytical look over to the young couple as if discerning them. After a few minutes she nodded with a small smile before she told the couple to wait for a few moments. Issei and Ain began browsing through a few articles on display before the saleswoman returned with a few dresses for Ain and a number of tuxedos for Issei. Once both of them had their clothes tried and bought, Issei paid the money and asked for the clothes to be sent to his apartment. Once they were done, Issei grabbed Ain's hands and left the shop. So then, Ain-chan, what do you want to do today? We still have more than enough time for the young devils gathering and are out. Issei asked as he warmly and lovingly smiled at Ain. Well, we could probably go and get some ice cream, or we could go to the park. What do you think, Ice? Ain asked with a tilt of her head. Why not both? Let's go. Issei said as he wrapped an arm around Ain's shoulders and led her towards a park. Once they were at the park, Issei led Ain to the bench and after setting her down, he walked towards the ice cream vendor and bought 2 chocolate sundaes. After paying for the ice cream, he went back towards Ain but scowled a bit when he saw a couple of boys trying to flirt with her. Releasing a bit of his presence, he glared at the 2 boys, making them sweat a lot before they ran away. Issei then pulled his presence back in before sitting down next to Ain, giving her a kiss on the cheek before handing her the ice cream. The two ate in silence with Ain leaning her head on his shoulder. After they were done with the ice creams, the duo just sat close to each other, enjoying the peace in the park. It was half an hour later that they decided to return home and prepare for the young devils gathering. Time skip to the young devil gathering. Is everyone ready? It's time for our debut. Issei said as he eyed his peerage with a smile. All of them looked simply stunning. Issei was dressed in a silver tuxedo with a closed coat and a black bow tie. His hair had been gelled slightly and were made into a ponytail to keep them from becoming wild and untamed. He was also wearing a pair of shiny polished black shoes. Ain had donned a lilac dress that started on her shoulders and went down to her feet. Her long silver hair were made into a bun with a few bangs covering her face. She was wearing silver heels and was donning a necklace and a set of silver earrings. Ravel had a full-sleeved black frock with a purple closed jacket on. She had a black choker on her neck along with a black bracelet on both of her wrists. Her blonde hair were made into twintails that were bound by a black ribbons. For shoes, she had decided to don a pair of purple dancing shoes. Jean was wearing a yellow sleeved sundress that went up to her knees. Her hair were made up into a high pony and had a couple of hair ornaments on them. She was wearing a yellow necklace, earrings and bracelets. She was wearing a pair of yellow tights and yellow heels. Bova was currently in his downsized form, was wearing a black battle armor. His wings were curled up against his back and he was looking a little fearsome. The last member of the peerage, Siegfried, was wearing a white shirt and blue tuxedo with a black bow. He, just like Issei, had a flower in his coat's breast pocket and was wearing a pair of shiny black shoes. His hair were gelled down and were made into a regal looking style. Yes dear, we are ready. Ain said with a playful roll of her eyes. You need to chill, Issei. Why are you nervous now? You were relaxed up until an hour ago. Siegfried asked boredly. So even the great white dragon emperor can feel nervous about something. Now I have seen it all. An amused voice said from behind Issei. Issei grinned as he recognized the voice and turned around to see the smirking face of Saraerg Bale. Ah, Saraerg, how are you? Issei asked as he extended his hand towards the Bale heir. Never been better. I heard about your engagement, congratulations. Saraerg said as he gave Issei's hand a firm shake. Heh, thanks, I couldn't have been luckier to find someone like Ain. Issei said as he wrapped an arm around Ain closer to him, making the girl blush with a smile. The two of you look good together. Anyway, let's get to the meeting. From what I hear, nearly everyone is already there. Saraerg said as he turned around and began walking towards the hall where the other young devils were waiting. Lead the way. Issei said as he and his peerage followed Saraerg. They soon approached a large white door which opened up to the hall where the meeting was taking place. However, before they could enter, the entrance exploded outwards. This action surprised Issei and the rest of his peerage, but Isseiharem remained unfazed as if he was expecting something like this. The group entered the room and saw Rias and a blonde-haired beautiful female devil arguing with a dirtily dressed high-class devil. "Tell me, Zephyr, do you want to die? If you want, I am more than willing to kill you. If not by my hand, do you want to die by Ria's power of destruction?" The blonde-haired she-devil said to the now-known Zephyr, while Rias just heatedly glared at the aforementioned devil. "Ha, both of you just stink of virginity. Why don't you come with me? I will make sure that the two of you enjoy yourselves." Zephyr sneered with a laugh. However, before the thing could escalate even further, Isseiharem stepped forward and spoke in an authoritative voice, saying, "Enough, heiress of the Adjurs family, heiress of the Gremory family and the problem child of the Glaciolabolas family, stop this instant. I don't want you flirting with my fiancé Zephyr. If you really want to fight, I am more than willing to take you up on that." His words had an immediate effect as both Rias and Sikavira backed up, with Rias having the tiniest of smiles on her face. However, Zephyr was undeterred. Turning to Isseiharem, he sneered and said, "Oh, and what will you do if I don't stop you, failed Baal?" "This," Isseiharem said before he disappeared in a burst of speed before reappearing in front of Zephyr and punching him into a wall. The force of was enough to crater the wall, and Zephyr was embedded into said crater. He then slid down onto the floor completely unconscious. "Geez, what an idiot," Isseiharem said with a shake of his head before turning to Rias and saying, "Rias dear, you look absolutely ravishing." He finished as he kissed her hand. Turning to one of the waiters, Issei said, "Please take care of this mess. I won't be able to enjoy my tea with my fiancé this way." The waiter nodded in affirmation before he began to fix the damage that had been incurred in the hall. Issei then led his peerage around the room where he was introduced to several high-class devils in their peerages. There were several attempts at flirting which were ignored by him and his peerage members. It was after half an hour that Surzicas along with the Devil High Council appeared and the event had officially begun. "Welcome to the annual Young Devil Gathering. I hope you are all enjoying the night. Before we begin tonight's festivities, I would like to make a couple of announcements," Surzicas said as he smiled and glanced around the hall, which was now quiet and was listening to him with barely veiled interest. "The first announcement is for one Issei Haidu. The Mass and the Devil High Council would like to congratulate him on his promotion to high-class status and welcome him to the high-class society. Please give him a big hand," Surzicas said as he and the elders began their clapping, an action that was repeated around the hall. Issei stood up and nodded around the room before sitting back down. When the applause had died down, Surzicas said, "The second announcement is regarding the Young Devils is the upcoming Young Devil Rating Game Tournament. As the name implies, it will be a rating game tournament that will only include you guys. It was decided by the Mass and Elders so as to help you prepare when you make your official debuts in the future. This will also give you a chance to train and better prepare your peerages against a threat that is the Cows Brigade," Surzicas announced before finished as the hall went silent, a contrast to the excited murmuring that had broken out when the tournament was first announced. "Does that mean we will be sent to the front lines?" asked Isseiharem in a serious voice. "No. This is a mutually agreed decision among the higher-ups in the alliance. The young ones of tomorrow will not be sent to battle with the Cows Brigade," Surzicas calmly answered. "But what if we choose and want to fight the Cows Brigade?" Isseiharem pressed on. "Even then you won't be sent to the front lines unless it is absolutely necessary. This tournament is made for you so that you can hone both your combat and leadership skills and then one day take over from us and lead the next generation. This is our fight, it's our job to make sure that you are ready to take over from us. So for now we would like you to focus on that while we do what we must. Is that understandable?" Surzicas asked gently. Isseiharem just nodded at that before he sat back down. Surzicas surveyed the room one final time before he started speaking again. "The next announcement is for the 5 supernovas. For those who are confused, the supernovas are a group of 5 amongst you who currently have the strongest peerages. And they are Rias Gremory, Sona Citri, Isseiharem Baal, Diadera Astaroth, and Haidu Lucifuge Issei," Surzicas announced as 5 spotlights covered the aforementioned young devils. Issei was surprised on his inclusion but kept his mouth shut when he subtly glanced at his peerage members. He knew that all of them, with the current exception of Ravel, were upper-tier high-class level and could easily beat opponents of similar levels. Now the winner of the rating game tournament will be granted any one wish that they might have had. It could be anything, and as a Mayu it is my word that it will be fulfilled regardless of what anyone says. Now then, supernovas, what are your dreams?" asked Surzicas as he subtly cast a warning glance towards the frowning devil elders. Rias was the first to recover as she spoke up and said, "I wish to one day become the rating game #1 rank and to have the strongest peerage among my peers in the future," she said strongly. Her answer made Surzicas smile with a nod. Even the devil elders nodded. This wish was rather an easy one and could easily be managed. The next one to speak was Isseiharem, who strongly said, "I wish to be a Mau one day." His dream elicited raised eyebrows from nearly everyone in the hall, as no one expected the heir to the great king to be interested in becoming a Mau. "Oh, that is interesting. Tell me, Isseiharem, why do you want to be a Mau when you already are set to inherit the seat of the great king in the future?" Surzicus asked curiously, with the elder council looking on with frowns. "I feel that I would be able to serve the devil race better with the position of Mau." Isseiharem answered honestly, making Surzicus nod, after which he turned to Sona with a smile. "I would like to create a rating game school." Sona said, much to the confusion of the other devils in the room. "But Citri-san, such a school already exists, so why do you want to create another one?" asked one of the elders. "It will be a school for lower class devils. Since they are numerous, it will be good for them to have a school like that," she said, and held her breath, already expecting the upcoming reaction. She was not disappointed when the whole room burst into laughter. Some of the devil elders did ridicule her dream, only to be silenced by Surzicus after an outburst by Saji. Issei inwardly did roll his eyes at his self-proclaimed rival, but in the end said nothing. When everything had settled down, Surzicus moved towards Diodera Astaroth. "My dream is to one day set up church-like facilities in the underworld," Diodera said with a creepy smile, making everyone narrow their eyes at him. Issei, however, marked him down as one to watch, as he knew from facing villains that the devil in front of him had the makings of one. Finally, it was Issei's turn and everyone turned to him. "My dream is to one day reach Super Devil class and to be the protector of the underworld. Not only the general public but everyone, include those oppressed and the ones who weren't given help at the right time," Issei said in a hard voice, showing that what he said was no joke. His answer had elicited smiles from not only Surzicus and Isseiharem, but also from the elders. The thought of having a dragon emperor with the base power of a super devil as your protector was a very attractive idea. Surzicus then clapped his hands and said, "Those are all attractive goals and dreams. Use them to fuel your drive in the upcoming tournament. The last announcement for the day is the announcement of our alliance with the Asgardians and the Slavic faction. I would like a big hand for Lord Odin and the representative from the Slavic faction, Kirito Kagaya." However, before anyone could answer, a loud explosion ensued and from it came a voice. "We apologize, but we are here to destroy that alliance." The opening wave. Everyone was on guard as they looked on in the smoke from where the voice had just come in. When the smoke cleared, two figures were seen floating in the air. One of them was dressed in silver robe, had pale skin, along with silvery purple hair that reached the mid-back. This was Loki, the god of mischief from Asgard. The second figure was dressed in full black with black orbs and hair. This one was the god of chaos from the Slavic faction. Before Surzicus or any of the faction leaders could react, the representatives and chief guard of the two factions shouted out. "Loki-sama, what are you doing here?" Ross was shouted. "Riz-sama, why are you attacking our allies?" Kirito asked as he stared at the figure clad in black. "Didn't you hear what I just said, children? We are here to ensure that this alliance never sees the light of day," Riz coldly stated as he eyed the gathering with a disdain clear in his eyes. "You should stop. I am sure that the owl fathers of both factions will forgive you if you turn yourselves in," Ross was said as she tried to plead her case with the two gods. "Make no mistake, we are here to stop our fathers from making the grave mistake of consorting with a lower species," Loki said with a sneer towards the devils. Then without a warning, both of the gods fired attacks aimed at Roswis, hoping to put her out to get to Odin, since it was a known fact that Asgard's All-Father viewed the young Valkyrie as his own granddaughter. Roswis herself froze when she saw the gigantic torrent of magic coming towards her. She knew that she wouldn't be able to block it, and the people capable of blocking it were too far back. Because of that, she just closed her eyes and accepted her fate. Soon the magical attack hit her. A small explosion ensued. "Roswis-chan," Odin shouted out in shock before he turned to Loki and began to glare at him. However, before he could speak or even raise his power, a voice cut through the tense silence. "You know that wasn't a very nice thing to do." Everyone then turned towards to the smoke, which had now cleared, showing of Issei in his scale mail, with his durandal being held forth in a defensive stance. Roswis was behind him, her eyes wide in shock and a little gratitude. "Interesting. I heard that the White Dragon Emperor of this generation was rather strong, but to see him take a combined attack from two gods and still come out unscathed shows a lot. How did you do it, boy?" Riz asked as he stared at Issei. "Simple, I just use my abilities very efficiently," Issei said as he pointed to his gear and his sword. "I see. It seems I may just enjoy fighting you," Riz said as he ignored everything before. Firing a blast of concentrated chaos magic at Issei, who channeled his magic into his sword before swinging it down and cutting the chaos magic itself. Durandal is the strongest holy sword there is. At full power it can cut down even destruction itself. Don't underestimate its power with such a weak attack, Slavic god of chaos," Issei said as he pointed his blade at the black-clad god. However, before the inevitable fight could begin, 3 green magic circles appeared around the 2 rogue gods before it took the shape of a pyramid. Beelzebub. Loki muttered before he and Riz were transported away. And Whitey that the tension in the room had been temporarily abated. Surzic's, after addressing the young devils and sending them home, with the exception of Issei and his peerage, turned to Ajuka and said. So where are they and how much time do we have? A clearing devoid of life far away from here. And my power will keep them sealed for at least 2 days. So that's the amount of time we have to prepare. Ajuka said thoughtfully. Further discussions were halted when a voice was heard. Perhaps I could be of assistance. As soon as the voice was done, Volley came in from the opening the previous explosion. He too was clad in his balance breaker. Immediately the leaders from all 3 factions stiffened and prepared themselves in case that there was an attack by the Cows Brigade. Mama Mina-san, calm down. I can handle Volley on my own. And he did say he was here for a talk, so let's hear what he has to say. Issei said as he airily waved toward Surzic's and the other leaders, who nodded in acceptance but didn't relax. So Volley whatcha doing in these parts of the woods? Issei asked as he shouldered Durandal and looked at his rival, the wings of his sacred gear spread out. You've gotten a lot stronger than the last time we met, rival of mine. Volley commented with a smirk as he studied Issei's aura that was much denser than when the 2 of them fought back during the peace conference. The same can be said about you, Volley. Though you forgot to answer my question. Issei pointed out. Like I said, I am here to offer you assistance versus the 2 rogue gods. Between our teams we will have more than enough firepower to hold them until a more permanent solution is applied by your leaders. Volley said, getting an understanding nod from Issei, who then turned his head towards Surzic's and the other leaders and said. That plan is as good as anyone, so what do you think, Surzic's-sama, Aden-sama and Kirito-san? That is fine. I think it is agreeable. Said Surzic's. It is fine, though I would like if Roswis-chan would accompany them. It would be right if there was no one from Asgard protecting the alliance. Aden said as he thoughtfully stroked his chin. His face was serious, not having any sign of the perversion he normally displayed. I agree as well. Though I myself will take part in this operation, as the chief representative of the Slavic faction, it is my duty to help clean up the mess caused by one of my faction members. Kirito said, getting nods from everyone in the room. That is dandy and all, but what is the permanent solution to the problem? As confident as I am in my rival's abilities, we both are still ways off before we can defeat god-tier opponents on our own. So unless you have a permanent solution in mind, I would say that the operation is a no-go. Volley said as he looked over to where the leaders were standing. I will have Thor send us the Mjolnir. That hammer should have more than enough power to permanently seal Loki. Though the only one who could even use it would be your Red Dragon Emperor. It needs someone with power to use, and you have power in spades. Aden said as he looked over to Volley. Volley in response just nodded his head in acceptance. As for Riz, I am sure Durandal will be more than enough to take him out. Long enough for Kirito-san to send him to the proper authorities. Issei said, causing more than a few people to double take at that piece of information. Surely Durandal was strong, but it couldn't be strong enough to take down a god, couldn't it? White Dragon Emperor Kun, are you sure that your weapon would work against someone like Riz-sama, who is a god? Roswis asked with a blush. This fact didn't go unnoticed by Ain and Aden, causing both of them to store away this information for future referencing. Well, Durandal has a total of 7 levels of power. I am able to use it up to 3 levels in a controlled way and the 4th level in an uncontrolled way. No one in history has been able to reach the 7th level, with Vasco Strada coming closest to that level when he unlocked and used level 6 for a short amount of time. So yes, this sword is more than capable of damaging a god. Issei said as he entered his teacher mode before he finished with a shrug. That is flexible. Very well then, Issei, take Volley and his team and head back to the Lucifuge estate. I will call for you when it will be the time for you to depart. Surzich said, making Issei nod. Issei then turned to Ain and said. Ain-chan, please take everyone home, I will be back with Volley and his team. Ain nodded before she and Jean kissed one of Issei's cheeks. Issei then turned around and left with Volley. Just as Ain and the rest of the Lucifuge peerage were about to leave, Aden spoke up and said. Will it be possible for you to take Roswis-chan with you? I think it would be better for her to be with people her age. Making Roswis look at him in an incredulous manner. Ain turned to Surzich with a questioning look in her eyes. After receiving a nod from Surzich, she turned to Aden and said. We'd be honored to have her stay with us, Aden-sama. Aden-sama, what are you doing? Roswis asked frantically. It's like I said, Roswis-chan, I want you to stay and possibly make friends with people your age. I know your skills and prodigious position make it hard for you to have friends, so think of this as a new leaf for you. Hear his expression turned from solemn to lecherous as he continued and said. Maybe you can even join White Dragon Emperor Kun's harem. He does seem to be a good match for you. After all, he already has a silver-haired beauty with him, a second one won't make a difference. Can you imagine yourself on top of him? Auden sama doncha speak like that. Roswa said in a flustered tone as her country accent came into play. Auden laughed heartily at that before he ruffled her hair in a patronizing manner before saying, "Go on." Roswas looked reluctant for a moment before she nodded and walked towards Ain, and the rest of the Lucifuge peerage were waiting. Soon all of them disappeared, leaving the leaders to do and discuss what they wanted to. With Issei and Vali. "So what's your point here, Vali? I know for a fact that you weren't assisting us because of the goodness of your heart, neither because of a good fight. Your recent escapades versus Thor and some of the other gods from around the globe have been rather interesting stories to hear about." Issei asked as he tilted his head towards Vali. "I don't know what you're talking about." Vali replied with a smirk, clearly showing that he had no intention of telling Issei anything. "May you know what I mean. You are way too smart to actually do anything without any purpose, and since I know that you weren't looking for a good fight or helping us out just because of your internal golden goodness, why not just tell me the real reason? I won't tell anyone, and if I am questioned about I can lay it off as information in between our rivalry. So tell me. Issei said as got right into Valis' face and started his ranting. Valis' eyebrow then twitched, after which he pushed Issei's face back and with a sigh asked, "You aren't going to let it go until I tell you, right?" "Not be." Issei said with a grin as he extended the E. "Fine. I want something that Loki has. And that's all that you are getting." Vali said with a tone of finality. "Seems fair. Now where the hell is your team?" Issei asked. "They should around here." Vali said as the duo entered the forest where Issei saw 4 figures lounging around. Issei remembered one of them from the peace conference named Biku. The second one was a beautiful black-haired yellow-eyed girl. She was dressed up in a black sleeveless kimono and faintly resembled Kaneko. The remaining 2 were 2 blondes, a boy around Issei's age, while the girl was around Ravel's age. The blonde boy had his hair braided and wore a pair of spectacles. His attire consisted of a regal design with a proper coat and whatnot. The girl on the other hand had her hair made into a high ponytail, while she was dressed up in the casual wear for a witch. It was the complete set including the pointy hat. "This is my team rival. I am sure you remember Biku from the peace conference." Biku waves, making Issei wave back. "Kuroka and Akaushu, she is quiet and famous among the devil hierarchy." Kuroka gives Issei a sultry grin, to which he replies with an eye smile, "These are Arthur Pendragon, the heir to King Arthur himself, and his sister LaFay Pendragon. She, like her brother, is the direct heiress to Morgan Le Fay." Arthur stiffly nodded towards Issei, with Issei repeating the gesture, while LaFay just pointed her tongue at him teasingly. "Everyone, this is my rival Haidu Issei, the White Dragon Emperor. We will be staying at his mansion until the mission with Loki." Vali said. Everyone nodded and looked towards Issei, who shrugged before clicking his fingers and creating a magic circle that then transported them away to the Lucifuge mansion. Filler. Tense. That was the best word to describe the atmosphere down in the underworld. The fact that 2 evil gods could attack at any given time left more than a few people on edge. The same situation could be said about the atmosphere in the Lucifuge mansion. However, the reasons for that were completely different. Issei's peerage and Valis group, despite being fairly similar, had a lot of differences, and that fact was seen by the frequent arguments that had taken place in just 2 days. "This is getting rather troublesome," Issei said to Vali as he ran his hand through his hair, all the while as heard the numerous booms go around the estate. "Tell me about it. I expected it from Biku and Kuroka, but to actually see someone like Arthur actually lose his cool and indulge someone like that was surprising. Heck, even the small blondes in each of our groups are continuously throwing jabs at each other," Vali exasperatedly said. "Well, I guess we should put a stop to it, since we do need to conserve energy for the fight," Issei absent-mindedly said. "That is true," Vali said with a nod. Both Dragon Emperors looked at each other before they each drew in a deep breath before shouting, "Enough is enough, you idiot, stop your caterwauling." Vali and Issei roared out, however they had no effect on their respective team and peerage members. Seeing the hopeless looks on their faces, Roswa sighed before she cleared her throat and released a cold presence, making everyone freeze and turn to Roswa, who had a sweet smile on her face. Somehow everyone knew that the smile was anything but sweet. "Now then, I want you all to stop your squabbling and shut up. Can you do that?" she said as added an eye smile to her already sweet smile. However, an effect of that was the mask of the Shinigami that had appeared behind her. The effect was almost instantaneous, and immediately both groups scrambled and went their separate ways, acting as if nothing had happened. Once peace was restored, the Shinigami mask disappeared and Roswas nodded at the others and said, "That's better," before she promptly walked away. The display left both Issei and Vali gobsmacked and speechless for a good amount of minutes. Both boys had the same thought. She needs to teach me how to do that. Anyway, I want all of you to get the right amount of rest for our fight. There is not much time left in it anyway. Go to your rooms and get the appropriate amount of rest needed," Issei said to his peerage, who nodded before they shuffled out of the room. Issei nodded towards Ain, letting her know that he would be there in a short while. "Same orders for you guys." Get some rest. Fighting a couple of evil gods along with their stooges isn't going to be an easy feat. Volley said as he led his team towards the mansion they were temporarily staying in. With everyone gone, Issei turned around and stared at the purple night sky. He knew that tomorrow was going to be his hardest battle ever. Sure, he had fought Graphia, but that was when she was barely using 50% of her power, not to mention he had gotten his ass badly kicked. He was going to need to bring out all of his tricks if was to ensure even the chances of his survival. He was brought out of his musings when a soft hand touched his shoulder. Turning around, he saw that it was Roswis. She was looking at him with a curious expression on her face. He couldn't help but think that she looked absolutely stunning in the moonlight. Her grayish-blue orbs seemed to shine in the light of the moon, while her pale skin seemed to give of an attractive allure. All in all, she was up there with Ain in terms of beauty. Shaking his head of these thoughts, he said, "What can I help you with, Roswis-san?" "Oh, I just saw you spacing out and was wondering what you were thinking," she said with a small blush on her face. She knew that he had stared at her for a few moments before answering. His icy blue eyes had an intense look to them and seemed to look deep into your soul. This time Issei gained a rather mischievous smile on his face as he said, "I was just busy admiring the goddess of beauty that is in front of me." His remark made Roswis blush deepen, all the while a traitorous part of her brain seemed to recall what Auden had said to her, and her imagination was beginning to run. Fortunately for her, Issei interrupted her train of thought and asked, "Anything else I could help you with, Roswis-san?" "I wanted to thank you," Roswis said as she managed to fight back her blush. "Thank me? For what?" Issei asked with a bewildered frown marring his face. "For saving my life in the ball." There was little doubt that the combined attack from Loki-sama and Riz-sama was made to kill me. Riz-sama's attack would have negated my shields, while Locus would have killed me, she said honestly. Issei shook his head and with a smile said, "You don't have to thank. I would help and save anyone I can as long as happens to be within my range of abilities. And besides, you are way too cute to let die, you know that." Roswis blushed red once again before sputtering a goodnight and rushing to her room. Issei chuckled at the sight. She really was too cute for her own good. Making his way to his room, he found, clad in a yellow sleeping dress, Ain brushing her long silver hair. Moving behind her, he said, "You want help with that, I-chan?" The only response he got was the brush being thrust into his hands. He softly hummed a tune as he brushed her hair, all the while enjoying their silkiness. "Nice?" I asked. "What is it?" Issei asked back, not looking up from his self-appointed task. "When are you going to deal with Jean?" she asked bluntly. "What about Jean-chan?" Issei asked curiously. "I mean about the two of you. I know the two of you have feelings for each other and have tested the waters already. I already approve of her since she is not only strong but also very sincere. So why haven't you actually made the whole thing official with her?" Ain asked. "Being honest, it was mainly because of you. I did not want to go behind your back. And to the fact that you never gave me approval, I never did anything beyond testing the waters with her," Issei said with a weak shrug. Ain then abruptly stood up and turned to Issei before she said, "Listen here, mister, no excuses or delaying anymore. You are going to go to her room and confess. I want to meet her tomorrow as a harem sister, not a peerage member. So get to it," she said as she pushed her finger into his chest. Issei chuckled a bit before he leaned forward and gave her a chaste kiss before playfully saying, "As my Oju-sama wishes." Dodging a slap aimed at his shoulder, he left the room with a chuckle escaping his lips. As he left, Ain gave a small smile as she would now finally have a closer relation to someone outside of her sister and fiancé. She, however, did wonder where this relationship would go. Hopefully to some happy place. Issei walked down the mansion until he came across Jean's room. Shaking his head and gathering his courage, he knocked on the door and waited. The door was then opened by a confused-looking Jean who was now clad in lilac-colored pajamas. Her face went from one with annoyance to one with confusion the moment she saw Issei. However, before she could say anything, Issei said, "Hey, will it be possible for me to come in and talk?" "Sure," Jean said and moved back, letting Issei enter, the confused expression never once leaving her face. Issei sat on her bed contemplating what he would do next. He knew he wasn't a sweet talker, neither did he have a silver tongue. So he decided to wing it and be completely blunt about it. "I like you," he said honestly, making Jean look at him with hope shining in her eyes. "What do you mean?" Jean asked, hoping to get a more elaborated answer before she made a move. "I mean that I like you. Really, really like you. You were like the first girl who caught my attention in my life. Being honest, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. And then you came back. I was going to keep our relationship to the level of just friends, but Ain encouraged me to come to you. Having her approval removed the last obstacle, and here I am. Jean, I love you," Issei said honestly and was surprised when Jean jumped on him before kissing him. The surprise didn't stop him from kissing her back, and soon things escalated into a full-fledged make-out session. They separated a few minutes later panting, the lust for each other shining in their eyes. Battle viewpoint P1. Time skip 1 day. It was finally the time for battle, and all of the assigned fighters were waiting to be sent into the battlefield. Issei stood with Ain on his right and the rest of his peerage behind the two of them. A similar arrangement was found in between Vali and his team. While Roswis and Kirito were standing on the side representing their respective factions. Is everyone ready? Surzicas asked as he eyed the whole group. After receiving the subsequent nods he motioned Grafia, who had a box in her arms, forward and said. This is a box with the phoenix tears. There are a total of 7 tears, so please use them only if they are absolutely necessary to use. Thanks, we will be careful. Issei said as he took the box and sent it into his pocket dimension ready for immediate removal and use. Then I wish you all luck. Surzicas said as he raised a hand causing a red transportation circle appearing under the whole group. The circle glowed and then in a small flash the whole group was gone. Just as the adults were about to leave, Riaz and Sona appeared with the rest of their peerages. Riaz then confidently stepped forward and said. Oni-sama, we are ready to be sent into the battle versus Loki. As you can see, we are here earlier than your appointed group. She said in a rather cocky voice, making Sona sigh a little with a shake of her head. Surzicas shot her a rather dry look, while Grafia had to use nearly all of her mental control to not snigger out loud. Surzicas then gave a deep sigh and said. They are already gone and in battle now, Riaz. It was you who was late. Good day now. Saying that he left a gaping Riaz and a relieved Sona behind and left with a now openly sniggering Grafia. She however did sober up quickly as she remembered that it was her little sister who was now in the line of fire. Area break. The group arrived to see the glowing magical pyramid that currently held the two evil gods prisoner. Even from the distance where they stood, they could tell that the seal holding them was weakening and a confrontation was mere moments away. So this is it, huh? Issei voiced to Vali, who was standing beside him. So it seems. Don't die out there, hi to Issei. I don't need a change in my rival this early into the game. Vali said as he eyed Issei from the corner of his eyes. I knew it, you do care. Issei said with a triumphant look on his face. His words caused Valis' eyebrows to twitch dangerously, but he wasn't able to reply at the barb as the seal holding the two evil gods just went down, signaling their freedom. Looking over, the whole group of our young heroes saw the two renegade gods were slowly talking to each other. I should have expected that from Beelzebub. A devil right down to the core. Loki muttered as he eyed the group. You and your petty pets can handle the rest of the group, however leave the white dragon for me. I want to fight him. Riz said as he kept his eyes locked with Issei. Loki merely grunted in response. Riz then pointed his finger at Issei and jerked his head towards a clearing some distance away from the group before he himself moved there. With Issei and the group. Well, it seems that I have my opponent. Good luck everyone. Issei said as he nodded towards Riz. However, before he could leave he was turned around by Ain, who placed a heated kiss on his lips and whispered. Please be careful and come back safely. Hey, you know me, I am the poster boy of safety, and besides don't worry, there's no way I am going to leave you behind. He said as planted a kiss on her forehead before proceeding to do the same with Jean. When he was done he simply released his divine dividing wings and flew away to meet his opponent. You are late. Riz said as he watched Issei land on the other end of the plane. Well, I wasn't really given a time for arrival. Issei replied with a shrug. But of course. Riz agreed with a nod before releasing a medium-sized magical attack towards Issei, who sidestepped it before he looked at Riz blankly, all emotion draining from his face, leaving behind a battle-ready mind and body. It was then that Albion roared out. Vanishing Dragon Balance Breaker. In a flash white light Issei was seen clad in his balance breaker, white-colored magic rolling was off him in waves. Issei then raised an arm and said. Durandal. As he said, the magnificent blue-gold-colored blade appeared out of his gear and into his hands. Issei then muttered level 3, and the sword began to shine before it split into two eastern blades of the same color. Taking a stance he immediately lashed out towards Riz and gave a vicious cross-shaped swipe. Riz on the other hand just leaned back before throwing a punch at Issei. Issei met the offending limb with an up back kick. Riz hid his surprise at the move and grabbed Issei's leg before launching him into a large plateau. At the same time he also released a wave of chaos at Issei. Issei in response flew out of the rubble with Albion calling out. Divide x5. The wave of chaos was soon divided, and the power gained from it was used to fuel the arc-like whitish gold magical attack that Issei released towards Riz, who merely raised his eyes at the attempt before promptly firing his own attack that cancelled the arc out. Riz then coated his hands with his black chaos magic before he launched himself at Issei. Issei met him halfway and in midair as they clashed with Riz using his hands like swords. It was then that Riz decided to get serious, and this was seen by the notable increase in his speed, accuracy and power. Issei, however, using a few well-placed divides, was able to match him for a while. However, Riz was increasing all of his combat attributes exponentially, and soon the difference was too large to be matched by divides. It was then that a glowing fist plowed deep into Issei's stomach, causing him to cough out blood. However, Riz did not stop there, as he kneed Issei on the face before sending him hurtling into the ground via a vicious haymaker. He did not give Issei a chance to recover and immediately began firing high-powered energy balls towards Issei. It was a direct hit that caused a medium-sized explosion. Issei, however, immediately flew out of the rubble panting and bloodied. His helmet and chest plate were missing. Blood was running down his face and chest. Damn, this is intense. Issei thought with a grimace on his face. What were you expecting when you were facing a god? A picnic? Now enough playing around, go release your other form. That is the only chance we have of getting out of here alive. Albion said with a huff. Is that really the limit to your abilities? I was honestly expecting something extraordinary. But it seems I will be disappointed. Riz said, trying to get a rise out of Issei. Issei, on the other hand, just spat the blood out of his mouth before wiping his chin. He then closed his eyes and softly began his chant. I who am about to awaken am the heavenly dragon that disregarded the principles of supremacy set by God. I conquer the infinite and live the dream. I shall become the azure dragon that sets down the path of supremacy for others to follow. And I shall take you from the depths of the crimson purgatory to the heights of an azure paradise. Heavenly Azure Emperor. In a bright flash of light, Issei was seen floating in the magnificence of his heavenly azure armor. Riz's eyes widened a fraction at the new form before he said. Well, aren't you full of surprises? I wasn't expecting you to pull a card like that out of your deck. Play song reverse situation from Naruto Shippuden. It isn't the only thing I can do. Issei said as Durandal disappeared back into his gear. His hands then started glowing with a distinctive color of the power of destruction. Then without a warning, he thrust his hands out and sent a powerful wave of destruction at Riz, who dodged it but wasn't expecting the drastic increase in Issei's speed as he appeared right in front of him and sent him hurtling into the ground. Issei then straightened up his wings, constricting as Albion called. Divide. Riz faltered for just a moment as he felt his power drain a bit. This short lapse was all Issei needed to tackle Riz into the ground before he started punching Riz into the ground. After a few quick-paced punches, he lifted Riz up and threw him into the air before he shouted. Frozen Requiem. A large wave of ice hit Riz, causing his body to start freezing up. Noticing what had happened, Riz began focusing his chaos magic into his body to thaw the ice and to ultimately beat back the spell Issei used. However, he didn't get a long respite since Issei was back at offense and was now firing concentrated balls made up of the power of destruction. Riz was slightly slower than before due to the ice on his body and was only able to dodge for a few moments, after which he was hit by one of the balls, which caused him to fly back. Issei then used his night attributes to quickly cover the distance between the two before channeling in his rook abilities to solidly land a magically enhanced destruction punch into a plateau. Once again, Albion was hurt as he said. Divide. Using the influx of power, Issei released it into his next attack. Dragon's secret art, Azure Lotus of the Ice Dragon Emperor. As soon as he finished, a huge visage of a white dragon with azure-colored eyes appeared behind him. With a roar, Issei waved his hand in an arc-like manner, causing the dragon to fly and hit Riz head-on, causing a big and loud explosion to ensue. Song end. Do you think we got him? Issei mentally asked as he panted a little. The use of this form was still pretty draining. Along with his use of his more powerful attacks were taking a fair toll over his body and magic. Not in the least. Riz is a smart and powerful god, and he won't be taken down by an attack of that magnitude. Keep your guard up. Albion said seriously. And he was right, as the moment the smoke from the previous explosion cleared, a black circular barrier was seen surrounding Riz. It disappeared, and a moment later Riz appeared out, hardly looking haggard. The only proof of a fight were his slightly torn clothes and the odd bruise on his person. Well, that was a rather interesting experience. I haven't had someone as young as you push me this hard. Hell, several warriors several times your age all tried and fell in battle in half the time you fought against me. I am impressed. Riz said as he looked at a slightly heavily breathing Issei. Well, I am pleased to have blown your mind, but this is far from over. Ice make dragons. Issei shouted in the end, causing several animated dragons to appear out of thin air before they roared at Riz and flew towards him in high speeds. Riz smirked as he saw the dragons fly towards him and simply clicked his fingers, causing numerous waves of black-colored magic hit the dragon's head on, causing them to change direction and fly towards Issei. Surprised by the change, Issei quickly summoned Durandal and fired a quick wave of holy energy, causing the ice dragons to disintegrate. However, this momentarily caused him to divert his attention of Riz, as said god was in front of him in a flash and punched him straight through a mountain. When he stopped, he tried to move back, only for him to drop to his knees as his azure form disintegrated back into his normal balance breaker. Damn. Issei muttered, but he was not surprised. He had been in that form for over an hour and had used several high-demand moves. The only option he now had was to fight in a purely controlled manner and create the one opportunity he needed to use Durandal in its fourth form to finally end his fight. However, that was not to be, as his reserves were at an all-time low. The moment he stood up, his armor all but disintegrated, leaving behind only his wings. Confusedly he asked, "What just happened? You ran out of energy. You're literally at his mercy as of now," Albion said stoically as Riz landed in front of Issei. Looking at him panting, Riz said, "Well, it seems the fun for today has finally ended. I will however let you live to see another day, White Dragon Emperor. Your performance today resulted in your life. I shall however see you again in the future." Saying that, Riz turned around and walked away only to disappear in a wisp of smoke, leaving behind a bewildered Issei. "What in the world just happened?" he incredulously asked. "He let you go. That is what happened. I however am pleased with the way you fought today. You used all of your abilities in a good and balanced way, managed to use the Azure armor for more than its total time, and managed to injure God. Very impressive," Albion replied. Thanks, I guess," Issei replied as he started flying back towards the others, wondering how their battle had gone and praying that all of his peerage members, especially Ain and Jean, were fine. Surprisingly, he found his mind drifting towards Roswis as well, as he hoped that she too would be fine. "That however does not mean that you are of the hook, mister. At my prime, a god like that would have groveled at my feet. I am going to up your training to ensure that you are never in a position like that again," Albion finished in a stern voice, leaving behind no arguments. Issei in response had only nodded as he was too tired to reply. He arrived back just in time to see Vali use the Moldra on Loki, effectively sealing him up. His eyes then searched for his peerage. He then sighed in relief when he saw that all of them along with Roswis were fine, apart from the odd bruises and cuts on their bodies. It seemed that the mission was now partial success. Battle Viewpoint P2. With Issei having flown away, Vali and the others turned to Loki, whose eyebrows were twitching in annoyance. Looking at the group, Loki said, "So this is the best of what the mask could send to fight me? A few kids with an attitude problem. No matter, I'll just have to kill all of you and use this to reignite Ragnarok," he finished pompously. "Loki-sama, please stop this madness. I am sure that Odin-sama will be merciful and most lenient towards you in the case of the punishment." Roswis pleaded, hoping beyond hope that he would agree and that the matter would solve itself in a rather peaceful and non-violent manner. "Don't patronize yourself, Valkyrie. I am here to rectify my father's mistake when he signed the alliance treaty and placed himself and all of Valhalla with a lower race." Loki spat out. "But it seems we are at an impasse. Let us begin," Loki said before he raised his finger and pointed it towards the ground directly below him. A purple beam of magic then hit the ground, causing a huge magical circle to appear on it. From the circle, the giant god-slaying wolf emerged and snarled at the group in front of it. Fenrir, the wolf of legend, said to have fangs that not even gods can run from. Ain muttered gravely as she eyed the wolf. Loki however wasn't done and pointed both of his hands towards his side and let out 2 more magical beams. From said beams came out 2 more wolves that were slightly smaller than Fenrir, but there was odd sense of similarity towards them and Fenrir. Bringing both of his hands together, he pointed them behind Fenrir, causing an enormous 350-meter-long serpentine dragon to appear. Hati and Skoll, the children of Loki, with both having the same god-slaying jaws. And a clone of the Midgard serpent. This whole mess got a whole lot complicated. Vali muttered before he turned towards his group and said, "Arthur, Lefay, the 2 of you will take on Fenrir. Kuroka, Biku, the 2 of you handle one of the pups. I will take on Loki." "What are you going to do, Princess of Fire, Valkyrie-san and Kirito-san?" Vali finished with a tilt of his head. "Me, Jean and Ravel will deal with the copy, Bova will deal with the other pup. Sieg will help your teammates with Fenrir," Ain answered loftily. "I will be helping Ain-san with Midgardsormr," Roswa said with a shrug. "I can't help White Dragon Emperor Kun, so I will help you face Loki, Red Dragon Emperor Kun," Kirito said as he unsheathed his jet black sword. "Well, that's that guess. I only hope that Haidu comes out on top. Fighting a god without help will be suicide," Vali said before turning and activating his boosted gear. Drake then roared out. Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker. In a flash of red, Vali was in his scale mail and took to the air, confronting Loki with Kirito floating beside him. Ain, Jean, Roswis and Ravel all confronted the Midgard serpent. Bova went back to his full size and moved towards Hati. The 2 Yokai moved towards Skoll, while the remaining 2 swordsmen and witch faced Fenrir. Bova versus Hati. Bova moved in front of Hati, towering over the wolf with his 17 meters long frame. He roared out a territorial roar at the wolf, challenging it. The wolf replied in kind, not liking the way Bova was challenging it. Hati then launched itself at Bova, intending to get the dragon on his back before using his jaws. Bova however caught the 4 paws of the wolf and began pushing back, not giving the wolf any area to work on. He then lifted the wolf into the air by its paws before throwing it away. Bova then took a deep breath before releasing a torrent of strong flames that vaguely resembled a meteor. Among all of Tannen kids, the only one who could effectively wield the blaze meteor fire was Bova. The wolf snarled in pain as the fireball hit its target, but ultimately didn't let the pain affect it too much. The wolf then charged once again, this time ramming straight into Bova, causing Bova to crash into a small plateau behind him. Hadi this time knew that getting in a bite would be difficult, so he decided to focus on physically ramming Bova to get his work done. Hadi then charged once, again not giving Bova a chance to regroup. The second ram held more power, and Bova actually felt a rib or two breaking upon impact. This however prepared him for the third time as he once again grabbed Hadi by the forepaws before releasing his strongest flames upon the wolf at point-blank range. He then wrapped his arms around the wolf's back and started squeezing it hard using both his rook and dragon strength. He himself was very pleased to hear the whimper when a crack escaped the wolf's back. Using one final German suplex, he left the dead wolf on the ground before reducing his size as he moved away, wincing in pain as he felt his leg and number of ribs throb in pain. Kuroka and Biku vs. Skoll. Skoll growled as he spotted the two yokai in front of him and gave a threatening bark as a warning. However, the warning was given little to no attention as both Kuroka and Biku were not intimidated in the least. "Hello Kuroka, the mud is trying to be cute," Biku said with a smirk. "He does look cute, but sadly I am not into mutts, Naya," Kuroka said with a shrug and a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, and what type of guys are you generally into?" Biku asked with a flirtatious smile. "Whatever the type I'm into, the list definitely does not include monkeys," Kuroka said as she brushed his attempts at flirting away and focused back on Hadi, who was now pressed on the ground and was more than ready to pounce on the two high-tier yokai. A few moments later, Skoll pounced at the duo who jumped away. Biku shed in annoyance before pointing his staff at Hadi and saying, "Nio boy, extend." His adamantine staff extended before it solidly hit Hadi on the skull. The hit caused the wolf to crash face first into the ground, causing him to momentarily be stuck. Kuroka took advantage of the Mystic Wolf's current plight before circling around from behind and firing concentrated bursts of both demonic magic and senjutsu. Both Kuroka and Biku however didn't let up on their assault and used the momentary downing of Hadi to their complete advantage. Both of them charged their strongest senjutsu bursts right on their fists and staff respectively before they hit Hadi on all of his vital spots simultaneously. The combined hits from two high-tier S-rank yokai completely frazzled Hadi's life force. Hadi's life force was now leaving him at a very fast rate and very soon his life left his body. Both Kuroka and Biku looked at the dead wolf with disinterest before the duo started looking around. After all, several fights were still taking place. Arthur, Lefay and Siegfried. "So how are we going to deal with that overgrown wolf?" Siegfried asked as he stood with his hands crossed behind his head. "It is a simple plan. You shall find a way to destabilize Fenrir long enough for Lefay-chan to set up her binding spell to tie him down. Once he is down, I will use my Excalibur ruler to get him under control." "Mission done," Arthur stoically replied. "Well, I can do that. Oi little miss, how long do you need to prepare your spell for?" Siegfried said as he looked over Lefay, who already had a number of magical circles in front of her hand. 3 minutes minimum and 5 at the maximum. "Can you hold him up until then?" Lefay asked back, not looking away from her spells. "Why the hell not? Balance Breaker, Chaos Edge, Asura Ravage." Siegfried intoned as his power increased by 8 times with 4 draconic hands appearing from out of his hands. From his coat he withdrew 2 light swords, while 4 magical storage arrays appeared in front of his sacred gear arms. From each of the magical circles he withdrew a single demonic sword. Arthur's eyes widened proportionally when he saw Siegfried handling 4 demonic swords. This fact alone enforced his opinion that Issei and his peerage were not to be trifled with. On the other hand, he felt as if he finally found someone who he could match blades with without fear. Having taken out Baling, Nothing, Turfing and Dainsleif, Siegfried charged at Fenrir at high speeds, hoping to get the wolf off guard. Dodging a paw from Fenrir, Siegfried jumped up and combined the abilities of Turfing and Dainsleif before firing away ice crystals, holding in the power of destruction towards Fenrir. Fenrir growled in anger as he felt the crystals explode on his skin. In a speed unexpected from someone his size, Fenrir charged at Siegfried, his god-slaying jaws on display. Siegfried's eyes widened at the sudden burst of speed, but he managed to bring all 6 of his swords in front of him in a defensive maneuver. The force of the hit caused him to go flying into a boulder. With a pained grunt, he looked up only to find Fenrir running up to him, with a clear indication of wanting to end him. However, Siegfried was far from helpless and was a close second to Issei and Ain in terms of combat potential. Slashing Baling, he created a torrent of wind that pushed Fenrir of the side, after which he immediately stabbed Dainsleif into the ground, causing shards of ice to grow out of the ground and hit Fenrir, causing him to roar in pain. However, the assault didn't end there as a huge powerful arc of holy magic hit the gigantic wolf head on, pushing it back. Looking up, Siegfried saw Arthur standing there with the strongest holy sword Caliburn in his hands. Unbeknownst to Siegfried, a smile came up to his face. He finally had a rival who could match him in the blade arts. It was at this point Lefay floated in front of the two swordsmen and pointed her hands towards the wolf, saying, "Adamantine chains of sealing." As she finished, massive golden chains appeared out of a magical circle and tightly wrapped themselves around Fenrir, effectively immobilizing him and keeping him in place. "Well, that's that," Siegfried said as he muttered a numbing spell to take his pain away. "Siegfried of the Demon Hand, I look forward to the day when I can test my blade against yours," Arthur stoically said as he turned to Siegfried. "You won't be the only one," Siegfried said back with a smirk. That was mirrored by Arthur. Lefay on the other hand just shook her head and muttered, "Boys. Roswus, Ravel, Ain and Jean. Ain-sama, what shall we do?" Ravel asked curiously. "I want you to take the lead in this one, Ravel. We are 3 magic users and 1 sacred gear user, you tell me, what will you do?" Ain asked as she smiled inwardly. The answer was pretty simple. The serpent in front of them was just a sorry old copy of the Midgard serpent and just had 20 to 30% of the original's power. It wouldn't take more than a powerful combined magical attack to disintegrate it. Ravel mentally categorized the abilities of all 4 girls as her mental gears headed into overdrive. After a few minutes of silence, she turned to Jean and asked, "Jean-sama, what can your balance breaker do?" "I have 2 subspecies as I mentioned. One is my stake victim dragon, which involves a 40-foot dragon made up of holy swords, while the second is a copy of Yudo Kiba's holy demonic sword. However, it is different in the sense that it is a 4-way slayer instead of 2 and has holy demonic dragon slaying and Kai abilities." Jean finished her explanation smugly as she watched looks of surprise on her fellow peerage member faces. Ravel absently nodded and turned her attention towards the Silverheads. She knew that both of them were outstanding users of magic and could fire spells that could mortally harm the copy Dragon King in front of them. Making up a plan, she said, "Jean-sama, please use your dragon balance breaker to fight that thing head on and distract it. While it does the distracting, me and Ain-sama will be firing magical spells at it to increase the damage inflicted. Roswus-sama, I want you to collect as much power as you can into your strongest blasting spell and then fire it at that snake and blast it out of existence." The other girls nodded in acceptance of the plan. It was a rather flexible one. Turning around, Jean was the first one to react as she unleashed a silvery white 40 feet long dragon that radiated holy energy. Jean then unsheathed her rapier and pointed it at Jorgmund, making the holy sword dragon roar and fly towards it, firing concentrated blasts of holy energy from its mouth. Jorgmund reared back as the blasts hit and roared at the holy dragon before releasing strong torrents of fire towards it. However, Ain stepped up and waved both of her hands in a circular manner, redirecting the torrents of fire back towards Jorgmund. Jorgmund roared in pain at the assault. The trio of girls continued their assault in the same manner until Jorgmund noted the pattern and was now successfully able to dodge a few of the attacks, along with getting in a few hits here and there. It was however at this moment that Roswus shouted at Ain. "Ain-san, my spell is ready, please restrain Jorgmund in one place." "Noted." Ain shouted back as she prepared her spell and shouted, "Crimson Fire Serpent." A gigantic snake made of fire appeared out of a large silver magic circle. The snake hissed before it slithered over towards Jorgmund and tightly wrapped itself around the copy of the Midgard serpent, keeping it stuck in place. Ain then turned to Roswus and yelled, "Now." Nodding, Roswus created a giant silver magic of her own and shouted, "Explosion." The spell completely disintegrated Jorgmund, leaving only his battered remains behind. Nodding to each other at the job well done, both Ain and Roswus landed on the ground. However, they weren't able to exchange any words as Vali and Kirito both crashed into the ground several meters away from them. Loki looked around and heavily scowled when he saw that his pets had already been disposed of. Pointing his hands towards the sky, he realized a gigantic torrent of magic into the air before raining it down onto the group, all the while as he cackled evilly, already imagining how Ragnarok would look like. Battle Viewpoint Part 3. Vali and Kirito vs Loki. "So I am facing this generation's Red Dragon Emperor and the infamous Black Swordsman from the Slavic faction. How fun. You may just make it not boring for me. Keep talking, in the end we shall be the ones who will emerge victorious," Kirito said as he nodded to Vali before dashing towards Loki at high speeds with 2 black blades in his hands. He then swiped his swords downwards towards Loki, who blocked both of his swords with one hand, while his other hand fired of a magical attack at Vali, who immediately boosted his power before punching through the magical attack. Using the excess power collect, Vali made 2 large orbs of red magical and then said, "Oi, get out of the way, giant twin dragon shot." He shouted, releasing both the orbs towards Loki, who had been sent flying towards Vali via a reverse kick to the back from Kirito. Loki however wasn't a god for nothing. He halted himself mid-air before erecting a shield that stopped the two red energy orbs in their path. He then sped up towards Vali and engaged him in hand-to-hand combat, all the while creating a few magical constructs that dealt with Kirito. Vali was currently hard-pressed in keeping up with Loki and decided that it would be best if he started kicking it up a notch. Drake in response silently started boosting up, and 15 boosts later he let the power explode up. Using the new energy, he caught Loki off guard and managed to hit him with a combo of solid impacts, sending him towards a now free and ready Kirito, who swung both of his swords, causing Loki to crash into the ground. "Heh, this is getting interesting, why don't we kick it up a notch, boys?" Loki said before he disappeared and appeared behind the two of them and fired a large torrent of magic, causing both Vali and Kirito to hurtle towards the ground, both of them landing just a few meters from where Ain and the others were waiting. Loki looked around and frowned when he saw that his children and grandchildren were defeated. "Ching, an annoyance," he said. "You're annoying, now I will personally have to kill all of you and bring forth a beautiful Ragnarok," Loki shouted as he pointed both of his hands into the sky and began channeling in a massive amount of magic. Roswice's eyes widened up to epic proportions when she realized what Loki was attempting to do. Loki Sama, don't do it, you will cause the entire dimensional gap to collapse. Roswice shouted out, pleading to Loki to stop. "No. Nothing will stop me from getting my Ragnarok," Loki screamed as he released a colossal amount of magic into the dimension gap. When the wave was over, he maniacally grinned at the fighters below him and said, "Boom." As he finished, waves upon waves of purple lightning fell from the sky and onto the fighters below, causing a massive explosion to fill the area. It took a few minutes for the smoke to clear, revealing that everyone was alive but fairly injured. The only ones capable of continuing the fight were Vali, Ain and Roswice. Ain looked around to her injured peerage members and said, "Ravel darling, as soon as you are done, administer the Phoenix Tears to everyone. In the meantime we will try to buy you more time." Roswice, and how much longer until the Molnja arrives? "It's here now," Roswice answered after a quick check on a magic circle. And true enough, Molnja was seen appearing through a purple magic circle. That's a relief at least. "Ain, Lucifuge and Valkyrie-san, I want you two to keep him busy for just a few moments. I shall have enough energy charge to deliver the final blow," Vali said, getting nods from girls. Vali then said, "The Kuzo Drag. Ao Hybo Welsh Dragon Balance Breaker Drag," roared out. In a flash of red, Vali proudly stood in his scale mail. He then jetted towards Molnja, while Ain closed her eyes and began powering up. In a boom, fire and wind began rotating around her. In a flash, the fire and wind rotated into a huge tornado that was a mixture of the two elements. When the tornado died down, Ain was seen surrounded by an aura of fire and wind. The fire hazing the surrounding area while the wind snapped loudly, giving her a dangerous appearance. Roswice, on the other hand, had readied a very large number of magic circles of various colors, all ready to fire. Princess of Fire, Ain called out her form name before she nodded to Roswice. Roswice, upon receiving the nod, immediately fired of all of the magic circles at the same time, creating an impressive myriad of all sorts of magical attacks. Heavenly Rain. Roswice called out the move's name as the attack flew towards Loki at a very fast pace. The strength and size of the attack even left Loki temporarily shocked, but he regained his wit soon enough and chose to dodge the attack instead of shielding against it. The variety of techniques in that one attack made it practically impossible to shield against. He, however, immediately had to defend against a vicious onslaught from Ain, who was using a mixture of long-ranged fire attacks that had been supplemented with air and close-ranged combat, temporarily keeping Loki on guard. A little distance away, Vali had grabbed Molnja by its handle and mentally said, "Start boosting it, Drag. Boost, 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 transfer. Drake called out, causing Molnja to grow by epic proportions. He then rushed towards Loki, Molnja raised up with both hands ready to strike. Locke's eyes widened when he saw Vali flying towards him with Molnja. Gritting his teeth, he broke Ain's attack down before punching and sending her crashing into Roswice. He then turned his focus back towards Vali, who had begun to swing Molnja towards him. However, before he could even attempt to dodge it, Loki felt something tiltly wrap itself around him, keeping him in place. Looking below, he saw two shadow-like chains coming out from Kirito's blades, keeping him in place. It was then that Molnja hit him, creating a seal that was taking him to a high-security cell in the main prison in Valhalla. "Curse you, Red Dragon Emperor, Fire Princess, curse all of you, you haven't heard the last of me," Loki frantically shouted as he was being transported. As soon as Loki was gone, everyone powered down and plopped onto the ground exhausted. It was then that Issei landed next to the group and limped towards them. "Is everyone okay?" he called out, slightly coughing from his exertion. Ice Kun. Both Jean and Ain yelled as they ran up to hug him. Wincing due to the sudden hug, Issei slowly freed himself from the hug and turned to look at the rest of his peerage members and Roswis. He was happy to note that everyone was alive, if not slightly banged up. Siegfried had a few bruises on his torso while having lost his shirt during the fight. And the way Bova had his hand on his waist told him that several of his ribs were broken. Jean seemed to have a number of burns throughout her body, but was otherwise well and alive. Roswis and Ain had a number of tears and cuts on their dresses and skin respectively, while Ravel seemed to be a bit shaken by the whole thing. Turning his attention to Vali and his team, he saw them slightly groaning and shaking of the effects of the battle that had just taken place. Vali himself had lost his jacket during the battle, and his shirt was torn from several places. His body was also filled with a wide range of bruises and cuts. Kirito had a hand cradled to his chest and was supporting a bleeding lip. "Yo, you look like shit, Vali," Issei said with a small grin on his face. "As if you're one to talk high to, Issei, you look like someone who was sent through the grinder." Vali returned grumpily. "That's because I was sent through a grinder. Riz is not someone to take lightly, and I had to face him all alone. All of you look like shit and had to fight just one opponent while I was solo versus a god," Issei complained before he was forced to go onto his knees as he wheezed and coughed out a little blood. His peerage members and Roswis looked on worriedly but didn't comment as they saw Issei pull out a vial of phoenix tears before drinking them. He sighed in relief as they began to work their way back to his body. "I'm okay now." He placated his peerage as he stood up. "Say, Vali, are you going to come with us?" Issei asked. "No, our temporary alliance ends here. We will be returning to our base," Vali answered as he stood up and turned towards Lefei, nodding towards her to create the transportation circle to take them away. "We'll face each other some other day, hi to Issei," Vali said as he and his team along with Fenrir all walked through the portal towards their headquarters. "Damn, that guy is way too uptight," Issei said with a shake of his head. Turning his head towards Roswis and Kirito, he asked. "Oi, Roswis-san, Kirito-san, are both of you alright?" "I'm okay," Roswis said with a nod. "I've been better," Kirito said as he cradled his arm. "Well, if everyone is ready, let us go back to the underworld," Issei said as he clicked his fingers and created a magic circle that would take them to the main Lucifuge mansion. "Well, now that we are here, I want all of you to rest up. The servants here will give you the proper medical treatment. I, however, will be leaving shortly to give the Mayu-sama a verbal report on the incidents that took place. I want all of you to write a report on each of your point of views before submitting it to me. I will give a compiled version to Suzuchi's-sama in a few days." "Ai-chan, are you coming?" Issei asked. "Yeah, I am coming along. I can tell what happened with Loki while you handled Riz," Ain said as the duo walked out the door. "Oh, Roswis-san, Kirito, please stay with us until your recoveries are complete, be our guests. You can have any rooms that currently are rent occupied," Issei said just as he left, getting nods of affirmation from the two. Appearing in front of an office, Issei knocked the door and waited. The door was almost immediately opened by Grafia, who smiled at the pair before ushering them inside. Inside the room they found a coalition of the leaders of the alliance waiting for them. "Ah, Ice-kun, Ain-chan, I see that all of you were successful in your mission." "You got that right, but I was facing Riz in a separate area, so my report won't exactly have the complete outlook," Issei explained. "That is fine, Issei, please tell us what happened," Azazel said. "Okay then," Issei said as he explained how Riz had challenged him, them going to a separate area to fight, him getting his ass kicked in his simple BXB, matching and even overwhelming Riz with the heavenly azure armor, and finally losing his stamina and then being spared by Riz. As soon as he was done, Ain took over and described the battle she and the others had fought versus Loki. She described in detail the battles that the Lucifuge peerage had taken part in while giving in small snippets of the fights that the Vali team had been involved in. She then explained the attack Loki had launched into the dimensional gap, how it hit them hard, her collaboration with Roswis during the tail end of the fight, and finally how Vali and Kirito teamed up to finally beat Loki once and for all. "I see, good work, though it is still disturbing that Riz actually let you go. I wonder what his angle is in all of this," Suzuchi said thoughtfully. "We can deal with that later. For now, I think it is best for us to move back to our respective factions and address exactly what has happened," Auden said, getting nods of agreement from everyone. As the leaders left, Auden walked up to Issei and said, "Young White Dragon Emperor, may I have a few moments of your time?" "Of course, Auden-sama, how may I help you?" Issei asked respectfully with Ain standing right behind him. "I would like to ask you to add Roswis-chan into your peerage as a personal favor from me," Auden said with a sigh. "I mean no disrespect or offense to you and to Roswis-san's abilities, but why are you asking this of me? Given her skill, wouldn't she been an integral member of your faction?" Issei asked curiously. "Yes, she is immensely talented in magic of all sorts, but that in itself becomes a curse," Auden said warily. What do you mean Odin-sama? Ain asked. Roswis is the granddaughter of my chief Valkyrie Gondel, along with it she is a prodigy in every sense of the word. She blazed through material in days that normally took months to cover, and because of that became the youngest graduate in Valhalla history. This, despite being a massive achievement, also caused her to be shunned by others in her age group. Be it out of jealousy or intimidation I don't know, but because of her success she has no friends. She is also like my own granddaughter, and seeing her struggle through day in day out is like a rusty knife going through my heart. I ask you to take her into your peerage because all of your members are prodigies in their own right. You became a high-class devil just months after your reincarnation. Ain-chan over there is famous all around the world for her mastery in fire. You have the direct descendants of both Jeanne d'Arc and Siegfried, along with the strongest son of a dragon king. In your peerage she will find people who aren't jealous or intimidated by her, and it will give her a chance to actually be normal once in her life. So White Dragon Emperor Kun, what do you say? Odin finished with a tired sigh. I'll be honored to have her in my peerage, Odin-sama. It had been a pleasure to actually get to know her in these past couple of days. Issei said with a nod. That is great to hear. Also I won't really mind if she joins your harem, she does look rather good standing by your side. Ho 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 ho. Odin joyously said as left via magic circle. Issei blushed a bit at implication as he indeed did have a couple of thoughts about Roswis, but ultimately shook his head. He would only involve her with him after she knew the whole situation. Ain caught the look in his eyes and lightly shook her head with a small smile. She liked the fact that he didn't rush into a relationship and actually wanted her permission to add someone to his little harem. She would observe Roswis in the coming days both as a fellow peerage member and maybe a future harem sister. For now though, everyone needed to rest and sleep of the grueling effects of the battle that had just taken place. Filler 2. 1 week later, it was a week after the battle with the evil gods, and the Lucifuge peerage with the addition of Roswis were staying at the Lucifuge mansion in the underworld. Kirito had left to return to the Slavic faction the moment he was declared healthy enough to travel. During the week the group had lazed around focusing on getting back to full strength and on removing any stress. The week was a particularly busy one for Ain, as she was busy explaining Roswis on the ways of how the Devil Society worked, along with trying to slowly make the idea of getting reincarnated as a devil be acceptable. Another thing that she did was notice Roswis' reactions around Issei. She was quite surprised to find that Roswis seemed to have a genuine attraction towards Issei. She would giggle whenever he made a joke and would blush whenever he complimented her on anything or when he specifically made any sexual innuendos. Today was the day that she would confront Roswis on her feelings and would see whether they would change from mere feelings into something special or would just remain to be a one-sided temporary attraction. So while Issei was of taking a dip in the mansion's hot springs, Ain moved towards Roswis' room, keen to get the ball moving. Ain fundamentally was a person who loved to have a big family, and she knew that any girl that Issei would add to his harem would be her sister. Well, she wouldn't let him add anyone out of nowhere. People she approved of like Jean or Ravel, who held a true attraction towards Issei, deserved that opportunity. And she had a gut feeling that Roswis would be among those. Walking to the room where Roswis was currently staying at, she knocked on the door and waited. The door was open a few moments later, with Roswis's look of surprise turning into a smile as she saw Ain on the door. "Ain-chan, come in," she said as he stepped aside. "How can I help you?" Roswis asked after both of them were seated on the bed. "Well, there were two things that I wanted to talk to you about. Firstly, would you be willing to join Issei's peerage?" Ain asked with a smile. "Isn't it normally a king who offers others a spot on their peerages?" Roswis asked as she quirked her eyebrow upwards. "It normally goes that way, but other members of a peerage can scout other people and can even offer them a spot on their master's peerage if they were given permission by their king. Issei-kun did give me permission to offer anyone I deem worthy a spot, and so here we are," Ain answered with a grin. "Ah, I see, and do I qualify?" Roswis asked with a slightly teasing glint in her eyes. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't think you were good enough. So what do you think?" Ain asked with a shrug. "Sure, I'd love to join. I also have nothing better to do since Odin-sama left me here," she finished with a grumble. Despite her anger at being left here, she was inwardly relieved. Her joining this peerage meant staying with people who were as strong as if not stronger than her, taking the intimidation of her talent away. It would also give her a chance to move away from all of those obnoxious stares and would give her the opportunity to finally make friends. She was already making friends with the Lucifuge peerage and hoped that this chance wouldn't be taken from her this soon. "Excellent. Now that the matter of you joining the peerage is out of the way, there is one other topic that we need to discuss," Ain said with a clap of her hand, her face supporting a bright smile. "Oh, what other topic?" Roswis asked as she tilted her head to the side in confusion. "Oh, nothing much, just your feelings about Issei," Ain said nonchalantly, though the glint in her red eyes told that she was anything but nonchalant. "What do you mean?" Roswis managed to stutter out as her cheeks reddened at the abrupt question. It's pretty obvious Roswas-chan, for all his talent, Issei can be very dense unless he is pushed towards a direction in relationships. Hell, he only developed romantic feelings after my older basically locked us in a mansion and had us fight before we admitted to like each other. Poor Jean had been trying to get him notice her and take her to the next base for ages, and he only took the step when I literally pushed him towards a relationship with her. But on the other hand, I, along with everyone else, can easily tell your attraction towards him. So you will need to answer my question. Ain explained easily. Sigh, I like him a lot. More than I have ever liked any other boy. Roswas said as she looked at her lap. Ain moved to sit next to the silver-haired Valkyrie and put a hand on her shoulder and said. You can talk about it, you know, I am a good listener and it's always better to get a load of your chest. Back in Valhalla, I never had any friends as a kid because I was too shy to actually talk to anyone. In the academy, my talent shone through and I quickly passed through the ranks as if they were non-existent. I was a prodigy in magic and battle. That fact alone made others avoid me out of jealousy and intimidation. That continued even when I stepped into the force. I was forced to stand alone and do everything on my own. No one did anything for me. Instead, many tried to sabotage me. During the ball, when Issei-kun intercepted the attack aimed at me, was the first time in my life that someone did something for me. That got me curious about him, and then after seeing him interact with the others and then myself, I couldn't help but start to like him. But the problem is I don't know how to approach him about this. Roswas explained with a sad sigh. Ain had at this point pulled her fellow Silverette into a hug before she let Roswas go and said. Well, those days are over, you'll be a welcome part of our peerage, and everyone here will be a part of your family. As for how to approach Issei, I have the perfect plan for you to follow. Ain finished with a mischievous grin that made Roswas want to run. So here is what you are going to do. Ain said as she explained her plan to Roswas. As Ain finished, she left the room with a cackle while leaving a heavily blushing Roswas in place. With Issei. Issei was currently enjoying a dip in the mansion's hot springs. He was seated at the center of the pool, naked with his eyes closed, enjoying the feeling of the warm water against his skin. This is the life. He mentally moaned in satisfaction. He was brought out of his musings when the door was pushed open. Issei idly looked back before he could stop himself and found himself entranced by the sight of Roswas in only a towel, her hair made into a bun. He, however, caught himself before he could make a fool out of himself and turned away slightly red-faced. Hey, what are you doing here? He asked lamely, trying to get over the awkwardness of the situation. I just came in for a dip before sleeping. You don't have to leave, I'll be done soon. Roswas stuttered out with a blush as she removed her towel and entered the water. Yeah, sure, take your time, there is plenty of space for everyone here. Issei said, not looking back. Roswas sighed to herself before steeling her resolve. The hard part of getting herself here was done, now came the crunch time. Walking, she moved closer to Issei before she leaned forward and wrapped her hands around his neck while pressing her very impressive bust into his back. Issei panicked for a moment before taking a breath to think logically. During the week he had known Roswas, he knew that she was not a blunt person and could be shy when interacting with people on a personal manner. So he knew that she did not plan this on her own. That meant someone had put her up to this, and the only one he knew who was capable of such a feat was his dear Ain-chan. Sigh, that girl would be the death of him. He was very happy that she was now completely out of her shell, but she was very good at getting what she wanted. So Ain-chan got to UCHIHA. Issei said with a small smile as he slightly turned his head to look at Roswas. However, as soon as he saw her blushing face, all thought left his brain as his mind imploded due to her cuteness. Albion had to knock them back into the conversation as he did not want the drama in front of him to end this soon. Yes, she said that this was the best way to tell you how I feel. Roswas whispered back. It was then that Issei finally noticed how her breasts were pressed up to his back. That, along with her warm breath hitting his neck, made him feel slightly aroused. But he immediately pushed his arousal back. This was not the time to be entertaining such thoughts. Oh, and how do you feel? Issei asked curiously. I like you, like really like you. I don't know if it's love or not, but I do feel attracted to you. Roswas whispered, praying for her new bout of confidence to see her through the entire thing. Issei slowly turned around before he wrapped his arms around Roswas's waist and pulled her closer to him. Roswas blushed red at the move, but made no move to disentangle herself from his grip. She knew that he was honorable enough to not do anything untoward. It was then that his icy blue eyes met her stormy gray ones. Roswas felt herself get lost looking into those orbs, but was brought out of her stupor when she heard Issei speak. Well, that's a relief, I like you quite a bit as well. Like you said, I don't really know if what I feel for you is love or not, but I am willing to give us a chance if and only if you want to give us a chance. Issei said softly. Hi, I want to give it a try. Roswas replied just as softly. Issei then smiled at her before pulling her into him completely, their chests smashing together. He then lowered his head and softly placed his lips on hers. Roswice's eyes widened in shock at the kiss, but she soon started kissing back. They broke away after a few moments with Issei wearing a grin while Roswice's face was flushed. Putting his forehead against hers he said, "You know I could get used to this." "Same." Roswice replied as put her head on his chest and cuddled up to him. Issei in response tightened his hold on her and enjoyed the feeling of her wrapped up to his side. The duo stayed like that for half an hour, after which both of them left to go to their rooms. Inside his room he found Aine waiting for him. She had a Cheshire cat-like grin on her face and had a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Judging from the contented sigh you gave, I presume my plan went of without a hitch." "Yes, your plan went of without a hitch. You know you are a cheeky little minx, Aine-chan." Issei said, a sigh and slight shake of the head. Aine grinned before walking up to Issei and wrapping her arms around his neck. She then pecked him on the lips and said, "And don't you pretend that you don't like it." In response, Issei lifted her up in his arms before carrying her to the bed and saying, "Oh, I don't like it, I love it." The two of them heavily made out on the bed before they succumbed to sleep a couple of hours later. The next morning, Issei was seen walking towards Roswice's room. In all of his excitement yesterday, he had forgotten to officially add her as a peerage member. It was only after Aine's timely reminder that he remembered and was now making his way to her. Stopping by her room, he knocked on the door, which was promptly opened by Roswice, whose eyes brightly lit up when she spotted Issei. Grabbing his hand, she pulled him into her room before sitting down on the bed and asking, "Aheo Ice-kun, what can I do for you?" "Well, first things first, I am going to add you to my peerage, you interested?" Issei asked, showing her a white bishop piece. "Of course, I'd love to." Roswice replied, taking the bishop piece from Issei. Nodding with a smile, Issei started the ritual, and a few minutes later Roswice was a proud member of his ever-growing peerage. "Now then, it's time for you to be introduced to the others, come along now," Issei said as he stood up and grabbed Roswice by the hand before leading her outside. "But already know all of the others," Roswice said with a smile as Issei led her around. "You do know them as friendly acquaintances, now you are going to know every one of them as family," Issei said simply before entering the main lounge where the rest of the Lucifuge peerage was lazing around. "Oi, everyone, greet our new peerage member, Roswice," Issei said as he brought Roswice in front of him. "Yo," Siegfried said from where he was sitting. "Finally, I was getting tired of waiting for you to join us, Rose-chan." Jean chirped as she came forward and enthusiastically shook hands with Roswice. "You already know me well enough, Roswice-chan," Aine said as she hugged the Valkyrie before giving her a conspiratorial wink. The wink in itself caused Roswice to chuckle nervously. "It's great to finally meet you as a fellow peerage member, Roswice-sama." "Welcome," Ravel said with an elaborate courtesy. "Greetings, Roswice-sama, I am Bova, son of Tannen, pleased to meet you," Bova said with a bow. "Now then, everything is out of the way, it is time to return to Kuo. Rose-chan, you will probably have to become teacher. You can also become our club's advisor. Aine-chan, can you set everything with Sona?" Issei asked both Aine and Roswice. "Sure. I'd love to. Consider it done," Aine and Roswice said respectively. "Excellent, Ikuzo Mina, we have a lot of requests to go to. We after all are going to be the #1 peerage in the underworld," Issei said as he turned around and walked out. "Yeah," the rest of the peerage shouted out before following him out. Discovery. It had been a month since the Loki debacle, and the Mythological Research Club had settled into a calm state of life. They went to school, did their devil requests after school, all the while having a good stream of training. Roswice had well and truly fit into the Lucifuge peerage. The only significant change that had occurred was that the whole peerage had moved into same house. It was a gift from Surziches to the Lucifuge peerage for their role that they had played in averting away the threat of Loki from the underworld. Issei personally thought that it was unnecessary, but Surziches had been very insistent and refused to take no for an answer. His relationship with all of his girls had been slowly improving. It was living in the same room level with Aine and almost living in the same room with Jean. Roswice and he had gone on a couple of dates and now actively spent time together and freely shared kisses and whatnot. Right now Issei was currently laying awake on his bed as he thought about the rating game tournament that was about to begin. Movement on his left prompted him to come back to the present. Aine woke up with a small smile before she sat up and stretched a little, giving Issei $1 million view that only he was ever lucky to see. She then smiled before leaning down and kissing him on the lips before snuggling into his chest. "Morning, beautiful," Issei whispered into her ear as he ran his fingers through her velvety hair. "Morning. What do you plan on doing today? It is a Sunday after all," Aine asked from his side. "I will be quite busy today. I will be visiting Azazel-sensei to scout the other young devil peerages so that we can make appropriate strategies for the upcoming rating game tournament. What about you, did you have any plan for today?" Issei answered, not letting up on his stroking of her hair. "Nothing special, I guess I will have to make it a ladies get-together. And if you really intend on scouting the competition, you should leave now," Aine said as she sat up and pushed Issei of the bed. Playfully glaring at her, Issei stood up before walking to the bathroom. It took him half an hour to fulfill his morning rituals and get ready. Once out, he left his room and took the elevator to the ground floor, where the rest of the peerage were sitting on the table waiting for breakfast to be served. As today would have it, it was Rosweiss's turn to cook. Kissing Rosweiss and Jean good morning, he sat down and idly began making conversations with others. He however failed to see Ravel sigh sadly before her face once again went back to its usual haughty style. Once breakfast was done, Issei stood up and bid everyone goodbye before he left the house. As he walked, he took out his phone and dialed Azazel's number. "Yo Issei, what can I do for you on this fine Sunday?" Azazel's voice drawled from the receiver. "I wanted to ask if you were free. The rating game tournament is scheduled to begin soon and I wanted to scout the competition so that I have a few plans in place before the game. Can I come over?" Issei asked back. "Yay, come over. I was actually about to bring this topic up with Urias and Sona, but since you asked first, you get my help before everyone else does." Azazel replied. "Awesome, I will be there in 15 minutes. See ya, sensei," Issei said as he ended the call and walked to the closest general store and bought a number of drinks and snacks before he walked to Azazel's apartment. Soon he was at Azazel's apartment, look it. Up from season 1 when Azazel calls Issei for a request. He then knocked the door and waited. The door was opened a few moments and Issei found himself in front of beautiful black-haired girl, his age, with green eyes and body that rivaled Ain's. Her sudden appearance shocked Issei and stunned him for a few minutes. Is this Azazel's place?" Issei asked after he recovered from his shock. The girl rolled her eyes at him before she bent her head backwards and shouted. "Oi, 2-chan, there's some guy at the door asking for you." "That must be Issei, Ami-chan, let him in and bring him to my lab," came Azazel's voice from within the house. The girl motioned for Issei to follow and Issei nodded politely in response before following her. He found that the apartment had been expanded using a mixture of magic and runes while outwardly maintaining the form of a medium-sized place. "My name's Issei," Issei politely greeted. "Yeah, I know about you from Dad. The name's Ambriel." Ambriel answered boredly, causing Issei to shrug at her tone and then quieten down. If she didn't want to make small talk, so why should he make the effort? Soon she dropped Issei in front of her room and left. Issei knocked on said door and was promptly called in. "Yo Issei, how did you find my surprise?" "It was okay, I really didn't know that you had a daughter," Issei said with a shrug and smirk. "Matt's not really a well-known to the other factions outside of the leaders. She also likes to travel a lot and is rarely home. I was really glad when she told me she was going to settle down here for some time. I am contemplating to have her join Kuo for the time being," Azazel said, leading Issei to a table and motioning him to have a seat. "If you want, I can add her into the mythological research club that will at least offer her a small semblance of peace if she ever needs it," Issei offered with a smile, getting a nod from Azazel. "Now then, let us look at the biggest threats you will face during T tournament. It goes without saying that the other 4 supernovas will be the ones you'll need to be wary of. So we will be focusing on them while making a few small notes and annotations on the other peerages," Azazel said, seriously, getting a hum of agreement from Issei. "Well then, now that is out of the way, let us focus on the other supernovas. The first one, and without the doubt the biggest threat, is none other than Saraerg. His power is comparable and in a few cases among the upper echelon of the high-class society, and depending upon any of his hidden cards, he may be in any of the ultimate class levels. His main fighting style is hand-to-hand and power-based. All of his peerage members are fairly balanced when it comes to combat. The long-range ones can handle themselves if they get caught out in a hand-to-hand situation, and vice versa. His peerage consists of Kusha Abaddon, his queen, Karina Andreelfus and Mistita Savnok the bishops, Libran Crisel and Baruka Firk as the knights. And Oma Balam and Ladora Bora the rooks, with an unknown pawn piece that not even his own house knows about. A common feature about his peerage is the fact that they are all members of the extra devil clans or members of extinct pillar houses. Overall, this is the peerage whose power comes close to yours, and the match will be more or less a direct confrontation. Azazel lectured, going through different pictures and footages on Saraerg's peerage. "My draconic side can't help but feel excited, this match will be awesome," Issei muttered excitedly, his heart thumping at the thought of facing someone like Saraerg in the near future. "That's good, but you need to hold your horses for now. Now then, let's move on to Sona." The Citri clan are widely regarded as the smartest folk in the devil community. The only one who can be regarded as smarter than them in the devil society is the Mag Falbium Asmodeus, who is as genius as he is lazy. But we are getting sidetracked. She and her peerage are mainly technical fighters, with the exception of her 2 pawns, Sajijin Shiro and Raruka Nomura. Fighting her with pure power would not only be highly risky, but could cause you to lose the game before it even begins, so you'll have to adjust your fighting strategy on that base. Her peerage consists of Tsubaki Shinra her queen, Momo Hanakai and Ryaku Saka as her bishops, Tomo Meguri as her knight, Tsubasa Yura as her rook, and as I mentioned before Saji Jinshiro and Raruka Nomura as her pawns. Azazel continued the lecture showing Issei the data he had on Sona and her peerage. I guess I will let Ain-chan and Ravel-chan let loose whenever we face her. They will probably love the challenge of meeting and facing a superior strategist. It is going to be a field day for them. Issei said as he finished reviewing the material on Sona and her peerage. Quite so, the next supernova on the list is none other than your former master Ria's Gremory. A few weeks Ria's would have been classed as the weakest of all 5 supernovas individually, but recently she has started learning the Gremory side of her family magic and has had great success making her overall third in the group. The Gremory style of magic deals with teleportation arrays and is very lethal in battle if used correctly. Now her peerage has the second most members. Her queen Akeno Himejima and Bishop Rainer are the biggest threats outside of Ria's herself, with both being very accomplished magic users. Her second bishop Gaspar Valdi has high stats and is dangerous if he gets going. Kibayudo her first knight is a technique type, while her second knight Zenobia Corda is a power-based fighter. She has a soul rook in the form of Kaneko Toju. She has 5 pawn pieces with your old female classmates Murayama and Kadis being technical fighters, while the other Mitsuda, Motohoma and Ken all being power types. Ria's has recently trained them up, and all of them seem to be strong enough to take on middle-class beings on their own. The game with her should be a pretty straightforward one, since she doesn't have any style she specializes in. It's like a jack facing off against a king. Azazel said flipping through slides of Ria's and her peerage. Well, at least it won't be too boring when we actually face her in a game. Was the only thing that Issei said before reviewing some of the papers and notes that he had been given by Azazel. And finally we have Diadera Astaroth. Not much is known about his peerage, except for the fact that it is a complete set and each of his pieces was at one time a member of the church and a blonde. In fact, the last addition to his peerage was around 5 months ago. Azazel said before pausing a bit as Issei had gone still for a moment, his eyes closed as if he were thinking about something. Sensei, who was the last person that Astaroth added to his peerage? Issei calmly asked after a few minutes. This is her, I believe her name is Asia Argento, an exhumated nun of the church. Azazel replied confusedly, not knowing where Issei was going with the current line of questioning. Fucking hell, that stupid son of a bitch, how dare he? How fucking dare he? Issei roared out, his power lashing out. Azazel merely raised his eyebrow at the outburst before he released a portion of his presence, telling Issei to calm down. It would not do for him to destroy his lab after all. Issei swallowed a lump in his throat and took a few calming breaths as he felt Azazel's power. When he had quietened down, Azazel nodded to himself before saying, "Now that you are calm again, can you tell me what was that all about? I buried Asia during the whole Rainer debacle 5 months ago. Somehow that bastard knew exactly where she was buried and got to her. The fact that he knew showed that he was collaborating with Kakabiel and helped him infiltrate Kuo. Not only that he broke protocol by entering a territory of 2 other high-class devils without permission. And the interest he has in church nuns shows that he has had multiple interactions against heaven and the church, who are both our allies." Issei grimly said. That is disturbing and true to an extent, since it would have been impossible for someone of Kakabiel's strength to enter undetected. And the fact that the church exhumated most of his peerage members shows that he was indeed involved in the whole thing. This is very troubling. Azazel agreed with a grimace playing on his face. "I am going, this needs to be talked about with Surziches," Azazel said as he stood up after a few minutes of silence. Issei nodded and followed Azazel into leaving the room. Issei returned to his home and entered the training ground, hoping to work off some of his stress, while Azazel went to Lilith, the city where the mass normally sat. Entering his office, Surziches looked up and raised his eyebrow at Azazel before saying, "Not that I am not glad to see you, but what are you doing here, and that too without any forewarning?" "Seal the door, this is a serious matter," Azazel replied, grimly, causing both Surziches and Grafia to straighten up. When the jovial governor used that tone, it normally was no laughing matter. Surziches nodded and motioned to Grafia, who immediately erected the strongest of her barriers, barring the room from any outside interference. When that was done, Azazel told Surziches everything that he had just discovered. When he was done, all 3 of them had grim looks on their faces. "Well, that certainly narrows down the possibilities of a possible traitor among our peers," Surziches quietly said. "What do you mean?" Azazel asked with a small frown. "I have considered there being a traitor amongst us devils and have been secretly investigating it. From what you told me about Diadera, he just jumped the list and went to the number 1 spot when it came to suspicion. But I can't arrest him without evidence, so we will need to find a way to catch him in the act if he is the traitor," Surziches replied, outlining what he knew and his plan on catching Diadera. "So we are sitting ducks until he is actually found doing something?" Azazel asks forlornly. "Not really, I am setting a trap of my own, if you must know." If all goes according to plan, then the traitor will have been caught during the first week of the junior rating game tournament. UCHIHA said with a smirk. Oh, and what is this plan? Azazel asked curiously, after which the look of curiosity was replaced by a smirk on his face. Well, he should have expected it. Devils were known to be cunning bastards after all, and UCHIHA was the leader of the race. Connection and thoughts. Meanwhile, over at the shopping mall, the females of the UCHIHA peerage were having a quiet bonding day, talking to each other about life and everything that went along with it. Ain during the talk did notice on how Ravel was giving out a sad sigh after every few moments. She also wasn't taking much of a part in the conversation. Ravel-chan, what's wrong? She asked worriedly. It's nothing, Ain-sama. The blonde phoenix muttered as she played with her food. It doesn't look like nothing, and I told you to call me Chan when we rent in a formal setting. And we currently are in a formal setting. Ain said. Alright. It's just that I feel that I have not made any progress with Issei-sama. I know I have your blessing, but he doesn't seem to be as interested in me as he does to you. So I feel that I am currently walking down the path of heartbreak. Ravel muttered, looking down to her lap. Hearing that, Ain's face contorted into a vulpine smirk. She loved playing matchmaker, and she knew that Ravel held genuine affection, so who was she to stand in the way? And the addition would in a way complete the current set with 2 blondes and 2 silverettes. Oh, he is attracted to you, alright. Otherwise he wouldn't have added you into his peerage. Do not fret, Ravel-chan, I shall talk to Issei about this as soon as possible. Ain said, with Roswis and Jean nodding along with her. Thank you. Ravel said with a watery smile as she looked at her fellow peerage. After that moment, Ravel took a more active part in the conversation and seemed to look a lot lighter than before. It wasn't long after this that the girls decided to return to the mansion and see if the others had returned. What they found surprised them to the core as they witnessed Issei locked in a 2-on-1 battle versus Siegfried and Bova. Issei was using only his draconic form, while Siegfried had 2 swords out. Sensing the arrival of the rest of their peerage members, Issei signaled the others to stop before he grabbed a towel and turned to the others before saying, "Yo, you guys back then?" "We are, but what exactly is happening here?" Ain asked as she placed her hands on her hips. "I received a bit of news that caused me to get angry and frustrated. The 2-on-1 spar was a way for me to lose it a bit," Issei said as he walked out of the room, not paying attention to the others. "What's wrong with Issei? I have never seen him act like this before," Roswis worriedly asked. "Neither have I," Ain admitted forlornly as he chewed her lip. "I am not surprised about that. This is a childhood habit of Issei's. If something emotional affects him, he broods until he can do something about it. You can expect him to keep the same attitude in the coming days. It will probably stay until he can get to the bottom of whatever is bothering him," Siegfried lazily said as he put on his shirt. "And how do you know that, Siegfried-sama?" Ravel asked. "Quit it with the sama, Firebird. As for how I know, both of us grew up together until we were 9. We know and understand each other a lot better than we give each other credit for. I will ask all of you to leave him be. His anger is still simmering, and I don't want him to feel guilt over blowing up on you guys if you couldn't control your questioning," Siegfried said before walking out of the room with Bova closely following after him. "So what do you think we should do, Ain-chan, Roswis-chan?" Jean asked. "I think it would be best to give Issei the space that he needs. Whatever is on his mind must be heavily weighing down on him," Roswis said with Ain only slightly nodding along. Back in Issei's room. Just as Issei entered his bathtub to enjoy a short dip, a communication circle formed itself around his ear. Raising his eyebrow at the circle, Issei saw that it was a call from Azazel and promptly accepted the call. "What's up, sensei?" Issei asked. "UCHIHA and I have worked out a plan of action to deal with the new problem. Turns out he was already having a few suspects on a possible traitor among the devils. Your information was just a mere confirmation," Azazel informed Issei before going silent as he let Issei process the new information. "Okay, so what is the actual plan?" Issei asked after a few moments. "We will be setting a trap within a trap. A spy of mine informed me that the old Mag faction will be making a final bid for power soon, and said bid will happen during the raiding. Aim between Rias and Diadera. We believe that he will provide the old Mag faction the gateway that they need in order to enter the realm. The plan will be simple: to have you and Auden step in the moment the army invades, while Rias goes forward to face Diadera. After you are done, you will need to go and give Rias Pskup. Is the plan agreeable?" Azazel asked. Issei initially wanted to protest against working with Rias, but stopped as he knew that given his current position, he couldn't be petulant and would need to put his differences away. With that in mind, he nodded, letting Azazel know that he was in. Smiling in return, Azazel bid him a dough before cutting the communication circle off. Sighing, Issei leaned back and closed his eyes, enjoying the temporary soothing that the hot water brought him. After an hour of soaking, he stood up and wiped himself dry and changed into comfortable house clothes, after which he walked to the lounge, hoping to watch some TV to relax. Fortunately he found the TV room to be empty and promptly sat down and turned on the TV to find the latest updates from the sports world. Even during his early days as a super pervert, watching and following sports was something nearly as important as boobs themselves. Even though he had lost a lot of his earlier perversion, his interest in sports hadn't dwindled one bit. Finding the final for the 2017 Wimbledon final, he grinned as he saw his favorite player Roger Federer dominating the match and leaned back watching contentedly. Soon he was lost to his surroundings, completely immersed in the match. It was a few minutes later that Aine entered the room with a curious look on her face. She gave a small smile as she watched Issei enjoy the match and looking a little carefree. Deciding to join him, she made way before she was directly standing behind him. Bending down, she wrapped her arms around his neck and leaned into him, causing Issei to give a happy sigh. "Hey Aine-chan, how was your day out?" Issei asked after a few moments of silence. "It went fair enough, what about yours? Did something happen? You were after all quite agitated when you got back home." Aine asked lightly. It started ordinarily enough. Met Azazel-sensei and his daughter, had a good discussion with him about the upcoming tournament, only to find a potential spy. After that I came here and Azazel-sensei went here to Surzich's and Nikki to tell him what he found. He responded just as lightly, though his body did tense up a tad bit. That doesn't seem to be the type of news that would cause such a reaction with you. What else is there? She asked innocently. I am really sorry Aine-chan, but I can't tell it to you right now, not when everything about it is as murky as a swamp. I need some personal clarity before I can even bring myself to tell it to everyone. Issei replied in a firm tone that left room for no arguments. But would you at least tell me about it when everything clears up? Aine asked quietly, accepting that she wasn't going to get any answer from Issei at this very moment. It depends Aine-chan, it depends. I will eventually share it with you, but not anytime soon. It may even take a few years. Some scars run a little deeper than your regular ones. Issei honestly replied. I understand that more than anyone Ice-kun. And along with it I really hope that you would one day trust me enough to tell me everything. Aine said as she tightened her hold on him. It's not about trust Aine-chan, it's more about how frightening the world around us really is, and how ignorance for some really is bliss. Issei said quietly, having a rather faraway and pained look in his eyes. Aine, sensing the pain from him, moved until she was sitting right next to him. She then wrapped both of her arms around him and cuddled into him, offering him comfort. Hey, whatever it is, I am sure that we will come out of it victory. You are not alone Issei, you have me, Raswas-chan, Ravel-chan, Jin-chan, Seed-kun and Bova-chan. All of us are with you until the end. Issei in response simply tightened his hold on her and pulled her completely on him. He felt a lot lighter, her words acting as rays of light that penetrated through the dark lights, showing off the beginning of a new and beautiful horizon. The next morning. It was another day at school, and Issei was boredly looking at the blackboard, completely ignoring as the teacher droned on and on about something inconsequential. Beside him, both Jin and Aine were not only dutifully taking down notes, but were also scowling at Issei due to his utter lack of interest in class. Suddenly the door was pulled open and Sona walked in. She walked up to the teacher and leaned in to whisper something in her ear. The teacher's eyes widened for a moment, after which they glazed a bit before she nodded at Sona. Sona stepped back and gave a short bow before she abruptly turned around and left the room. The teacher cleared her throat and said, Everyone, we will be having a new transfer student. She arrived a bit late due to a few technical difficulties. You can come in now. The door opened and Ambriel walked in, immediately stealing the attention of nearly everyone in the class. After all, it wasn't every day that a girl who could match Aine's beauty would transfer into their class. Ambriel herself was carrying herself with an air of aloofness. Her shirt was untucked and further tied together by its edges, showing of her impressive and smooth stomach while she boredly chewed on a bubblegum. Please introduce yourself to the class. The teacher politely instructed. Sure, the name's Ambriel Azram, I am from Eastern Europe and recently moved to Japan with my dad. Nice to meet all of you. Ambriel boredly said. The class was dumbfounded by the introduction, and the room was soon encased by an awkward silence. The silence was then broken by the excited chatter from both the boys and the girls. It continued until the teacher looked to Issei, who nodded before putting two of his fingers in his mouth and then blowing out a loud whistle. The whistle immediately caused a ruckus to stop, with everyone looking at Issei irritatedly. Thank you for that, Haidu. Now everyone, that is not a good way to create the first impression. Anyway, Azram-san, please take a seat in front of Haidu. He will also show you around the school after the day is over. She finished, looking towards Issei, who nodded his consent. Sure, whatever. Ambriel said lazily before she walked over to her seat and sat down and began looking out the window. And with that, the only interesting moment of the day passed and we soon find ourselves at the end of the school day. Issei kissed Aine and Jean goodbye before he walked over to the still sitting Ambriel and asked. So ready for the tour? Let's just get this over with. Ambriel said with a sigh as she stood up. Shrugging, Issei began leading her to the important places in the school. This included the classrooms, the staff room, the student council room, the cafeteria, and finally the club rooms. The last spot of the day was the mythological research club. Once they arrived there, he turned to her and asked, "Do you want to join my club?" "And why would I do that?" she asked with a raised eyebrow. "Well, considering that you are a supernatural, you can only join 3 clubs. One of them is the Occult Research Club led by Ria's Gremory, the second is led by Sona Citri, and is the Student Council. Well, this one is mine." Ria's has shown that she can disregard the general welfare of others to meet her own ends, while Sona is a stickler for the rules. "Given my relationship with your father, you can guess the type of guy I am," Issei said, finishing with a lazy grin. "Alright then, I will join your club, but don't think for a moment that I will join your peerage," she finished seriously. "Do not worry about that, I never had any intention of adding you to my peerage in the first place," Issei said with a shrug. "Oh, and why is that? Aren't I good enough to qualify for it?" she asked mildly. "Not at all. For one, I don't even know the abilities that you have or use, and second of all, I respect Azazel Sensei way too much to do something as personal as making you my servant. If it ever comes down to it, it will only happen when there is a seal of approval from both you and Azazel Sensei," Issei said with a shrug as he led Ambriel inside. His answer had caused her to go into her thoughts, which is why she did not notice when the two of them had reached the main club room, where the other members were currently lounging about. Issei then cleared his throat and said, "Everyone, this is Ambriel, Azazel Sensei's daughter. She will be joining the club for a while. Ambriel, this is everyone. I hope all of you can get along." And with that, Issei let the others to mingle with each other as he sat down and thought over the happenings that would occur in the upcoming days. Soon he'd face Diadera and find out exactly what had happened to Asia. And if Asia could be rescued. He, however, was not holding much hope in that line of thought. Spending months under a creature of lust would change anyone, and given her possible condition, Issei wondered if death would be a better option. With those thoughts in mind, Issei stared ahead, mentally readying himself. "Bang, that's it for the chap. Hope you liked it. I apologize for the delay, but my university is more demanding than ever, and I hardly found time to write, read and review. Things are finally starting to heat up, and we will soon be done with Diadera's arc. Soon to come Kyoto arc. Action. Now that I think about it, this looks like a really bad idea," Issei calmly said as he sat in the VIP section of the rating game arena with Auden and Ambriel. "You worry too much, boyo. It seems you haven't had any for quite a while," Auden said with a perverted chortle. "Again, how does that even fit in with the logic of what I just said?" Issei asked back easily. "If you don't even know the answer to that question, then you don't deserve to be called my apprentice," Auden said with a grin. "And when did I become your apprentice, and what exactly did you agree to teach me?" Issei replied boredly. Ambriel was fighting back a grin. The banter between the White Dragon Emperor and the ancient All-Father was amusing to say the least. "I agreed to teach you the most ancient and noble art of understanding women," Auden proudly exclaimed. "And you claim to know how a woman's brain works?" Issei speculatively asked. "Yup," came the swift reply. "I sincerely doubt that," Issei said with a shrug, with a disbelieving expression on his face. "And why is that?" Auden asked challengingly. "Because if what Rose-chan tells me about you and Freya-sama," Issei trailed off with a smirk, causing Auden's grin to falter. It was known all around Asgard that the chief Valkyrie was the only one who could control his perverted habits, and if Roswis told it to Issei, his reputation was on the virtual cusp of oblivion. It seems like I need to give Roswis-chan a stern spanking for spreading around untrue rumors," Auden said in an attempted stern voice. "You do know that makes you a pedophile along with a pervert, right? Cause Rose-chan is around just a 1/1000th your age," Issei deadpanned at Auden. Auden in response grumbled good-naturedly about annoying smartest youngsters who did not have an ounce of respect for their elders. However, it is at this time that he noticed a subtle arrival of the old Mao faction soldiers just behind the arrival of the Astarath heir Diadera. He had to admit that their concealment spell was a rather good one. "Well, it seems that the party is about to begin. Who goes in first?" Issei asked blandly as he released the divine dividing and promptly entered his balance breaker. Ambriel too stretched her arms a bit and released her 4 pairs of falling wings, showing off that she could hardly be called a weak fighter. "Well, I'll go in first and open the path for you two youngsters to enter. The fray," Auden said as he teleported down just as Diadera allowed entry to the Cows Brigade before flashing away. Down in the battlefield. Young girls these days really are the best," Auden casually commented as he raised Akeno's skirt and looked at her panty-clad bum. Akeno gave a small eat before jumping aside while placing her hands on her bum. "Auden-sama, what are you doing here?" Rias asked, hiding the bit of annoyance that she felt. "Well, I am sure Surziches will explain it all to you later on, but for now you need to leave. I will take care of all the matters." "Though where did that young Astarath go to?" he asked her. "He went to that white castle over there," Ria said, pointing towards the castle in question. Jolly good, why don't you go now, everything will be explained shortly. Auden said, making Ria's nod before creating a magic transportation circle and leaving along with her peerage. Auden then looked over at the now wary looking old Mao faction army and shouted out a taunt. Oi oi, don't get afraid now, don't you children want a piece of eternal glory that will come if you manage to beat me? This taunt seemed to have its intended purpose, as the army gave a loud war cry before charging at Auden, who merely smirked and bought out his spear gunner and fired a large torrent of wind at the attacking army, cutting down a fair amount of enemies whilst leaving the others in disarray. Back to the VIP room. Well, looks like it's our turn next. Issei idly commented after watching Auden's attack. Yup. Though I have to ask, where are the rest of your peerage members? Ambriel asked curiously. All of them are stationed around different areas in the underworld. They are under the command of several ultimate class generals, so it should work out. Issei replied casually. Aren't you even a little bit worried about what could happen to them? Ambriel asked, a slight coldness seeping into her tone. Oh, I am absolutely terrified, but in the end I chose to have faith in not only them, but also in their abilities. All of us trained together, and I know it wouldn't be respectful if I doubted their training. Now let us leave. Issei firmly answered before jumping out the VIP room and flying straight towards the army. Ambriel, who was surprised at his reasonings, quickly shook her head and flew after him. Her reservations towards him and his peerage were slowly but surely thawing away, and she was hesitatingly playing with idea of joining his peerage. However, she quickly put an end to that line of thought. Not only did she prefer to stay alone for most of the time, but she now had a battle to take part in. Back to the battlefield. Before the army could regroup, Issei appeared right in the midst of them and shouted. Half dimension. Albion soon followed up with a shout of half dimension. As he said that, the space around the soldiers started constricting unto itself, tightening the area and squeezing all of the old Mao devil soldiers to shout in pain as they felt themselves get crushed. It was then that Ambriel appeared, all 8 of her wings on display. With a small grunt, she created a monstrous amount of light arrows and then pointed them at the now restrained old Mao soldiers. Divine Rain. She called out her attack name as the arrows impaled the soldiers, instantly killing them due to the potency they held. Issei whistled appreciatively at the sight before turning to Ambriel and saying, "You know, we should spar sometime." "Maybe, you sure you can handle me, Yuki-kun?" Ambriel asked back teasingly. Issei was surprised by the new sight Ambriel, but inwardly shrugged and decided not to make a big deal out of it. He looked at Ambriel with a smirk. "Oi oi, don't you think you are underestimating what I can do after all that I have achieved? And Yuki? Really?" He finished with a small tilt of his head. "It's not underestimation if you don't know how strong I am. And yes, Yuki. You are a nice Drake, aren't you? So yes, Yuki." She finished with a triumphant look on her face. "Heh, it does make quite a bit of sense," Issei said as he rubbed his chin. "Though that does mean that I now need to give you a nickname as well." He finished with a grin. However, before Ambriel could reply, Auden cleared his throat and with a smirk said, "The two of you can flirt later on. For now we need to not only wind up this army, but also take care of the traitor who has taken refuge at the castle over there. Hey, you should know it better than anyone, old man. Every place is the place for a flirt, you just have to be good at that. And as for the traitor, can you take care of things here? I want to be the one who brings him down," Issei said, finishing with a slight growl. "Well said, and yes, we can handle things here. Get going," Auden said as Ambriel nodded her head in agreement. That was all the incentive that Issei needed as he promptly turned towards the castle and jetted away. "I wonder what's plaguing his mind," Ambriel muttered to herself as she watched Issei fly away. "Whatever it may be, I am positive that he will be able to overcome it. You can't be someone who can fight of a god and come back alive with a weak resolve," Auden said in a wise voice before turning back to the rest of the army. As he was finishing things up, he created a magical circle to let Azazel know of the latest developments to take place. With Azazel, Surziches and Ain, things were just as chaotic in this area as it were with Auden's group. Only this time it was much more chaotic, since one of the old Mao leaders were leading the side. As Azazel lazily flicked away at the small fry soldiers, a communication circle appeared right next to his ear. Recognizing the symbol to be the one Auden uses, he accepted the call and asked, "Yo, you old fart, how's everything going on your end of the board?" Azazel asked him. "We are almost clear here, you brat. Your daughter is quite the fighter. Also, the White Dragon Emperor brat has gone off to face the traitor. What about your end?" Auden said as he finished the report and asked for Azazel's side of things. "Oh, it's still going on over here. We are waiting for the general over here to appear, he still hasn't come through," Azazel replied back. "Alright, I'll leave you to it," Auden said before he cut down the call. "Whatever, you geezer," Azazel muttered as he killed a number of low-class soldiers. He was brought out of his musings when Ain and Surziches joined him. "Who was that, Azazel?" Surziches asked. "Auden's group, they have apparently taken control over their area," Azazel replied. "Are Ice Kun and Ambriel channel right?" Ain asked before Surziches could make any more inquiries. Yeah, both of them are fine. Ambriel-chan and Auden are winding up the few remnants of the army over at their area, while Issei has gone on to find Diadera and deal with him. Azazel answered. Will he be okay on his own? She worriedly asked Azazel. He will be fine. Issei is after all someone who thrives in a pressure situation and in the end always comes out on top. Surziches said, getting a small nod from Ain. Any further conversation was cut down when Crusory Asmodeus appeared before the trio, all the while glaring down at them. And finally the man of the hour shows up, one of the masterminds himself. Azazel commented jovially. I am the true descendant of Asmodeus, Crusory Asmodeus, Crusory said with a sneer stuck on his face. Crusory had the appearance of a good-looking nobleman wearing the clothes befitting his noble looks. His clothes were black with dark red belts and motifs, along with a black cape. He had black that were hair tied up in a small ponytail and violet eyes that glinted maliciously. The final notable feature of his pointy ears and pale skin. Before any of them could reply, Crusory continued with high vitriol. As a member of the true Satan faction, I will avenge Kateria Leviathan, he said as he pulled his fist up in front of him. Using the power received from Office, a magical crest with purple light infinite symbol that appeared on his palm, we will destroy this world and create new worlds for devils. Azazel smiled and was ready to fight him only to stop when another person appeared in front of him. Surziches. Surziches looked at one of the leaders of the old Satan faction. He had a smile on his face, and it was hard to guess what was going on in his head. Crusory, who looked at Surziches and with a snarl said, you damned an artificial existence. The smile on Surziches' face drained down until only a blank visage. Crusory, for the devils to continue their existence, a war in the underworld, an unnecessary burden that will result in our extinction, it is time to stop this petty agenda. Crusory's face reddened with rage, and he snarled, a bastard who deals not only with a fallen angel, but the angel themselves, has no right to speak as a devil, you dare call our noble cause petty? Such a slight will not go unanswered. Well, I don't even want to hear from anyone who enters a happy-go-lucky misfit. Like the Cows Brigade, Ain said derisively, she found all of the old Maywares to be stuck idiots with no common sense. Misfit. You have misunderstood, there is someone who you shouldn't provoke there, and where is the family loyalty, Ain Lucifuge? After all, your brother sports the old Mayu faction, just like the current Lord Lucifer Rizvium. Crusory said with a smug smile. Azazel and Surziches were startled, but they didn't show it on their expression. They were wondering who this person that Crusory talked about. Ain, however, had gone pale-faced. The fact that Crusory had mentioned her brothers in the present tense gave off warning spells in her mind. However, she put that thought process on hold. She would talk to her sister after this battle was done with. Crusory still remembered him and said, your peace won't last long. We will destroy this world and the ones beyond the scope of this realm. Fed up, Surziches decided that it was now enough and flew towards Crusory, firing a blast of the power of destruction as he did so. Crusory hastily dodged before he looked over at Surziches, who now had his leader face on. Crusory, as a great devil king, I will eliminate everyone who is against the current underworld. He raised his hand and the red blackish sphere appeared in his palm. He then calmly threw it at Crusory and was enlarging itself as it flew. Soon it had engulfed Crusory and was destroying his very being. This. Crusory said as his hands and feet started to vanish. He looked at Surziches and Azazel with a furious gaze and desperately shouted. First the Red Dragon Emperor volley Lucifer, and now you, why do the ones with power oppose us? Surziches. He screamed as he was completely engulfed by the power of destruction before he wilted away into nothingness. You know, you could have easily taken him in and found out about most of the bullshit that he was spouting out. Azazel commented as he floated up to Surziches' level. True, but if what he said about the leader is true, then we will meet him at one point or the other. I am more worried about his statement on the loyalties of the Lucifer clan. It seems I will have to pay old Rizvium a visit. Surziches said, getting a nod of agreement from Azazel. Nice Sama, if everything is done, can I go back home? Ain asked in a slightly subdued voice. Not knowing the reason for the change, but understanding it nonetheless, Surziches nodded and said. You may go, Ain-chan, I will send Issei back as soon as he is done. Ain nodded gratefully before she activated a transportation circle and left. Revelation. As Issei flew towards the castle where Diadera was holed up, he started to mentally prepare himself. He knew that the sight he would find in that castle wouldn't be a pleasing one, and mentally prepared himself for the worst of scenarios to ensure that he didn't lose control and accidentally activate the Juggernaut drive. Start channeling both of your powers as well, Diadera. Even with Office's boost won't be strong enough to force you into using Balance Breaker. Albion mentally said as Issei nodded and began channeling both his power of destruction and ice magic. Channeling the ice magic into his left hand while send the power of destruction into right hand. Soon he was in front of the castle doors, and this position itself placed Issei in a conundrum. Should he enter in a civilized manner that befitted his position in society, or should he just go dragon and enter how he felt like at the moment? After a few minutes of contemplation, Issei decided to go with the flow and with a shrug kicked the doors open, causing them to fly off their hinges and into the walls opposing them. Entering the castle, he quietly surveyed his surroundings and was slightly surprised to find that there were no immediate threats. A magical screen appeared in front him. In the screen was a sight that made Issei's blood boil. Daidara was roughly mouth-fucking Asia as he maniacally grinned at Issei. "Ah, the White Dragon Emperor, I was expecting you. I have really wanted to meet you in person with no masks in place." He greeted casually, but the way his eyes glinted maliciously along with the rough movement of his hips contrasted greatly with the tune. Pushing his anger back through sheer force, Issei calmly asked, "Oh, were you? Yes, you see, it was only because of you that I was finally able to get my Asia. All of those years of planning and preparing were definitely worth it, since she has proven herself to be worth all of it." Daidara finished with a rather harsh thrust into Asia's mouth, causing her to gag. "What plan?" Issei all but growled out. "My plan to get Asia-chan. You see, the moment I first saw her in the Vatican, the first knew that she would be my ultimate prize. You see, it was I who scouted her special abilities, it was I who set up the incident in which she healed me, it was I who leaked information to the Vatican that she healed a devil, I was the one who engineered her banishing from the Vatican, it was my contact who got her to rogue Excarists, who then sent her to Kuo, under the fallen angels who I helped getting into that wretched city. And it was I who waited in the background as you had your pathetic moment and then burying her. It was I who dug her back out and reincarnated her. The look on her face when I told her everything was delicious," Daidara said with a maddening laugh. The anger Issei had been pushing down had in one blow exploded outwards, however his calm expression had not changed. Issei's blue eyes were now glowing icily with a light blue aura simmering around him. "You better run now, little devil, it will be hell for you if I get my hands on you," Issei said, his voice slightly draconic. Not so fast, you know how the story goes, I am on the top floor, if you want to kill me come and get me, but I assure you it will not be easy," Daidara said before he ended the holographic spell. Issei then took a deep breath before walking forward. He was finding it very hard to control his anger, and that was evident by the fact that the ground was beginning to freeze with every step that he took. He put his hand outwards and bawled out, "Durandal, today was not the day he would hold back," and for the very first time since he became a dragon, he decided to give in to his instincts and feed the constant bloodlust in his aura. Walking towards the next floor, he crashed open the door and walked into the room, only to be faced by 10 hooded figures. "Do not proceed any further, if you do we will be forced to kill you," one of the robed figures said. "Let me explain to you in the easiest words possible, I have had a very bad day, and my anger levels are off the charts. If you want to see another sunrise or sunset in your lives, then I suggest that all of you run. Run away and don't look back, because if you do, the only thing you will see is your death," Issei said coldly, not at all in the mood of bantering. The only reply he received was the charging of 2 of the robed figures. Issei dodged the attacks flawlessly before his free hand grabbed one of the figures while he channeled Durandal's aura and swung it at the other figure, causing the figure to scream as she crashed into the wall, screaming in agony as the holy aura from sword slowly began killing her from within. He then thrust the second one onto the floor, causing it to slightly crack, after which he released the power of destruction and let it destroy the very being of the second girl. With the 2 attackers dead, he stood up and stared at the remaining 8 with a cold and emotionless gaze. "I hope you are ready, for you have chosen death," Issei said before he charged at the group. What followed could only be described as a one-way slaughter. Previous Issei was more than content to let his opponents die rather painlessly, but today he was making sure that the screams of agony from all of his victims would reach the top floor. He broke bones, stomped body parts into a gory pulp, cut off body parts before utterly destroying his opponents into nothingness, watching emotionlessly as the life left his enemies, leaving behind only a horror-filled look that was replaced by dust after the power of destruction was done with them. As he finished, he was completely covered in his opponent's blood that, along with his glowing blue eyes, made him to be quite the intimidating sight. With the room cleared, he moved to the next one, only to come across what in the simplest of words was an abomination. Big and brown with a crazed look in his eyes with 4 arms was one Fried Selzen. "Why do you keep showing up wherever I go?" Issei asked him with a raised brow. "It's because it's fate, Issei-kun, it's because it's fate. Not only that, it looks like you are embracing your inner killer. It won't be long until you become just like me," Fried said with a mad grin. Issei fixed him with an unimpressed look and said, "I am predominantly a dragon, having bloody fight sort of. Hums with the job description. And besides, I can't become a killer since I am already one, or did you forget about the armies I have already laid to waste? That aside, why do you look like Hulk in The Thing had sex? Oh, this. I just raped, killed and then ate the dead flesh of my employer's rooks and knights. I obviously got quite a boost in my abilities from that. was Fried's answer. I see, let us begin them, shall we? Issei asked, to which in response Fried just free charged at Issei. Issei calmly dodged all of the attempted hits, making Fried growl in anger and irritation. Stay still so that I can hit you, Issei-kun, you freely dodging is making it boring for me. Issei in response flipped Fried the bird before he went on the offensive and in a high-speed move slashed at Fried, making several harmless-looking cuts appear all over Fried's chimeric-like body. Ah, Issei-kun, you will have to do better than that if you wish to cause me harm. Fried cackled madly. Wait for it. Issei said with a smirk, and suddenly Fried's body exploded with pain with each of the cuts, having a slight golden glint and spewing out blood in a continuous flow. You bastard, what did you do to me? Fried all but growled at Issei, his previous crazed attitude all but gone. You became the abomination that you are after you ate the raw flesh of devils. That fact made you partially demonic yourself. Durandal is the strongest holy blade there is. With every cut I made on that pathetic body of yours, I released a mixture of light and the power of destruction into you. After the light already inside of you was consumed, the rest of you was easy prey. Now hurry it up, I have another room to clear. Issei explained in irritating drawl. Fried's eyes bulged in anger and let out a bestial cry and charged at Issei, who ducked under the punch and then used his left hand and grabbed Fried by the neck before pushing him into the wall. Glaring at Fried coldly, he released raw power of destruction directly into Fried's body, causing him to scream in agony as he disintegrated into nothingness. Once he was done, he turned around and walked towards the final room where he knew Daidara would be waiting. He once again stopped and mentally calmed himself with a deep breath. He knew he may have to kill Asia and could not afford to let a moment of weakness affect him. He might have loved Asia at one point, but that was in the past. He had new precious ones in his life, and they came before anything else. Walking to the last door, he found himself in a throne room. Daidara was sitting on the throne, a smug look on his face. Asia, however, was nowhere to be found. Where's Asia? Wouldn't you like to know, my dear dragon? However, before what will be a very touching reunion, why don't we talk a bit and get to know each other even more than before? I will even tell you what I did to dear old Asia after I reincarnated her. Daidara said with a mild laugh, his previous madness nowhere near in sight. If the situation wasn't as grave as it was, and Issei himself wasn't covered from head to toe with the blood of his enemies, he would have commented on how Daidara could make quite a bit of a name being an actor. Do go on then, I don't have all day. Issei said stoically, since he knew giving his raging emotions even a small bit of room would cause to go ballistic. Well, after I reincarnated my dear Asia, she thought that her idea of the afterlife. It was amusing, really. I took her to my private quarters in the underworld, where my first course of action was to rape her in every position I could possibly imagine. It was rather interesting to see how she would cry out to you, hoping beyond hope that you would come save her. Let me tell you, it took me quite a bit of time to disabuse her of that hope. Once she was completely and utterly broken, I trained her to be an assassin, something she became quite proficient in. I am sure you will find about that right about now. Daidara finished cruelly as Issei's eyes widened as he shifted slightly, causing a knife to miss his spine as it pierced his back. Looking behind him, he saw Asia glaring at him with a crazed and broken look in her eyes. At that moment, Issei knew that this Asia wasn't his, and getting her back was close to an impossibility. He decided then and there to kill her, so as to give her the peace that she so rightly deserved. Without much thought, he tightly swung his fist at Asia, who jumped to Issei's front in order to dodge it. She then removed a couple of daggers and then charged at Issei, who calmly dodged all of the attacks without much any sort of conscious effort. Sighing, he decided to finally end things. In a flash, he thrust Durandal right down the middle, stabbing Asia in the stomach violently, making the sword pierce through her completely. Looking deep into her eyes, his voice full of somber sadness, he said, I am sorry, Asia, I hope you will find peace on the other side. Mass extinction. He finished calling out a new move he had been making for Durandal. Though the current version was a very toned down version of the technique. Durandal then began to glow, its holy energy irradiating strongly as it began to encase Asia. Asia, despite being in immense pain, did not scream out. Instead, she was oddly silent. Just before the light completely engulfed her, she gave a very small smile before closing her eyes and letting herself go. Issei, however, wasn't able to see the smile since he had his eyes firmly shut. He couldn't bring himself to see the life leaving his first friend and love interest's eyes all over again, even more so when he knew that it was because of him that she had suffered for quite a bit of months. Once the light had faded, there was no sign of Asia, and only Durandal could be seen in the place where she had been stabbed. Opening his eyes, he turned to Daidara, was frothing in anger at Issei. You filthy dragon, what did you do? You took away my most prized possession after I was all he could say before a fist made contact with his face, sending him flying through the walls of the room into another wing of the castle. Sending Durandal back to the warp dimension, Issei calmly walked towards Daidara, cracking his fists as he did so. Since we have spent quite a bit of time getting to know each other, with you doing most of the talking. But me, I am a man of few words, so I will tell you that you shouldn't nose into matters that don't concern you, and 2, I'll let my fists do the talking with you. Issei said as he launched himself at Diadera, who hastily managed to create a green barrier in front of him that stilled Issei, who was looking at the barrier with a small frown on his face. You see, you filth, you can't match. Diadera started to say, only for the barrier to start freezing. Once a sizable amount had been frozen, Issei punched through it and in a flash was right in front of Diadera. Ice Dragon Emperor's Iron Claw. Diadera flew into the wall, but before he could rest, Issei was once again in front of him as he called out. Ice Dragon Emperor's Blizzard Bite Barrage. He finished as he started barrage punching Diadera in the chest, with each punch pushing him deeper and deeper into the cratering wall. After a few moments of punching, Issei pulled back before hitting Diadera with a right hook, causing him to move to the right while being embedded in the wall. As soon as he stopped moving, he fell down on the ground, bleeding from several places on his chest and stomach. Weakly looking up, he spit out a glob of blood from his mouth and looked at Issei and asked, "How are you this strong? Why doesn't the poison from that dagger earlier even slightly affect you? It was specifically made to attack dragons. How are you still standing? You should have been long dead by now." "Well, Dio-chan, that is a secret for me to know and you to never find out. And as for how I am this strong, well, there is a reason they say to never tickle a sleeping dragon in the eye, or to the most foolish thing to do is to anger a dragon. We are rather emotional beings and hence are empowered by emotions. Your actions and further attempts at taunting me brought out your own demise. Now then, say goodbye," Issei said with a growl as he lifted Diadera by the throat before throwing him into the air. Ice Dragon Emperor's Roar. Issei said, firing a huge torrent of ice at Diadera from his mouth. The attack was a direct hit and pushed Diadera into the roof. Issei, however, did not put enough power in the attack to kill Diadera. Diadera had a lot to answer for, and Issei would take his sweet time in inflicting pain on the bastard before he dragged him feet first to the feet of Surziches to deal with. Just as Diadera was falling to the ground with Issei getting ready to dish out even more punishment, he was engulfed by a golden light and was then nowhere to be found. Closing his eyes in irritation, he said, "You better have had a good reason for stealing my prey, if not then I would be forced to use you in his place." Unexpected. "I didn't think you were aware of my presence," a voice answered, making Issei turn around, the divine dividing being activated for the first time today. Invasion arc end. The one to speak was a man who had the appearance of a handsome man dressed in black armor with a cape. He had long brown hair that goes to his hips with many bangs covering his right eye. "Who are you exactly?" Issei asked irritatedly. "I am Shalba Bezelbub, the descendant of the original Mao and one of the leaders of the old Mao faction. And today I am going to be the cause of not only your death but also the destruction of the current underworld." The one now introduced as Shalba said. He waited for Issei to talk to him to have the cliché hero-villain monologue. Unluckiest for him, Issei was already pissed off with the way things had been, and Shalba's interruption of his punishment had tipped the scales, so to speak. So it was a rather unsuspecting Shalba who got smacked right in the face and into the wall by an angry-looking Issei. Vanishing Dragon Balance Breaker, Albion roared out, and Issei was standing in his balance breaker in all of its glory. Not giving Shalba a chance to recover, he attacked once again, this time showering punches to Shalba's midsection, causing the Mao to spit out blood with each punch. Issei then grabbed him from his hair and threw him across the room as Albion's called out. Divide x 10. Shalba staggered and went to his knees as he tried to stand up. The power loss was more than a little disconcerting. He, however, pushed it aside and stood up before cracking his neck and spitting out the remainder of the blood in his mouth. This time even he didn't speak and merely waved his arm in a swiping motion, causing a large amount of magical circles to appear. From each of the circles a different element attacked Issei, who merely stood there. Just as the attacks were about to make contact with him, Albion called out, "Deflect." Immediately a shining blue dome-like shield came around Issei, protecting him from the outside. He could have used Reflect to send the attacks right back at Shalba, but then again, where was the fun in that? As soon as the attacks hit the shield, they ricocheted off it, flying off in random directions, hit the walls, the roof, the floor, causing the once proud castle to crumble down into nothing but a mixture of wood and stone. Inside, the dust that had risen due to destruction of the castle, both Issei and Shalba floated opposite to each other, staring each other in the eyes. In a flash, both of the fighters flared their respective auras and flew towards each other, meeting in midair. The auras clashed for a while, with Issei directly combating Shalba's monstrous reserves, using regular use of divides to keep things in his favor. His diligence was soon awarded as he was able to break through the magic armor Bezelbub had set up on him and shouted, "Ice Dragon Emperor's Tail Whip." He finished, connecting a devastating kick to Shalba, sending him crashing out of the dust cloud and crashing into the ground. He himself flew out of the dust cloud before creating two balls of destruction in his palms, and then with a grunt, threw THEM8 both at the still down Shalba, causing a small explosion to take place at the point of contact. Issei didn't have to wait long to find out what happened, as an enraged Shalba flew out and snarled. You won't live past this day, boy. The travesty you have committed today will not be forgotten by me, Shalba Beelzebub. Do you have to use your goddamn name every single time you speak? And two, why don't you show me what you can do? I was honestly expecting more of a challenge from someone who calls themselves a Mau. The only thing that you are above normal is your reserves. The rest, all of you, is as pathetic as the shit you spout whenever you open the shithole that is your mouth. Issei boredly drawled, hoping to rile up Shalba. And just as he hoped, Shalba practically vibrated with anger. I will have your hide, you filthy low-born. Shalba snarled before he gave out a battle cry and then raised his arm, summoning a large locust of bees. He then directed all of the bees towards Issei, who hastily flew backwards with THR locust following closely after him. He tried firing a few magical attacks at the swarm, but it had little to no effect since they were magically protected by Beelzebub's magic. Before he could think of an alternate approach to the situation, a sudden inferno appeared out of nowhere and began engulfing the swarm of bees. What? Beelzebub shouted in shock before turning around and facing Volley, who was in his balance breaker form. Volley, Lucifer, what are you doing? Are you really going against and betraying your fellow original Mau? Shalba shouted. Because of how boring you are. Domination of devils and world destruction mean nothing to me. Not to mention the fact that you are significantly weaker than me. And I don't ally myself with weaklings. Volley drawled at Shalba. Shalba's body began to glow an eerie purple, and soon a mark of infinity was seen on his waist. The mark was soon absorbed by his body, causing his magic and aura to grow too by several times. Issei by now had flown up to Volley and was staring at Shalba with a stoic expression on his face. Why did you come here, Volley? I had it all covered. Issei said stoically without looking at the Red Dragon Emperor. It didn't look like that from where I was standing. And as for why I am here, I will tell you that once this skirmish is done with. Volley said with a frown, not having anticipated such a drastic change in his rival's countenance. I would have frozen all of the bugs just like you burnt them. For now, stay back, this is my kill. Issei said before he flared his power and flew towards Shalba, not bothering to hear Valis' response. What do you think happened to him, Drake? Volley mentally asked his dragon. It seems like he has been battling some of his emotions. He has shut them for now. However, this is detrimental since he will feel the brunt of those emotions the moment he releases them. I think it's better to let him do what he is doing and then check on him later on. Drake answered, to which Volley nodded. As Issei flew toward Shalba, he began chanting, causing his balance breaker to shine brightly with each passing line. I who am about to awaken am the heavenly dragon that disregarded the principles of supremacy set by God. I conquer the infinite and live the dream. I shall become the azure dragon that sets down the path of supremacy for others to follow. And I shall take you from the depths of the crimson purgatory to the heights of an azure paradise. Heavenly Azure Emperor. Issei finished entering his final form, his power clashing with and pushing back at Shalba's aura. Shalba himself was shocked at the appearance of the armor and wasn't expecting Issei to have that much power in his hands. Without a second glance, Issei was in front of Shalba, a ball of destruction in his palm swirling around. With a thrust, he hit Shalba with said ball and then sent him crashing into the floor. As soon as he landed, the power of destruction began to spread and eat away at Shalba, leaving behind nothing. Shalba's screams of agonizing pain permeated throughout the area until silence prevailed. What a weakling, he wouldn't survive minutes against Grafie and Ichan at 50% of her power. Just a minor inconvenience. Issei said in disgust as he powered down to his base form, revealing his blooded attire. He couldn't believe how someone could give themselves the title of a demon lord with no power to back it up. Surzich's was a true definition of power. Issei knew he was nowhere close to even thinking about facing someone like Surzich's, who could annihilate him with a single blink of his eye. Turning to Volley, who had an eyebrow raised at his condition, he said. So now that the Debbie Downer shit is all done and dusted, care to tell me what are you doing here? Before I answer that, why do you like a worker in a butcher's shop? Volley asked with a raised eyebrow. I have been fighting for quite a while today, and natural one does get the blood of his foes on his person during a kill. Issei said with a nonchalant shrug. I see, well, as for why I am here, you can say that I am here to see someone. Volley said with a smirk playing on his lips. And who would that be? Issei this time asked with an intrigued expression on his face. In response, Volley only lifted his finger and pointed it behind Issei. Turning around, Issei felt his eyes widen and jaw drop a bit as he took in the sight before him. With Surzich's and Azazel. You know, you could have easily taken him in and found out about most of the bullshit that he was spouting out. Azazel commented as he floated up to Surzich's level. True, but if what he said about the leader is true, then we will meet him at one point or the other. I am more worried about his statement on the loyalties of the Lucifer clan. It seems I will have to pay old Rizvium a visit. Surzicha said, getting a nod of agreement from Azazel. Nice Sama, if everything is done, can I go back home? Ain asked in a slightly subdued voice. Not knowing the reason for the change, but understanding it nonetheless, Surzicas nodded and said. You may go Ain-chan, I will send Issei back as soon as he is done. Ain nodded gratefully before she activated a transportation circle and left. Back to scene. Sensing a presence above them, both Surzicas and Azazel turned to see a young girl dressed in gothic clothes floating in the air. She had a blank look on her face as she stared into the sky. I didn't think the leader would show itself so soon. Azazel muttered to Surzicas, who nodded. Office, what are you doing here? Azazel asked, lightly tensing for battle as he raised his spear. Calm yourself, Governor General of the Fallen Angels, I am merely here to observe. Office replied blankly. Why did you form the Chaos Brigade, Office? After all, I doubt anyone would have been able to stop you if you went on a rampage to destroy the world. Why do it through a proxy war? Surzicas asked curiously. Do not misunderstand my actions, Lucifer. I merely help them to get their help in my quest. What happens in between that is none of my concern. Office replied. Oh, and what exactly is this quest you speak of? Surzicas asked. My silence was robbed from me years ago. I will do whatever it takes to reclaim it. She said before she looked over at the sky where a large celestial red dragon with 4 wings and a long horn on its snout was leaving a large dimensional gate. She then pointed her finger at Great Red and said. I will have my silence back one day, Great Red, and you won't be able to do anything but watch helpless as I take it. She finished and was about to leave when Surzicas stopped her and said. You should know that we have no quarrel with you, Office, but should your group come after us with the intention of harm, we will respond in kind. Office stopped for a moment or two and gave Surzicas a lingering gaze before she turned around and vanished in a puff of smoke. Back with Issei. Issei's eyes were wide in shock as his eyes took in the majestic sight of the Dragon of Dreams. Raising a shaking finger at the side, he for the first time tonight lost his composure as he stuttered out. IIISTT that. He trailed of. The Dragon of Dreams. Strongest being in the universe. The Dragon of Dragons. If yes, it's correct, that is Great Red and my goal. Volley said, looking at Great Red with a challenging smile on his face. Issei broke his gaze away from Great Red and turned to Volley with an inquisitive look asked. Your goal? To one day beat Great Red and become the true Red Dragon God Emperor. Here he stopped and looked at Issei with an unreadable expression as he continued. Issei, hi, do I apologize, but our rivalry is not really my priority. Make no mistake, we will battle, but not with any urgency. There are way too many things that I need to achieve and way too many people who I need to beat before I have to fight our destined battle. I hope you agree to this. He finished with only a slight tilt of his head to the side. Look at you acting all cool like that. Issei sniggered with a shake of his head, making Valis' lips twitch upwards. Hey, don't worry it, my life has just started on an upward trend and I intend on keeping it that way for as long as possible. I have my own goals I need to achieve before our battle, and this just makes it more convenient for me as well. Issei said with a smile. Volley gave a smile at that before he raised his fist towards Issei. Grinning, Issei bumped his fist, making Volley walk away as he waved his hand backwards. Volley then walked into a silver magic circle, going back to his headquarters. Issei sighed before plopping, pondering over whether the time was good to bring his suppressed emotions back or not. He was bought out of his musings when Azazel and Surzicas landed beside him. Is everything taken care of over here? Surzicas asked as he looked around the battle-torn area. Yup, the enemies are killed and the threat has been exterminated. Issei said in a lackluster tone of voice. You okay there, son? Azazel asked with a quirked eyebrow. Yeah, I am fine. Can I go home? Issei asked politely. Go ahead, Issei-kun, we will take care of the cleanup over here. Surzicas said kindly as Issei gave a tired nod and disappeared in a silver magic circle. Once he appeared in his mansion, he closed his eyes and let his emotions loose, letting them bombard him all at once. He then fell to his knees and let out a few tears as the guilt over his actions hit him fully. However, all further contemplation from him was put to the side when he felt 2 warm arms wrap themselves around him, giving him the comfort that he so badly craved. A bit of this. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Issei chanted despondently as he cried into his hands. SHH, SHH, it will be alright, Issei-sama. Please tell me what happened. Ravel said as she wrapped her arms around him and pulled him into her chest. After a few minutes of sobbing, he started speaking brokenly. Narrating everything he had learnt in these past few days, to his actual conversation with Diodera, his brutal slaughter of Diodera's peerage, then killing Asia, to torturing Diodera and finally killing Shalba. Once he was done, Ravel once again pulled him into her bosom, tightly hugging him as she said. You didn't do anything wrong, Issei-sama. You gave into your emotions against people who were already broken and wished for reprieve. I am pretty sure that when death finally took them, they would have thanked you. As for torturing Diodera, it was nothing wrong. Lucifer-sama and Beelzebub-sama would have done much worse to him had he shown them the same things he showed you, and they are just devils. You are both a devil and a dragon, your connection to your emotions is larger than normal, so don't blame yourself. She softly finished. Despite Albion's assurances, Issei felt light to hear those words coming from the outside. Not only that the argument was sound and it made him feel calm. Gently removing himself from her embrace, he said, "Thank you for that, Ravel-chan, I needed that." Ravel blushed at the soft look in his eyes and stammered out, "It's, and then nothing, Issei-sama." Now smiling at her slight discomfort, he realized that he didn't really give Ravel the kind of attention that he gave the other girls and had ignored her for a while. Knowing that she had feelings just as strong as those as the others for him made him feel guilty about not noticing it early. Sighing, he decided that it was time to pay Ravel back for everything she had done for him. Including the impromptu therapy session tonight. Must you be so formal with Ravel-chan? Call me Ice or Ice-kun like the others do. Okay? He asked her with a hint of smile on his face. Her face reddened automatically and she managed to stutter out a "Hi Ice-kun." All the while as she stared at the floor. Deciding to go the distance, he placed a hand on cheek and softly stroked it before he leaned forward and gave her a soft and unsuspecting chaste kiss on the lips. Breaking away after a few moments, he looked over to Ravel and had to stifle a fond chuckle when he saw that her face was stuck in the kissing position with a look of pure bliss etched on it. Chuckling to himself, he went to his room hoping to get a good night's rest. Finding Ain in bed, he smiled to himself before going to the washroom to get ready. Soon after, he joined Ain in bed and was about to sleep when he felt Ain lightly shaking as she slept. Slight whimpers escaping her mouth as she slept. Frowning to himself, he knew that something must have gone wrong in the battle. Wrapping both of his arms around her, he pulled her onto his chest before sleeping. Hoping to give her the comfort she needed. It did help as Ain stopped whimpering and soon nuzzled into him as the fitful nightmares finally left her, allowing her to rest without problems. The next morning. The feeling of the sunlight on her face was what Ain woke up to. Despite the worrying news she had heard yesterday, she felt relatively light and quite relaxed. There was, however, a nagging worry on what she had heard of her brother. Feeling something warm keeping her in place, she smiled to herself, knowing exactly what was tying her down. Opening her eyes, she found the peacefully sleeping face of Issei. Smiling to herself, she slightly leaned up and started kissing him on the lips. After several minutes of her kissing him, Issei started kissing her back, his eyes still closed as he did so. His grip on her though was tightened as he woke up. "Good morning, beautiful," he said after both of them had broken away, his eyes still closed. "Good morning to you too, handsome. When did you get back home yesterday? Suzuchi's Nai-sama did tell me he would send you as soon as you were free, but you still did take quite a bit of time," she asked, her tone mildly curious. Issei sighed internally and knew that he had little to no chance of getting out without a proper explanation. Not to mention, he knew for a fact that her tone was only mild in its sounding. She had all but demanded the answer and he had no choice but to answer. However, it didn't mean that he couldn't even the playing field. "I will of course tell you everything, but only if you promise to tell me what exactly is bothering you," Issei said back in an even tone. He was inwardly surprised and quiet, worried when Ain basically shrunk back and refused to even look in his direction. "Ain darling, what's wrong?" he softly said as he put one hand on her cheek and made her look at him. Looking at his worried eyes once again warmed her heart and she once again remembered how and why she fell in love with him. Mentally bracing herself, she said. "Yesterday during the battle, me Suzuchi's Nai-sama and Azazel-sensei came across another one of the old mass. He was Cursory Asmodeus." He did go on and on about his plans for world domination and even insulted Suzuchi's Nai-sama. I obviously took right offense to that and called him a weak puppet, to which in change he started spouting off at me. I normally would have ignored him and his insults, but he said that both me and my sister were traitors to the house to Lucifer and my brother Euclid is the only salvation for the house of Lucifuge as he still loyally serves it. After that, Suzuchi's killed him and I came back here," she said, her voice cracking up near the end. Issei didn't reply immediately as his mind analyzed what he had been told. In some unearthly possibility, Euclid Lucifuge, the proclaimed dead brother of his beau and appointed older sister, was not only alive but was once again in a way standing in the opposite spectrum of things. Mentally growling at the man, he turned to Ain, who had a hollow look on her face. It was a look that Issei recognized quite well. It was him after all who had tirelessly worked and succeeded in getting that look out and away from Ain's face. Sitting up, causing Ain to squeal in surprise, he tightened his arms and brought her into a hug. "I don't know what to say to this, Ain-chan, this news is easily life-altering. What I can promise you is that I will be with you all along the way. Whatever life brings, I will face it with you. So don't worry, your dragon will divide all your worries for you, just like I promised," he softly said, bringing a bit of humor into the situation. His words did have the desired effect as Ain gave out a sound that could be called a mixture between a snort and a sob. "Look what you did, you made me sound like a pig," she said with a chuckle. "Nonsense, you sounded like a fairy with magical voice capable of controlling the listeners," he exclaimed joyously. His line caused both the teenagers to laugh uproariously, after which they settled down in comfortable silence. The resting position itself having been adjusted, with Issei leaning on the board of the bed while Ain was pressed up on his side. "So what were you going to tell me before you so masterfully managed to get me to not only spill my guts on what was bothering me, but also made me feel infinitely better?" She asked once again. "My night didn't go as easy as some of my normal deployments go. Before I tell you what happened last night, I should first give you a little extended history lesson," he said before he paused, waiting to see if she had a question in her mind. When nothing came up to the forefront, he continued and said, "A few weeks after I became a devil, I one day came across a girl who had been exhumated from the church. A truly kind and naive soul. She had the heart of someone who would help you regardless of your species, age or crime. She had been manipulated into joining the group of fallen that originally killed me. She even saved my life from a crazy exorcist and even took a slight beating from said exorcist to buy me some time to escape. Her name was Asia Argento," Issei said, pausing once again with a slight look of reminiscence on his face. "She had a powerful sacred gear, Twilight Healing, and it was the reason why she was killed by the fallen. They wanted to extract the gear and killed her upon their successful extraction. It was during that battle that I first unlocked my gear. Ironically, it was the Rainer, the fallen angel, who had killed me in the beginning and had taken Asia's gear for herself, who opened my eyes to everything Riaz had done. In a fit of rage, I ensured that Asia wouldn't be further used and let her stay dead, making Riaz reincarnate Rainer instead. Here is where things turn a bit murky. Do you remember a couple of weeks ago when you asked me about why I was feeling fidgety?" he asked, and upon seeing her nod continued and said, "It turns out we discovered that there was a spy amongst the devil nobility. The spy was Diodara Asterith. You may be wondering how I know that. Well, that bastard completed his peerage almost 7 months back, with his final piece being Asia," Issei said as he dropped the bomb, making Ain gasp. And given the timing of the reincarnation and the fact that he kept it a secret meant that he knew exactly where she was buried, Ain said with horror. "Exactly. A bit of investigation from both Surziches and Azazel told us that he had been targeting green-eyed blonde nuns for quite a while, and Asia was his so-called biggest prize. He orchestrated her getting kicked out of the church and then reincarnated her. I was angry enough due to this alone, but that bastard had the gall to rape her in front of me when I went to face him. I am ashamed of what I did next. I let my emotions get the better of me and sealed them off for a while. I then proceeded to kill the whole lot of his peerage in the most painful ways imaginable, and I didn't feel a thing as I did so. I even killed Asia this time for sure, as not even her soul essence remains. After that I tortured Diodara. Before he was killed by Shalba Bezelbub. I fought him and then killed him. After that I met Vali again and then came here. The emotions I locked up all hit me at once, and I couldn't understand what to do and felt dirty and disgusted with myself. Ravel-chan found me in this state and we talked. She really helped me put things into perspective for me, and I felt a lot better before going to bed last night. And that is the entirety of what happened with me," Issei said with a breath as he finished his tale. "Ravel-chan helped you, Ka. You really should spend more time with her and take more care of her. Despite her being here for almost as long as me, you don't spend much time with her as much as you do with me, Jin-chan and Roswis-chan," Ain finished in a scolding manner. "Well, I do heartily apologize to you for my unknown ignorance, and I also apologize to you personally for cutting your fun down, since I already made a move on Ravel last night," Issei said with an innocent expression on his face, his eyes however displaying the mirth he felt at the moment. "Moo, how could you, Issei-kun? You know, getting your coolest ass with girls who genuinely like you is my favorite pastime, so how could you go ahead and already claim the pure and innocent Ravel-chan and completely mess up my whole plan that I had in place for the two of you to get together?" Ain said as she mock-pouted at him. "I'm sure you will find it in your heart to forgive my atrocious mistake," Issei said with a chuckle as he planted a chaste kiss on Ain's lips before he stood up and made way to the bathroom, keen on getting ready for the day. Ain pouted back at him as he left, but smiled nonetheless, leaving the room to get ready for her day as well. Soon we find the rest of the peerage along with Ambriel sitting down on a table about to start having breakfast. As Issei entered the room, he immediately greeted all the girls except Ambriel with deep kisses, while Siegfried and Bova got their respective fist bumps. He did share a friendly handshake and hug with Ambriel, but nothing more as he respected her space. As everyone ate and made small talk, Siegfried cleared his throat and said, Issei, I need to ask you for a favor." "What kind of favor, Sieg?" Issei asked curiously. "A couple of my old contacts called me last night. They need a hand to deal with a personal grudge against their families, and I want to go and help them," Siegfried said strongly. "I see, so when are your friends expecting the two of us?" Issei asked casually as if talking about the weather. "What do you mean us?" Siegfried asked disbelieving. "Exactly as it sounds. I won't let you run into a potential war zone on your own without any backup as strong as me. So you can be assured that I will accompany you," Issei replied casually, making Siegfried nod with a sigh. So who are these friends of yours who need your help? Issei asked curiously. You'll probably won't know about them, but they are Toju Basara and UCHIHA, and you are right, the situation we are about to drop in on is a veritable shitstorm. Siegfried said imperiously. The new arc. What is the current status report on the mission? An old voice asked from behind a seat. Itachi and his team of misfits have reacted as you expected them to, my lord. Currently we know he has called a friend of his to help him. Said friend is traveling with the White Dragon Emperor and an unknown female and are expected to meet up with Itachi in a day. A kneeling man said blankly with no emotion on his face. I see, young Itachi is still inexperienced and being hunted by 2 clans isn't helping him. But both he and the siblings he is helping are inconsequential. The one we need is the friend who is coming. Send our best assassins to greet our guests and make sure they know to break the group up. Getting Siegfried alone will be smoother for our plans. Leave now. The old man said, opening his eyes to reveal red eyes with 3 black spinning tomos. Hi my lord. The kneeling man said before he stood up and disappeared into the shadows. You have already thwarted me once, young Itachi, but this time I am being serious. Let us see how you react when you learn that you unknowingly led your own friend right where I need him to be. The old man mused before he too disappeared into the shadows. With Issei, Siegfried and Ambriel. So remind me again why you are here. Issei asked in a slightly irritated tone as he eyed Ambriel, who was sitting next to him. Siegfried had taken the seat opposite to the duo. The trio were currently seated in a train cabin and were traveling to Siegfried's friend's village. What, I had nothing fun to do so I tagged along. Are you telling me that my presence here isn't appreciated? She asked as she gave a small pout. You know doing that is unfair. Issei grumbled at Ambriel, knowing that she was teasing him and had put him in a tight spot. Doing what? She asked innocently, making Issei grumble and then give a tired sigh. He then stood up and said. I'm off to the toilet, I will be back soon. Issei said as he left the cabin. As he closed the door behind him, Ambriel let out a chuckle before she smiled softly. You know, if you like him just tell him that you do, he won't push you away or anything. Siegfried commented absent-mindedly as he stared out the window. Oh, 2 questions. 1, how do you know that? And 2, what makes you think that I am interested in him, much less like him? Ambriel asked with a raised eyebrow. We were best friends till both of us were 10, and we have regained the same level of friendship after we met up again, so I'd like to think that I know my best friend. And 2, it's really bloody obvious to everyone but him. Both of you have started talking more, you have even moved into the Lucifuge mansion, Ain and Roswis are your friends, and you forced yourself into coming with us today. Does that explain my reasoning? Siegfried finished with a raised eyebrow. Ambriel gaped a bit at the second part of the explanation and looked away with a tiny blush. Okay fine, I admit he is different than the others I have been courted by before, and he also doesn't follow any of the stereotypes I have heard before. He makes me curious. She said honestly. Just talk to him, he won't turn you away, rather he will give both of you an honest chance. Siegfried said. However, before their conversation could continue, the door of the cabin slid open and Issei entered through it. He had a frown etched on his face and a slight cut on his cheek that wasn't there when he first left. His eyes were hard and were seemingly glowing. Before he could speak, Ambriel was in front of a hand going up to his cheek as she said. What happened? You are not hurt, are you? Hearing her voice and concern made his eyes soften up a great deal, and he nodded and said. I am fine, but the parameters of this mission just got a whole lot of messed up. What do you mean? Siegfried asked with a raised eyebrow. Your friend Itachi is currently being hunted by 2 different clans. The Uchiha was already expected, but I didn't expect the clan of 1000 skills to be involved as well. From what I have gathered, the Senju clan had 2 kids with unique abilities to save themselves therein, and Itachi helped them and became a fugitive being hunted by 2 clans. Issei said grimly. But we already knew that, it shouldn't be surprising. Siegfried said, only to falter slightly when Issei glared at him. It would have been the case if it were just that. I just fought 5 rank assassins. He said in a biting tone. What? How is that possible? They shouldn't know we are here. Ambriel said, the alarm in her voice was clear. That's exactly my point. The strongest warriors from both clans can easily fight at ultimate class level. Me, I can take on one of them at a time, not a whole clan of them. Someone is either keeping an eye on us or your friend betrayed you and is luring you in for something. Issei said to Siegfried, his voice hard and his eyes shining. The sight made Siegfried swallow a bit. Anyone who knew Issei would know that he loathed betrayal more than anything, and to learn that his second oldest friend could have possibly led them into trap was betrayal. However, he knew Itachi and was willing to talk to him before everything went shit. Compassing himself, he took in a deep breath and said. Can you tell me what happened since you went to the bathroom? It couldn't have taken you more than 30 minutes there. His jaw still tight, Issei nodded and began describing what had happened 30 minutes ago. Issei, 30 minutes ago. Issei gave out a fond sigh as he left the cabin, a small but genuine grin on his face. Ambriel was slowly making her way into his heart. The only people who had made it faster to it were Ain and Roswis, the girls he had become most attached. Roswis still acted shy, and that was what made her all the more adorable in his eyes. Ain, the girl who had captured his heart with the speed and force of a nuclear bomb, needed no explanation. Ambriel was gaining speed, and he knew if she continued on as he would make the first move and ask Azazel himself. In his musings, he did not notice 5 shadows converging on him, ready to attack. One of the shadows brought out a portable knife and aimed said knife at Issei, targeting the area in between his eyes. As soon as Issei left the bathroom, the shadow threw the knife with startling accuracy. Issei, however, felt the projectile coming towards him long before it got close to him and immediately channeled a bit of his magic, causing a small speck of ice to appear in the knife's path. The knife, however, was thrown with not only power but also a certain spin. The moment it hit the small ice shield, it deflected towards Issei and cut his cheek, making him bleed a little. Issei then tensed his muscles and cracked his shoulders and said, "Well, since you have already given up your presence, you might as well come out." He boredly called out, making the 5 shadows curse before they stepped out without sound. Spotting the clan symbols on their outfits, Issei raised his eyebrow and said, "The Senju and UCHIHA. How did you know we were coming? I doubt you'd have spies so far deep to know about us at this distance. Let's just say our leaders know more than everyone assumes them to know. And you currently are a thorn to their plans. We will have to kill you, nothing personal." The lead assassin said as the 5 withdrew their blades and pointed them at Issei. Looking at the blades, Issei said, "We are going to fight then, eh? Good thing, there was always something it always wanted to try out. Durandal. Gear 5 twin destruction daggers." He finished while pushing both his hands outwards. In the palm of both hands, blue and gold colored daggers appeared. The daggers were sharp and glinted as the light fell on them. This was the latest form of Durandal that Issei had unlocked. It condensed its power even more, bringing forth more devastation, with several times more speed and movement. "Now then, let's dance," Issei said as a barrier went up and he charged at the 5 assassins. As soon as he charged, the lead assassin's eyes widened before he signaled for the others to intercept the attack, while he himself decided to once again meld in the shadows. Something that Issei had said interested him beyond measure. He needed to observe more before he went back to give his report. The fight was a fast-paced one, and despite the advantage given to the assassins by the Sharingan and stronger bodies, Issei had little to no trouble keeping up with the 4. Going as far to outmaneuver the Uchiha clan assassins with pure last-moment reactions and instincts, all the while physically overpowering the Senju assassins. The thing that put the final nail in the coffin was the grin that had come onto his lips. Despite it being a battle of death, the boy had look of enjoyment plastered on his face. There was only one man who had such a look when he was in a fight that he enjoyed. That was the strongest a member of his clan had ever reached, the great Madara Uchiha. Getting the confirmation that he wanted, the lead assassin melted away to a shadow outside of the train before he quickly stood up and ran towards the clan headquarters to report his finding. Back with Issei, he decided to stop messing around and finally end the fight, even if he was enjoying it immensely. Coating one dagger with the power of destruction, he brought it out and slashed it downwards, sending a small arc of destruction towards the assassins, who were slightly shocked by the change of attack, and it caused them to get hit since they did not have much place to maneuver. The Senju clan assassins went down first as they were hit by the arc. The Uchiha assassins both jumped only for one to get the stab by a thrown dagger version of Durandal. The second assassin was grabbed by Issei before he was judo thrown on the floor, landing with both his hands under his body. Issei giggly placed both the daggers against the assassin's throat in a reverse grip. "Now then," Issei said in a casual voice as if he were discussing the weather. "Who told you that we were coming? It's not possible that you would know for no reason." He finished as he lightly pressed the daggers forward, signaling the wordless threat in the face of him not answering. The assassin sneered at Issei in distaste before he contemplated his next course of action. He was a dead man either way. Either he would die right now at the hands of the young Dragon Emperor, he would be killed the moment he returned to the clan as an example for those who failed to get their assigned targets. So he decided to take the loss here, but it wouldn't be a clean one. He would ensure that the group traveling would be wary of the ones they were meeting. A bit of discord in the group after all went a very long way. "If you really want to know, it was Itachi Uchiha who informed us of your position. That is all you will get out of me, so kill me," the assassin said with a spat. "Gladly," Issei said before he beheaded the assassin in front of him. Before he stood up, his face set into a blank visage. With everything done and him not finding the persons of the last assassin, he nodded to himself before cancelling the barrier and then walking back towards his cabin mates, not at all noticing that the cut on his cheek was lightly bleeding. He, however, did decide to withhold the last piece of information given to him by the assassin. It wouldn't do for him to disrupt the team chemistry before the crux of the mission even happened. Not to mention, he did not want to hurt Siegfried with the news that one of his most trusted friends had been the one to leak his location and set him up to potentially die. With his mind made up, he entered the cabin, his face void of any emotion. back in the present. And that is what happened. Issei said as he crossed his arms and leant back onto his seat. That is troubling. The situation is even more dire than I thought it would be. Siegfried muttered distractedly. But our mom has raised us to be fighters. I am pretty sure that among the three of us, we will be able to deal with whatever is thrown at us. Ambriel said passionately from her position beside Issei. Amy-chan has that right, Siegfried. I won't let you face it alone. Even if it's a trap, I will be walking with you into it. Issei said resolutely. Thanks, guys. Siegfried said as his shoulders sagged in relief. He wouldn't admit it to them, but he felt scared. There was something about this whole situation that made him feel cold and sent unpleasant shivers up his spine. Anytime. Issei said as he began looking out the window. After staring at the scenery outside, he noted that they were still quite a few ways away from their destination. Looking back at his companions, he said. Listen guys, get some sleep. I will wake you guys up when we are about to arrive. Both tried to argue, but a stern glance from Issei told them that there was no room for any argument. With a sigh, both of them nodded. Siegfried just leant his head back and closed his eyes, while Ambriel went a step further and laid her head on Issei's lap, sending him an innocent look when he raised his eyebrows at her. Shrugging, he cast a warm smile in her direction as one of his hands found her scalp and started to massage it softly. The effect was immediate, and Ambriel soon yawned, after which her breathing evened out and she fell asleep. Elsewhere. My lord, I bring news. A voice greeted a dark room. And pray tell, what was it that made you abandon your mission? A similar old voice replied. I have found the legacy of Lord Madara Uchiha. The first voice said with barely concealed excitement, sending the room into shocked silence. New Art P2. So here we are, any ideas where do we go from here, Sieg? Issei asked as he looked around the train terminal they had just exited into. He said that there would be someone waiting for us at the terminal. Let's wait for a few minutes. If there is no one, we will have to improvise. Siegfried said in a rather stiff tone. He was by no means angry at Issei, but the entire situation was mysterious and the underlying tension in the air was beginning to get to him. I see, will our contact find us, or do we have to give out a signal that they will use to track us? Ambriel asked as she looked around the terminal searching for a sign or any hidden traps. Probably both the things. Siegfried looked around for a few minutes, after which his eyes found a young man dressed in full black. He had short shoulder-length hair that were bound into a short ponytail. His eyes were closed and he was leaning against a wall. Siegfried immediately recognized who it was and hid a grin as he motioned for Issei and Ambriel to follow, while he walked towards his friend. After reaching within the range of 5 feet, Siegfried said. Yo Itachi, it's been a long while, hasn't it? A ghost of a smile appeared on Itachi's face as he opened his black obsidian eyes and stared at Siegfried for a moment, after which his eyes wandered towards Issei and Ambriel, studying them. A moment later he went back to Siegfried and said. That it has 3 years if I am not wrong. No, you are correct. Anyways, you still eat Pocky like you used to? Siegfried asked in a light-hearted joking tone. I will have you know that Pocky is the snack of the gods, so don't you dare insult it. Itachi retorted with a mock sneer. Are you telling me what to do? Siegfried asked with narrow eyes, causing a slight tension to build around air. Ambriel was increasingly getting worked up and thought that a physical confrontation would be taking place at any moment now. Issei for his part was highly amused as he immediately noticed what the two were doing. He then turned his attention to Ambriel, who was worriedly looking at the 2 boys in front of him and was signaling to him to try and break them up. When Issei made no motion to move or help, she grabbed his arm and hissed. Why aren't you stopping them? We can't afford any distractions right now. Issei chuckled in response and held up 5 fingers and said. You will see why in exactly 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. As he pointed at Siegfried and Itachi, both the boys stopped glaring at each other and now wore matching grins. Both then stepped up and gave each other a manly hug, clearly happy to be back. Ambriel gaped at the scene for a few moments, her jaw was dropped, and she for one could not imagine a scene as absurd as the one happening in front of her to have been possible. Issei on the other hand was chuckling at her reactions. No matter how aloof she could be, she really was innocent when it came to most of rare things in life. He then lightly moved his finger to her chin and pushed her chin up and closed her mouth with a light click. Careful there, Amy-chan, we don't want you getting flies in that pretty mouth of yours, do we? You knew that something like that was going to happen, didn't you? Ambriel said with a glare as she turned to look at Issei. Of course I did, it is but a sacred ritual known only to those in the bro code. Issei said sagely. I give up, I just don't want to know anymore. Ambriel said with a shake of her head, much to the shared amusement of the 3 boys. The moment lasted for a while, after which Issei cleared his throat and said. Now that the ice has been broken, can you tell me how you and Itachi Uchiha-kun over here became friends, Sieg? Siegfried in response got a small blush on his face and was about to answer when Itachi beat him to the chase and said. He kidnapped me. Itachi said with a straight face. His response caused Issei and Ambriel to fall in an anime-styled way. Quickly standing up, Issei looked at Siegfried with an incredulous look on his face and said, "Are you fucking kidding? You did not tell me that you had a criminal record. It wasn't like that." Siegfried tried to say, and upon the skepticism on both Issei and Ambriel faces, he turned to Itachi with a huff and said, Out of this, you will have to tell them what happened. Not going to get in this argument. You started it, so you finish it. You always do that and cause my reputation to fall." His reaction caused Itachi to give out a small chuckle, after which he turned to an expecting Issei and Ambriel, after which he started speaking and said, "It had happened when both of us were 14 a few years ago. I never had friends growing up, not even my cousins wanted to hang out with me. Because of that, I grew up to be social outcast. So one day in the second year of my middle school year, we had a transfer student. Said student happened to be Sieg over there, who at first merely observed me. Then on a random day he just walked up to me, grabbed me and led me out of the school. We spent the whole day in a park then a mall. It was the first time I felt as if I had a friend who I could call my own. But of course in his haste, Siegfried did forget to inform anyone in the school over where would be. So by the time we got back to the school it was evening, and the school was surrounded by the local police, my clan members and even some of Siegfried's patrons from the church. Apparently there was a rumor going on that Siegfried had murdered the outcast and then run away. It was quite the funny situation if I'm being honest. Everyone chuckles a bit. Anyways, back to the story. When we got back we were immediately accosted by everyone, and it took us quite a while to explain everything. In the end the police and some members of my clan wanted to arrest Siegfried on the charges of kidnapping, while the church and once again some members of my clan wanted the matter to be put to rest. Siegfried though wasn't worried in the least, he just stood there acting like nothing big had just happened. While I tried to quell any problems. In the end the only person in my clan who cared for me as a person and not the heir, my mother, came into play. She dropped all the charges against Siegfried as she knew of my social status. In fact, she was glad that I finally had a friend my age and thanked Siegfried, even inviting him to dinner on occasion. Itachi reminisced with a small but fond smile on his face. "Oh, that does kinda make quite a bit of sense." Ambriel nodded, engrossed in the story. Once she was done, silence once again permeated amongst the group. After a few moments Issei slowly looked back to Itachi and cracked his neck as he said, "So then can you tell us what our next plan of action will be? We are here now, what is the situation and what do you expect us to do? Let us go to my hideout, I will explain everything over there." Itachi said, getting nods from both Siegfried and Ambriel, but Issei remained to be silent but followed Itachi anyway. He did not the UCHIHA prodigy. Issei could feel the power rolling off him. He knew that the raven-haired boy in front was one of the few guys in his generation who could match him at full power. The only other person he knew with that much power was none other than his not-so-friendly neighborhood rival Dragon Emperor, Vali Lucifer. He however did decide to make his standing very clear on the matter. He would eliminate anyone who became a threat to his group, even if it meant facing a powerful clan in the supernatural world. After walking a short distance, Itachi led them to clearing, and after making sure that they weren't followed, created a transportation circle that took the four of them away. On the other side of the portal the group came into a clearing with a large warehouse at the center. Itachi motioned for the three to follow him in. However, before they walked into it, Issei said, "Sieg, Amy-chan, you two go ahead, I want to have a word with Itachi-kun over here." Both Siegfried and Ambriel exchanged a glance with each other before they slowly nodded and walked into the warehouse. As soon as they were inside, Itachi turned towards Issei and was about to ask him what he wanted when he was pushed into a tree bunk with a sturdy forearm on his neck, cutting of his breath. "Now I don't know what you are playing at UCHIHA, but Siegfried is my best friend and Ambriel is my responsibility. Should your direct actions harm even a hair on their body, I will show you just how menacing a dragon's wrath can be. Do you understand?" Issei whispered harshly. Itachi's dark eyes stared into Issei's icy blue ones as he slowly nodded. Satisfied for the moment, Issei let Itachi go and signaled for him to lead the way. Itachi stared at Issei for a couple of minutes, after which he turned and walked into the warehouse, Issei following him close behind. As he walked he did realize one thing. Issei Lucifuge was not someone who you could take lightly. He was a dragon walking in human flesh. He however did decide to tell Issei everything. Having him as a friend would be much better than having him as an ally, and universally better than having him as an enemy. He however pushed his thoughts to the side as he entered the warehouse to find an awkward stare-off between its inhabitants. Siegfried and Ambriel on one side with a boy with brown hair and green eyes and a girl with red hair and equally red eyes and a big bust on the other. Turning to Itachi, Issei said, "Do you feel that we just walked into a Mexican standoff? Good, then it just wasn't my imagination." Itachi replied with a nod. "Well, I will leave you to defuse the situation. After all, both sides are your friends and you should be able to calm both of them down," Issei said with an amused look in his eyes. In response to that, Itachi shot Issei a rather withering glare and said, You know, I have a feeling that I am going to hate you. Hey, you are not the first one to say that, and neither will you be the last. In fact, I take pride in having the ability to piss people off. Issei said with a shrug. Doesn't seem like something you developed. You are a natural at it. Itachi said with a small glare. Guilty as charged, my friend, guilty as charged. Issei said with a lazy shrug. With a sigh, Itachi walked in between the two sides and said, "Alright people, break it up, all of us are friendly here." He then pointed at the two unknown figures and said, "Basara, Mio, these are the friends I called for backup. Siegfried, Ambriel and the White Dragon Emperor Haidu Issei." After that he turned to Issei and the others and said, "Haidu, Siegfried, Ambriel, these are my friends that I am shielding right now. They are maternal cousins Taoju, Basara and Neris Mio. I hope all of you can get along." The next few moments were spent with the group all cautiously introducing one another. As small talk was being made, Issei discreetly observed the two cousins in front of him. He was slightly surprised when he felt the auras coming from the duo. Specifically from Basara. He had the aura of a demon, a god and a dragon emanating from him, while Mio was fundamentally radiating her connection with gravity. Deciding to get things underway, Issei clapped his hands and said, "Great, now that we all know each other, let's get to the bottom of why you actually called us here UCHIHA. Fair enough, I won't go into the long story since we are short on time. The short version is that both of them are basically anomalies in the hero sect. Basara, as I am sure you have noticed, is a demigod with a strong demonic weapon, while Mio was born with the unusual power of gravity manipulation. Both of them have been the subject to a lot of scrutiny among the sect due to their powers. Overt actions were avoided due to Basara's father and Mio's mother, using both their power and influence. Recently, however, both of them had the unfortunate circumstance of having an accidental outburst in their power that caused several members of the Senju clan and my clan to be killed. As a reparation, the clans demanded the two of them to be handed to them. Now, due to those deaths, their parents cannot do anything. I was friends with them and rebelled against my clan by helping them run away. That's the story." Itachi finished. After a few moments of silence, Issei said, "That's good and all, but what exactly was the purpose behind you calling us here? I was hoping that the additional number here would give us a better chance at making the run until we reach your home ground. After that, it wouldn't be too hard to go of the grid until this whole matter had finally cooled down," Itachi said sheepishly. Before Issei could reply, his senses picked up a number of signatures closing in on their location. Yer, we will have to put this talk on hold, UCHIHA-kun, Taoju-kun, Neris-chan," Issei said tiredly. "Oh, and why is that?" Basara asked with Mio raising her eyebrow in agreement. "Because we have company," Ambriel answered for Issei as the door to the warehouse exploded, showing off several high-tier signatures at the other side. "Well," Issei said as he cracked his neck. "Let's get this dance on the road. That's it. Eyes. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care."